Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
1. Chapter 1 Confessing to Rise Kamishiro right from the start. Tokyo, Ward 20. So I really did transmigrate. Taking in his surroundings, unfamiliar yet strangely recognizable Yamaha Byakuya emerged from his brief contemplation with a clear understanding of what had happened. What truly confirmed it was the young woman who looked impossibly familiar. Long, silky purple hair cascaded down her back, tied with a ribbon shaped like rabbit ears. Red-framed glasses perched on her nose, a white dress hugging her tall, elegant figure. She radiated the air of a refined, intellectual beauty. That purple hair, those purple eyes. Isn't that Rise Kamishiro? The place Byakuya found himself in was Antiochut's so-called Peaceful Ward's coffee shop. The last thing he remembered was getting obliterated by a truck, then darkness, and now, this. Clearly, he'd landed in the world of Tokyo Ghoul. Having watched the series, he recognized both Rise Kamishiro and this CAF instantly. Ding! Host has successfully activated the system. Default fusion, Uchiha Madara. A cold, mechanical voice suddenly echoed through his mind. A system interface materialized before his eyes. Host, Yamaha Byakuya. Identity, human. Age, 18. Fusion target, Uchiha Madara. Fusion progress, LV1, 0/100. Equipment, none. Abilities, 1 Tomo Sharingan, Hashirama Cells LV1, Taijutsu LV1, C-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Great Fireball Technique, C-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Phoenix Flower Technique, C-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Dragon Flame Technique, D-Rank Ninjutsu Body Flicker Technique. Fusion points, 0. System shop, locked. Byakuya felt a surge of excitement. I actually got Madara's powers. And as his fusion progress increased, he'd surely unlock even more of Uchiha Madara's abilities. The system also fed him some additional information. Despite having transmigrated into this body, he now possessed legitimate Tokyo citizenship and fluent Japanese. How? The system could do anything, apparently. While Byakuya was still processing the interface, Rise Kamishiro glanced his way and smiled a sweet, demure expression that practically radiated elegance. But he knew better. Behind that gentle, intellectual facade lurked a vicious Ghoul S-rated binge eater. In this world, creatures called ghouls walked among humanity. Nearly indistinguishable from humans in appearance, they fed on human flesh, couldn't consume normal food, and possessed strength far beyond ordinary people. Most ghouls were already brutal by nature. Rise Kamishiro was among the worst of them. Ding! Host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, ignore Rise Kamishiro's smile. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, glare back menacingly and shout, what are you looking at? Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, walk over and confess your love to Rise Kamishiro passionately. Reward, 50 fusion points. Byakuya studied the 3 options for a moment, then made his decision. He stood up and walked straight toward her. Under Rise's slightly puzzled gaze, he spoke with utter sincerity, Miss, from the moment I first laid eyes on you, I fell in love at first sight. God, I'm making myself cringe. His voice carried across the CAF, drawing the attention of nearly everyone present. They stared at him with expressions ranging from bewilderment to disbelief. What most people didn't realize was that the majority of customers here were ghouls. Occasionally, a human would wander in by mistake, but thanks to the rules set by the SSS-rated ghoul who managed Ward 20, no ghoul would harm humans who stumbled into the shop. Because they were all ghouls, they knew exactly what Rise Kamishiro truly was. Watching a human confess to this greedy, savage S-rated binge eater, their internal reactions were nothing short of spectacular. Some ghouls already pitied the poor boy. His fate was going to be horrific. Byakuya felt the awkwardness acutely, but for 50 fusion points, a little embarrassment was nothing. He knew Rise inside and out. Confessing to her wasn't as mortifying as it might seem after all. She wouldn't reject him like a normal girl would. She'd just see him as food. No rejection meant less awkwardness. The logic was weird, sure, but it tracked. Ding! Host has completed option 3. Reward, 50 fusion points. Got it. Byakuya felt vindicated. Just 50 more points and he'd reach LV2, unlocking more of Madara's powers. In a world as dangerous as Tokyo Ghoul, he needed the strength to protect himself. Otherwise, he'd end up as some ghoul's dinner, and what kind of pathetic transmigrator would that make him? His sudden confession had clearly caught Rise off guard. Surprise flickered across her face. All right then, she said, maintaining her refined, ladylike demeanor with a gentle smile. If you really like me that much, perhaps we could try dating. That was fast. Byakuya hadn't expected her to agree so readily. He'd assumed she'd play hard to get for a bit. She probably thinks I look delicious and wants to dig in as soon as possible. Whatever her reasoning, he knew her endgame. Rise Kamashiro's only goal was to devour him. That's wonderful, Byakuya said, his expression brightening. But I still don't know your name. Rise was acting. So was he. Sure, he'd already secured the fusion points. There wasn't much point in continuing to engage with her. But what if spending time with Rise triggered more divine selections and yielded even more points? That would make it worthwhile. I'm Rise Kamashiro. And you? Amaha Byakuya. And just like that, they became a couple. It seemed sudden, almost absurd, but both of them had hidden agendas. Chapter 2, An Indirect Kiss. Well then, Kamashiro-san, I'll sit next to you. Byakuya shamelessly settled into the seat beside Rise, acting perfectly natural without a hint of awkwardness. Honestly, suddenly dating Rise Kamashiro, even if it was fake, was turning out to be pretty interesting. The interesting part was knowing her true nature. Sure, she'd eventually find some way to eat him, but what happened between now and then? That was worth looking forward to. As long as he didn't push his luck too far, he'd be fine. Rise would never attack him openly in Antioch, not with the manager being that SSS-rated ghoul, the non-killing owl, who served as Ward 20's overseer. Call me Rise. She immediately corrected him. We're dating now. Why so formal? Alright, Rise-san. Byakuya nodded. Their sudden relationship had already caused quite a stir in the CAF. Customers exchanged glances and whispered among themselves, though no one intervened directly. Few ghouls here dared to cross Rise Kamashiro. Behind the counter, a girl with short blue-purple hair in a staff uniform took a Kirishima couldn't help but glance toward Byakuya and Rise. Conversation between Byakuya and Rise flowed easily, largely because both were actively working to keep it going. Do you have any hobbies? Rise asked. I think we should get to know each other's interests. Let's see, reading, manga, and listening to music I like. While Byakuya was playing along, these hobbies were actually genuine. For books, I'm really into Takatsuki-sensei's work. That part was strategic, mentioning some Takatsuki's novels. Takatsuki-sensei, what a coincidence, I love her work too. Rise's smile brightened, as if she genuinely shared his taste. Of course, she was simply mirroring his preferences to reel him in deeper. If he'd named any other author, she would have claimed to love them just the same. Watching her flawless performance, Byakuya couldn't help but think, this woman is terrifying. If he were some clueless kid who didn't know her true nature, she'd have him wrapped around her finger in no time, right before turning him into dinner. Which book would you recommend most, Byakuya-kun? I've only recently started reading her work. I'd say Takatsuki-sensei peaked with her debut. Dear Kafka is essential reading. Her latest one, The Hanged Man's MacGuffin, is also brilliant. Oh, I know Dear Kafka. The letter trick was such a twist. Her short story collections are great too, like Monochrome Rainbow. Their conversation was seamless. To any outside observer, they looked like a couple with genuine chemistry. Too bad it was all an act. So, what about taste preferences? Rise abruptly shifted topics. Sorry. Do you prefer your coffee black, Byakuya-kun? Or with sugar? A little? A lot? I prefer it black. Really? I like mine a bit sweet. Rise lifted her cup, a honeyed smile on her lips. Would you like to try mine? You might discover you like it. For any naive young man, this move would be devastating. How many could keep their composure in a situation like this? If Byakuya didn't know exactly what Rise was, he doubted even he could resist her charm. But since things had already gone this far, backing down wasn't an option. He accepted the cup from her hands and took a small sip, his cheeks flushing slightly despite himself. Ding! Host has completed an indirect kiss with Rise Kamashiro. Reward, 10 fusion points. Wait, seriously? Byakuya was pleasantly surprised. He could earn fusion points this way too. His decision to keep engaging with Rise was definitely paying off. The system's reward triggers seemed to be everywhere. How is it? You're right, a little sweetness isn't bad. Byakuya nodded. I'm so relieved. I was worried you might not like it. Rise placed a hand over her chest, looking adorably relieved. You know, we're both type AB, close in age, both fans of Takatsuki-sensei's work, and now we even share similar taste in coffee. She let the atmosphere turn slightly intimate, though her delivery remained effortlessly natural. Yeah, we really do seem compatible. Byakuya smiled. I am sorry, I just remembered something I need to take care of. Rise's expression turned apologetic. How about we meet here again tomorrow, same time? No problem. Then you have to come, Byakuya-kun. I want to learn so much more about you. She shot him a coy glance, the suggestiveness practically radiating off her. Sure. Byakuya recognized the classic push-and-pull tactic. If he were some inexperienced kid, he'd probably spend every waking moment until tomorrow thinking about her. With that, Rise departed. Walking out of Antioch, she maintained her serene smile, hands folded in front of her, clutching an elegant little handbag, the picture of refinement. But beneath that gentle exterior lurked the savage binge-eater. Right now, Rise was already planning how to toy with Amaha Byakuya. His unexpected confession had given her a delicious idea. What if I make this boy fall hopelessly in love with me first, then give him the surprise of his life? When she finally savored her meal, what kind of expression would he make? Just thinking about it was thrilling. Chapter 3, Tuka Kirishima. After Rise left, Byakuya stayed behind. No rush to leave. After all, this CAF was filled with major characters from the original story manager Yoshimura, Tuka Kirishima, Yamo Renji. Maybe he could trigger more system rewards. Not that he planned to bother or approach them directly. There was a bookshelf in the CAF, so Byakuya decided to grab something to read while finishing his coffee. Among the selection, he spotted several works by Sen Takatsuki. Given this timeline was slightly before the original story began, she was already a famous author. Byakuya was genuinely curious about her writing. After all, he knew exactly who the best-selling young author really was, the SSS-rated One-Eyed Owl, Ito Yoshimura, leader of Aojirai Tree. That made her work very interesting to him. He selected her debut novel, Dear Kafka. The original series never detailed its contents, so this was essentially a brand new reading experience. As he immersed himself in the book, nearby ghouls continued whispering about him. Ding! Host has read Dear Kafka. Reward, 1 fusion point. Halfway through, the system triggered again. Only 1 point, but the important takeaway was how broad the reward triggers were. Even reading could earn points clearly because this was Takatsuki's work. Might as well read everything she's written. His attention returned to the book. Even halfway through, Takatsuki's distinctive style was unmistakable. The oppressive atmosphere, the despair, the pessimistic worldview, the distrust of everyone and everything. These elements could only come from someone like Ito Yoshimura, who'd grown up in the brutal hellscape of Ward 24. Yet the story itself was compelling, and her unique voice was a strength rather than a weakness. Distinctive style always beats generic convention. Suddenly, Byakuya's stomach growled. Glancing at the clock, he realized it was already evening. Time for dinner. He bookmarked his page and approached the counter. Excuse me, could I borrow this overnight? I'll return it first thing tomorrow. The girl at the counter had short blue-purple hair, bangs nearly covering her right eye. Dressed in her work uniform, she had delicate features and an air of quiet reserve. Tuka Kirishima. Byakuya recognized her instantly. Her expression was cool. Sorry, we don't have a lending service. But if you really want to borrow it, you can leave a deposit. Return it tomorrow and you'll get it back. Mainly because this guy could get eaten by Rise any second, she thought. At least a deposit would cover the book. Works for me. Byakuya reached into his pocket and found money. Simultaneously, the system fed him background information, his home address, deceased parents, a house, a car, and enrollment at Kamiai University. All fabricated by the system, of course. It had simply edited this world's reality, as easily as an author revising their manuscript. Kamiai University. That was Tokyo's premier institution, basically an Ivy League equivalent. Not exactly easy to get into. The system had really gilded his resume. But compared to fusing with Uchiha Madara, the rest was just window dressing. He paid the deposit, took Dear Kafka, and left. As he walked away, Tuka watched his retreating figure. Oh my, Tuka-chan interested in that boy. Kaya Irimi, another waitress, teased her. As if. It just pisses me off watching Rise mark another human as prey. Nothing we can do. That woman's a walking disaster. Apparently every ward she's lived in ended up in chaos. She even got Ward SIXS leader captured by the CCG. Irimi sighed. I know, that's why I'm staying out of it. Tuka pushed the thought aside. Neither understood why manager Yoshimura tolerated someone like Rise. From an omniscient perspective, the answer was simple. Rise's true identity was as a breeder for the Washiyo clan, the Yoshimura family's greatest enemy and the primary antagonists of this world. If Yoshimura moved against Rise, the peaceful haven he'd worked so hard to build would be destroyed. So he turned a blind eye to her excesses. But Tuka, Irimi, and the other staff knew nothing of Yoshimura's history with the Washuas. His restraint was incomprehensible to them. Meanwhile, Byakuya was heading home, reading as he walked, using his peripheral vision to avoid pedestrians. Then he spotted a familiar silhouette. He looked up and there stood Ito Yoshimura, the author of the very book in his hands, Sen Takatsuki. Chapter 4, Ito Yoshimura, Sen Takatsuki. The petite young woman before him had wild green hair cascading past her shoulders, a slender frame, and eyes like polished emeralds. Despite her youthful, almost adolescent appearance and height of barely 5 feet, she was actually 24 years old. And her true nature stood in stark contrast to her delicate exterior. If Rise Kamishiro was brutal, Ito Yoshimura was in another league entirely. Born from a human ghoul union, Ito was a natural one-eyed ghoul, unlike artificial half-ghouls like Ken Kaneki would become. She was currently the only natural-born half-ghoul in existence. Her power far exceeded ordinary ghouls. Publicly, she was considered the strongest ghoul alive and among the most savage. Byakuya felt a jolt of surprise, running into Ito just walking down the street, but he quickly reasoned it out. This probably wasn't coincidence. His unusual contact with Rise must have drawn Ito's attention. In the original story, Aogiri had always sought to capture Rise because of her identity. As the one-eyed owl who founded Aogiri and as Yoshimura's daughter, Ito harbored deep hatred for the Washiyu clan. Naturally, she'd take interest in Rise, who held a special position within that family. "Hey there, you should watch where you're walking." Ito spoke first, her tone playful. "Thanks for the warning. I'll be careful." Byakuya responded normally, showing no sign of recognizing her. "Take care." Humming a cheerful tune, she strolled away. Just a passing stranger, apparently. If Byakuya didn't know better, her casual "take care" would have meant nothing. But knowing Rise's secrets, the implication was crystal clear. This confirmed it, their chance encounter was absolutely because of Rise. A brief exchange, just a few words, but the real concern was that he was now likely under surveillance by Ito and Aogiri. Only surveillance, though. Like her father Yoshimura, Ito wouldn't act rashly against Rise. The Washiyu threat kept her from moving personally. At most, she'd send subordinates like Yamori to do the capturing. "I know." Byakuya murmured in response to her playful warning. Quiet, but Ito heard it. Not that he minded. She didn't look back, but a small smile curved her lips. Interesting. This guy who'd approached and even confessed to Rise wasn't as simple as he appeared. Yet despite her extensive intelligence network, she had absolutely no information on him. She could tell from his scent he wasn't a ghoul. So what was he? Human? Something else? Which faction did he belong to? And why was he reading her debut novel, Dear Kafka? Ito found herself growing increasingly curious about this stranger. Byakuya arrived home. His residence was also in Ward 20, Yoshimura's territory, the safest area in Tokyo. Since Japanese universities typically don't provide dormitories, students either rent apartments or commute from home. Living close to Kamiai University made things convenient. Passing a mirror, Byakuya paused. He'd been curious whether his appearance had changed after transmigrating. His body felt the same, but his hairstyle had definitely changed much longer than before. Had his facial features changed too? Looking in the mirror, same features. Sharp brows, striking eyes, handsome without losing an edge of intensity. While his face didn't particularly resemble Madara's, his hairstyle was clearly from the same template, just shorter, roughly like Obito's Red Knight look without the trailing length. With that hairstyle plus Madara's Sharingan, even without identical features, the resemblance would be unmistakable. Speaking of which, his one-tomo Sharingan had remained deactivated. He willed it active. Crimson flooded his irises, a single tomo appearing in each eye. Instantly, his vision and perception sharpened dramatically, like having entirely new eyes. The Sharingan was fully integrated with him. He seemed to have inherited Uchiha bloodline traits, able to activate or deactivate it at will. After briefly experiencing its effects, he switched it off. No need to keep it running constantly, it would drain chakra and invite trouble. In this world, human society harbored deep hostility toward ghouls for obvious reasons. The Sharingan's crimson looked too similar to a ghoul's Kakugan. Walking around with red eyes would cause mass panic at minimum, with endless complications to follow. After cooking himself dinner, Byakuya finished Dear Kafka that night before showering and going to bed. Ding! Host has finished Dear Kafka. Reward, 1 fusion point. The next morning, before heading to school, Byakuya returned Dear Kafka to Antioku as promised. Since Tuka also had school, manager Yoshimura himself handled the transaction. "Your deposit, in full. Please count it." Yoshimura smiled warmly, his tone gentle. No one would guess this kindly old man was the SSS-rated ghoul, non-killing owl, whose very name struck fear into humans and ghoul investigators alike. Chapter 5, A Date with Rise Kamishiro. "Thank you." Deposit in hand, Byakuya headed to Kamiai University. Yoshimura knew perfectly well what fate awaited any human who got close to Rise. But he wouldn't intervene. To him, Byakuya was just an ordinary human. Though Yoshimura had long since abandoned harming humans, he wouldn't risk everything for a stranger. In the original story, his initial attitude toward Kaneki was the same. When Aogiri first captured Kaneki, Yoshimura was reluctant to mount a rescue. He only changed his mind later. And ultimately, that rescue mission accelerated both his own downfall and Antioch's destruction. His initial reluctance was entirely understandable. Less than half an hour later, Byakuya arrived at Kamiai University on foot. First time here. He'd need to familiarize himself with the campus using signs and maps. According to the system, he was a literature major. Just follow the schedule and attend class. Since everyone was a new freshman, his sudden appearance wouldn't raise eyebrows even without system intervention. Classes were manageable, mostly liberal arts subjects, just listening and taking notes. He didn't know any classmates yet. Between classes, he reviewed his notes alone. Growing stronger didn't mean neglecting education. Even Tuma from a certain magical index still had to attend school and cram sessions. By noon, his classes were done. In Japan, university freshmen and sophomores average only about 4 hours of class daily. Juniors and seniors have even less, which explained how Kaneki in the original story had so much free time to hang out at Antioku. Plan for the afternoon lunch in the cafeteria, then meet Rise at Antioku. He hadn't forgotten yesterday's promise. After getting his food, Byakuya searched for an empty table difficult at peak lunch hour and finally found a four-seater with no one else. He'd barely started eating when someone approached. "Excuse me, mind if I sit here?" Byakuya looked up. A young man about his age, with delicate, almost feminine features, a friendly smile, and a small mole beneath his right eye. Nimura Furuta. Byakuya's chopsticks paused momentarily. Furuta was indeed a Kamiai student at this point in the timeline, but running into him in a campus this large? Not coincidence. Based on what Byakuya knew, Furuta was currently monitoring Rise and probably already planning the steel beam incident. Since he was watching Rise, he obviously knew about Byakuya's fake relationship with her. In the original story, Kaneki had secretly admired Rise but never actually dated her. Byakuya, however, had confessed on day one and was now officially dating her. No wonder Furuta had come to investigate. "Of course, go ahead." Byakuya replied politely. He was curious what Furuta wanted. "Thanks." But Furuta simply sat down and ate. Nothing more. Ding. Host has shared a meal with Nimura Furuta. Reward, 1 fusion point. Well, at least he got something out of it. To both Ito and Furuta, Byakuya appeared to be an ordinary human who'd stumbled into Rise's orbit. They'd observe from a distance at most no reason to say anything significant to him. That afternoon, Byakuya returned to Antioku. Rise had arrived before him, but what caught his attention more was someone sitting not far from her, a thin young man with a simple haircut, holding a copy of The Black Goat's Egg. Ken Kaneki. Not surprising. At this point in the timeline, Kaneki was nursing a secret crush on Rise and visited this CAF whenever possible just to catch glimpses of her. He must have been busy yesterday. Byakuya wasn't about to greet someone who didn't know him. He walked straight to Rise. "Sorry, Rise-san. Did I keep you waiting?" Given his student status and their similar ages, Rise-san felt most appropriate. "Not at all. I just got here myself." Her smile was soft and warm. Overhearing their exchange, Kaneki's attention immediately shifted. "What's going on? That cute girl seems really familiar with that guy." His book lay forgotten in his hand. She was clearly only pretending to read now, stealing glances their way. "By the way, Byakuya-kun, are you free this afternoon? If not, maybe we could go out together." Rise's voice turned hopeful. "I've heard that dates are the most basic way for couples to grow closer. I'd love that. I've been hoping to spend more time with you, Rise-san." Byakuya agreed without hesitation. Hearing this, Kaneki's world shattered. He looked utterly devastated, struggling to process what he'd just heard. Date, couple, that cute girl is already someone's girlfriend. At that moment, Byakuya's system activated again. Ding, host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, ignore the dejected Ken Kaneki. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, discuss and Takatsuki's works with Ken Kaneki, claiming to be a fellow fan. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, march over to Ken Kaneki, shout HEY. And tell him to keep his eyes off your girlfriend. Reward, 20 fusion points. 6. Chapter 6, Poor Kaneki. Looking at the 3 options before him, Byakuya was rendered speechless by the third one. Knowing full well that Kaneki had a crush on Rise, the system wanted him to psychologically devastate the guy. That seemed excessively cruel. Sure, the third option offered the most fusion points, but Byakuya wasn't the type to blindly chase maximum rewards. Context mattered. Even back when he'd watched Tokyo Ghoul, he'd always felt Kaneki had a rough life from the very beginning. Having the system push him to emotionally destroy the guy, he couldn't bring himself to do it. The second option would have to do. It wasn't difficult anyway, just strike up a conversation with Kaneki about books. But now wasn't the time. Rise was already pulling him toward their date. Before leaving, Byakuya deliberately glanced in Kaneki's direction to avoid having the system counted as ignoring him. Kaneki, who'd been sneaking peeks their way, immediately noticed and averted his gaze in a panic. The last thing he wanted was the boyfriend catching him and causing trouble. Rise noticed Byakuya looking elsewhere. Something wrong? Not until they'd stepped outside did Byakuya answer, "Nothing much. I just felt like that guy was staring at you." "Really?" Rise tilted her head innocently. "Byakuya-kun, you're not jealous, are you? There's absolutely no need to worry, you're the only one I'm interested in." She was clearly trying to wrap him around her finger. "Of course. I'd never doubt how you feel, Rise-san." Byakuya nodded. If only he could blush on command, he'd have given her the perfect shy, innocent expression. Walking together, Byakuya didn't reach for Rise's hand. Normally, a guy should take initiative in moments like this. But their relationship was fake, after all. Despite her habit of seducing men before devouring them, Rise had never actually let anyone touch her. She'd lure them in, then slaughter and consume them before things went too far. Compared to her usual pattern, agreeing to Byakuya's confession was already her most out-of-character move. Of course, that also meant if Byakuya were truly just an ordinary human, he'd end up suffering the most gruesome death of all her victims. Given Rise's personality, attempting to hold her hand would probably result in rejection, polite rejection, but rejection nonetheless. Still, maybe it was worth testing her reaction. It would also make his naive young man act more convincing. With that thought, he boldly reached for her hand. He played up the hesitation, that typical anxious back and forth of wanting to but not daring to, before finally committing and taking her hand. Ding! Host has completed holding hands with Rise Kamishiro. Reward, 5 fusion points. By now, Byakuya wasn't surprised that this kind of thing earned points. A flicker of disgust passed through Rise's eyes. To her, Byakuya was just food. Being touched by him was hardly pleasant. But rather than show resistance, she smoothly withdrew her hand as if naturally, pointing towards something in the distance. Byakuya-kun, I'd love to try the desserts at that shop over there. Just as expected, Byakuya thought with an inward smile. Inside the dessert shop, they each ordered something sweet. Halfway through, Rise stood up. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom. Sure. Byakuya nodded. He knew she was probably going to throw up. Ghouls couldn't digest human food. It tasted utterly revolting to them and would damage their bodies if left inside. Many ghouls learned to fake eat, to blend in, swallow without chewing, then purge before digestion. The date continued without Rise making any move to eat him. She was clearly focused on using flotation and subtle manipulation to make him fall completely for her. When it was time to part ways, Rise smiled warmly. I really enjoyed today. I hope Byakuya-kun did too. I had a great time getting to spend time with such a beautiful girl. Byakuya scratched his cheek lightly. Rise's expression turned bashful, delight radiating from her features. The atmosphere was perfect. Too bad neither of them was being genuine. Let's meet at the CAF again tomorrow. There's a movie I want to see. Would you come with me, Byakuya-kun? She wasn't done playing with her prey just yet. Absolutely. Byakuya agreed without hesitation. After parting with Rise, Byakuya returned to Antioku. Sure enough, Kaneki was still there, reading. Their eyes met briefly as Byakuya entered. Kaneki immediately looked away, pretending he hadn't seen him. Byakuya walked straight toward him. Cold sweat appeared on Kaneki's forehead. He clearly expected confrontation. That book you're reading, isn't that one of Takatsuki-sensei's works? Byakuya spoke first. I'm so sorry. Kaneki blurted out an apology on reflex. A moment later, he processed what had actually been said. Oh, yes, this is Sen Takatsuki's The Black Goat's Egg. His flustered reaction made Byakuya smile awkwardly. What a coincidence, I am a fan of Takatsuki-sensei too. Byakuya kept his tone friendly. Ding. Host has completed option 2. Reward, 10 fusion points. Sensing no hostility, Kaneki gradually relaxed. Really? His face lit up with genuine excitement. Sure, this guy was dating that cute girl, but finding someone who shared his love for Takatsuki's work was still worth being happy about. Reading was his only real hobby, after all. Chapter 7, Ambushed. Of course. I haven't read everything she's written yet, but after finishing Dear Kafka, I was hooked. Byakuya sat down across from Kaneki. Mind if I join you? This wasn't about the system. The divine selection quest was already complete. He could have just walked away. He simply wanted to chat with Kaneki. That was all. Of course. Please, sit. Kaneki's tone remained a bit stiff. His naturally introverted personality, combined with the fact that Byakuya was Rise's boyfriend, made him nervous. You look like a student. Don't tell me you're at Kamiya University too? Byakuya asked, feigning ignorance. He couldn't exactly reveal he already knew everything about Kaneki, and Kamiya was the nearest university. A reasonable guess. Yeah, actually. Are you a student there too? Kaneki's curiosity was piqued. That's right. Literature department. I'm Amaha Byakuya. I am in the same department. Kaneki looked stunned. This coincidental. Same department, same taste in authors. I'm Ken Kaneki. Nice to meet you. Talking to someone who shared both his major and his literary interests felt genuinely nice. He'd only ever had one friend. Making another wouldn't be bad at all, even if that friend happened to be her boyfriend. Ding. Host has become friends with Ken Kaneki. Reward, 2 fusion points. Their conversation about Takatsuki's work flowed naturally, and before long, they'd become friends. Kaneki seemed to have forgotten or perhaps accepted that Byakuya was Rise's boyfriend. Given his personality, he'd never do anything as bold as stealing someone else's girlfriend. And now that they were friends, having any feelings toward a friend's girlfriend felt even more inappropriate. Byakuya borrowed more books from the CAF shelf. Ding. Host has read The Black Goat's Egg. Reward, 1 fusion point. Ding. Host has finished The Black Goat's Egg. Reward, 1 fusion point. By the time the CAF was nearly closing, Byakuya and Kaneki finally headed home. They'd spent the evening reading Takatsuki's works together, occasionally sharing thoughts. Nothing more. On his way home, Kaneki felt genuinely happy. Hyde was his best friend, his only friend until now, but Hyde didn't share his passion for books. Byakuya filled that gap perfectly. Meanwhile, Byakuya walked the same route home as the night before, passing through several alleyways. The narrow passages were deserted. It was late, and in a world where ghouls existed, people avoided isolated areas after dark. Byakuya knew he should be careful. Running into an S-rated ghoul or above would be trouble. His current strength might not be enough. Ghouls looked human, but their physical capabilities were on an entirely different level. His fusion progress was only LV1. He probably didn't have even 1% of Madara's true power. Forget 6 paths Madara, a 1-tomo Sharingan was hardly comparable to the Rinnegan. Still, encountering an S-rated or higher ghoul in Ward 20 was unlikely. Aside from a few rule breakers like Rise, most ghouls here didn't dare defy Yoshimura. And Rise wouldn't attack him now. That wouldn't be entertaining enough for her. Byakuya decided to take the longer route around the main streets instead of cutting through the alley. But before he could exit, footsteps echoed behind him. He turned. A man with a hostile expression was approaching. The man's eyes hadn't turned into Kakugan yet, but Byakuya's instinct screamed ghoul. Seriously, those Antiocha bastards won't let us hunt humans. I'm sick of eating nothing but rotting corpses. The man muttered complaints that would sound bizarre to any ordinary person. But Byakuya understood perfectly. This confirmed his suspicion. His brow furrowed. So this guy plans to make me his meal. If you want to eat me, then come. Byakuya's voice was flat. The man's unfamiliar face told him everything. This wasn't a powerful ghoul. Anyone noteworthy in Ward 20 at least S-rated Byakuya would recognize. Perfect. Time for some practice. He hadn't even used Madara's abilities yet. Oh, you know I'm a ghoul and you're not running. The man seemed surprised. Most humans would be screaming and fleeing by now. Yet this kid remained calm. If not for the absence of a quinqua, the man might have suspected he was a CCG investigator. Bluffing. The man snorted and lunged. His eyes turned crimson, the Kakugan at the sclera shifting to black. His expression twisted into something feral. A dark green Yukaku Kagun erupted from his tailbone, thick and tail-like, a ghoul's primary weapon for hunting. Byakuya's gaze hardened. His black pupils shifted to crimson Untomo Sharingan activated. Just as the man was about to reach him, he noticed Byakuya's eyes had also turned red. His expression changed dramatically. His mind went blank. Chapter 8 Body Flicker and Great Fireball. The man's first instinct was to mistake the Sharingan for a Kakugan, hence his momentary freeze. Ghouls could usually identify their own kind by scent. This kid smelled completely human. How could he have Kakugan? Unless, some ghouls who lived among humans had their scent masked by constant exposure. Maybe that was the case here. The man slammed on the brakes, abandoning his attack. Damn it. I thought I'd found an easy meal, but it's one of us. He looked thoroughly disgusted. Ghoul flesh tasted nothing like human flesh. Their unique taste buds made normal food revolting, and fellow ghouls tasted equally terrible. Only human meat was delicious. Hunting humans also strengthened them by replenishing RC cells. While cannibalism Kakuja behavior could achieve similar results, the taste was far worse, and few ghouls pursued power that desperately. Mistaking Byakuya for a ghoul had soured the man's mood completely. Get lost. This is my feeding ground. Come near here again and I'll tear you apart. His tone was vicious. Feeding grounds were territories ghouls claimed for hunting humans. Stronger ghouls secured larger, better locations. Trespassing on another's territory often meant a brutal fight to the death. But that only applied between ghouls. Byakuya wasn't one. Those rules meant nothing to him. If I let this slide after being threatened like that, I'd be a doormat. Without a word, Byakuya channeled chakra and executed the D-rank body flicker technique. Yes, he had chakra. Without it, ninjutsu would be impossible. The LV1 Hashirama cells provided it, along with a portion of Madara's own chakra. Both had merged seamlessly. In an instant, Byakuya appeared behind the ghoul. The D-rank body flicker couldn't cover great distances, but since the man had already closed in, it was enough. Instantaneous movement wasn't about speed, it was about being impossible to react to. The ghoul never saw it coming. Fire style, great fireball technique. Byakuya formed the jutsu mentally. Chakra gathered in his throat, and a fireball erupted from his mouth, rapidly expanding into a massive blaze that engulfed the ghoul. Despite never practicing it, the technique came naturally as if he'd mastered it long ago. The great fireball was somewhat underwhelming in Naruto constantly dodged, absorbed, or blocked, but its raw power was undeniable. The ghoul turned just in time to see the inferno rushing toward him. His eyes widened in terror. Gaya! The searing flames drew an agonized scream. Ghoul flesh was far tougher than human flesh. Ordinary weapons could barely scratch them, but even that couldn't withstand the great fireball's extreme heat. The problem was ghoul regeneration. Killing one instantly was nearly impossible. This attack alone wasn't lethal. Byakuya spotted a crowbar on the ground and grabbed its legendary physics sword. Normal weapons couldn't hurt ghouls, and a crowbar was definitely normal. But brute force could change that. He had Madara's taijutsu. Only a fraction, but it would suffice. Channeling all his strength, Byakuya swung at the ghoul's Kagun. Already weakened by the flames, the Kagun couldn't maintain its usual hardness. The blow cracked it. The ghoul was too consumed by pain to realize the danger. His defensive and regenerative abilities didn't negate his pain receptors. Byakuya struck again, severing the Kagun completely. He discarded the crowbar and wielded the severed Kagun instead. In this world, the CCG used weapons called quinquas manufactured from ghoul Kakuhao and Kagun. The key was that Kagun possessed incredible cutting power and durability. A severed Kagun made an excellent improvised weapon, far superior to any crowbar. With one fluid motion, Byakuya drove the Kagun through the ghoul's body, piercing the Kakuhouth organ at the Kagun's root, a ghoul's most vital point. The screaming stopped. The ghoul collapsed, barely clinging to life. Death was only a matter of time. Perhaps in his final moments, he regretted picking the wrong target. Ding! Host has defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. So fighting ghouls earns points too. Excellent news. Another path to growing stronger. Byakuya checked his system panel. The fusion points now totaled 87, just 13 more until LV2. When that happened, all his abilities would improve significantly. The Sharingan would definitely evolve beyond one Tomo. 9. Chapter 9 Rises Past. Byakuya left the corpse where it lay, tossed aside the Kagun, and took only the crowbar. He didn't want to leave evidence that might attract police or CCG investigators. Not that self-defense against a ghoul was illegal. Ghouls had no legal protections, but explaining how he'd killed one without a quinquo would be troublesome. Without obvious traces, a dead ghoul wouldn't raise much alarm. Ghouls killing each other was common enough that authorities rarely investigated causes of death. The Kagun would deteriorate without its host's RC cells, eventually dissolving entirely. That was why quinquas required both Kagun and Kakuhouth. Kakuhouth sustained the Kagun. I should really get myself a quinqua. The thought crossed his mind as he left the alley. In his current state, a proper weapon would help immensely. Fighting ghouls barehanded was inefficient. But obtaining a quinqua meant joining the CCGTHE Commission of Counter-Ghoul, Tokyo's government agency dedicated to combating ghouls. Only certified investigator SAT minimum rank 2 were authorized to carry quinquas. CCG ranks from lowest to highest, rank 3, rank 2, rank 1, first class, associate special class, and special class. Below rank 3 were mere assistants non-combat support staff without official ranking. Maybe I should visit the CCG soon. Ward 20, Movie Theater. After meeting at Antioku, Byakuya and Rise had made their way here. This world's timeline was roughly the late 2000s to early 2010s. Most people still used flip phones. Smartphones weren't yet ubiquitous, and movie theaters remained popular entertainment. Tickets purchased, they found seats near the middle. Byakuya wasn't particularly enthusiastic about cinema, but accompanying a girl, he'd sit through the whole thing. Regardless of everything else, Rise was still a girl. An extraordinarily savage girl, but still. Midway through, Byakuya noticed something about the film's core theme. It bore striking similarities to Rise's own life. The female protagonist suffered constant mistreatment from her family, valued only as a money-making tool while her brothers received all the favoritism. The plot had just introduced a male lead who would presumably help her escape her toxic household. Byakuya knew Rise's real history. It was even more tragic than the movie's fiction. Rise was born into the Washiyu Ghoul family, arguably the most powerful in Japan. Her bloodline was exceptionally pure, containing undiluted Washiyu Ghoul genetics. In any cultivation novel, such purity would make her a treasured prodigy. But the Washiyus valued human bloodline. The more human blood a Washiyu possessed, the higher their status. Rise's pure ghoul blood made her an outcast. Bloodline differed from the half-human or half-ghoul mixing principle. Most ghouls carried some human genetics. Bloodline referred to something else entirely. Rise's low status meant she couldn't live with the main family. She was sent to a place called the Sunlit Garden. She couldn't even inherit the Washiyu name, remaining nameless until she later took Kamishiro as her surname. Worst of all, her pure bloodline, that very thing that condemned her, made her ideal as a breeder. A mother. In other words, a baby-making machine. The horror was self-evident. If her childhood friend Nimura Furuta hadn't helped her escape the Sunlit Garden, she'd still be trapped. Even now, the Washiyus were hunting her. If recaptured, escape would be nearly impossible. Yet she continued hunting humans, brazenly, recklessly casual about her situation. The credits rolled. Finally done. Everyone was right, it really was good. Rise sounded somewhat moved. Tear tracks were visible on her cheeks. Apparently the film had made her cry. Byakuya assumed it was an act and didn't comment. It was good, he agreed, though the male lead was a bit too indecisive and weak. That's true. He waited until the very end to act. If he'd just eloped with her from the start, so much trouble could have been avoided. Rise concurred. Since it was a late showing, the movie ended past 9 p.m. Walking home, they continued discussing the film. That's when two girls in school uniforms passed them going the opposite direction. Tuka Kirishima and a classmate. Seeing Rise with that human boy so late at night, Tuka glanced back. She watched Byakuya's retreating figure, frowning slightly. Tuka, what's wrong? Her classmate noticed she'd stopped. Nothing. Tuka looked away and kept walking. 10. Chapter 10 Advancing to LV23 Tomo Sharingan. 10. Chapter 10 Advancing to LV23 Tomo Sharingan. At a crossroads, Byakuya and Rise stopped. Their homes lay in different directions. Thank you so much for today, Byakuya-kun. Rise smiled. My place is near Takeda Building. You know about those murders there recently? Her voice trembled with fear. Her expression turned uneasy. The killings? I heard it was a ghoul. Byakuya responded while thinking, here it comes. Yes. I've been so worried. I can barely sleep at night. Going home alone this late is terrifying. She was shaking slightly, face pale. The implication couldn't be clearer. This was practically explicit. Byakuya had planned to refuse. What came next would obviously be Rise revealing her true form and trying to eat him. He wasn't ready for direct confrontation yet. The CCG rated her as S-class. At his current level, facing an S-rated ghoul would be difficult. Then the system interrupted his thoughts. Ding! Host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, refuse Rise Kamashiro's request. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, expose Rise Kamashiro's true nature right now and mock her terrible acting. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, walk Rise Kamashiro home. When she attacks, let her eat your flesh. Reward, 100 fusion points. Byakuya paused, considering the options. Then he changed his mind entirely. Then let me walk you home, Rise-san. If anything dangerous happens, I can protect you. The system's offer was too good. 100 fusion points, and the requirement wasn't even that demanding. Just let Rise take a bite. Endure some pain and it would be over. He had Hashirama cells. His regeneration was superhuman. Whatever flesh Rise ate would grow back. And he was confident he could escape afterward. The body flicker technique was perfect for situations like this. Wonderful. Having Byakuya-kun with me makes me feel so much safer. Rise beamed. As they walked, Byakuya spent all his accumulated points as a precaution. Ding! Host has used 87 fusion points. Fusion progress plus 87. Current fusion progress, LV1, 87/100. He also wanted to see if progress changes brought immediate power increases. Advancing from LV1 to LV2 would obviously cause a major leap, but incremental progress within the same level? Unclear. The answer came instantly. His physical abilities and overall strength noticeably improved. Changes were real-time, not just at level-ups. This gave him even more confidence against Rise. Walking through the nighttime streets, Byakuya and Rise chatted casually. Her earlier fearfulness had vanished. They feared no ghoul attacks. Every ghoul in Ward 20 New Rizanone would be stupid enough to interfere with her or her marked prey. Byakuya-kun, I really do love being with you. Tonight. Suddenly Rise pressed against his chest, her cheeks flushing with shyness. Please don't go. But a subtle detail, her hands rested on his chest, keeping their bodies from pressing too close. Oh okay. Byakuya feigned nervous excitement while keeping his expression carefully controlled. He knew exactly what was coming. His arms wrapped around her, one at her waist, one at her shoulder, ensuring she couldn't reach anything vital. I like you so much that I want to. Before she finished, Rise's teeth sank into his shoulder. Her eyes flashed crimson. Kakugen activated. Eat you. Searing pain shot through Byakuya. He gritted his teeth and endured. Rise didn't just bite, she tore away a chunk of flesh. Then she shoved him back. He deliberately stumbled and fell. If one bite wasn't enough for the system, he'd let her have another. Until then, he'd keep playing the naive victim. Ding! Host has completed option 3. Reward, 100 fusion points. One bite was sufficient. The moment the points registered, Byakuya used them immediately. Ding! Host has used 100 fusion points. Fusion progress plus 100. Current fusion progress, LV2, 87/500. New abilities, including upgrades 3 Tomo Sharingan, Hashirama Cells LV2, Taijutsu LV2, B-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Great Fire Annihilation, B-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Great Fire Destruction, B-Rank Ninjutsu Fire Style, Hiding in Ash Technique. His Sharingan had evolved to 3 Tomo. Taijutsu and Hashirama Cells had both leveled up. New jutsu were now available. Oh my, this taste. As Rise swallowed the flesh from Byakuya's shoulder, her eyes widened in shock. It was exquisite. More delicious than any human she'd ever eaten by a significant margin. Likely due to Byakuya's exceptional physical condition and the Hashirama cells, his flesh had become the ultimate delicacy for ghouls. Ah, pleasure flushed across Rise's face. She licked the blood from her lips, her gaze fixed on Byakuya with obsessive hunger. 11, Chapter 11, Goodbye, Rise-san. Byakuya-kun, do you know my favorite scene in The Black Goat's Egg? It's when the black goat rips out all the entrails of the fleeing man. No matter how many times I read it, it always gets me excited. Rise approached slowly, an eerie hee-hee-hee bubbling from her lips. She yanked off her hair clip and tossed it aside. Veins bulged around her Kakugen, giving her a savage edge. Her purple hair cascaded freely down her shoulders. Strangely, the looser style only made her more beautiful. Having already secured his system reward, Byakuya saw no point in continuing the act. Facing the true Rise Kamashiro, he showed his real self too. Just as Rise prepared to toy with her prey, Byakuya spoke calmly. Honestly, you look even prettier with your hair down. He wasn't being sarcastic. He genuinely meant it. Without the clip and ideally without the glasses too, this was Rise at her most stunning. That was his honest opinion. Rise paused, momentarily caught off guard. Normally, her victims would be panicking and fleeing by now. Yet this one stood there completely composed. Disappointing. She wanted to see despair, terror, disbelief in his eyes, not this flat indifference. Her excitement evaporated. Her savage grin faded to cold detachment. What nonsense are you spouting? I'm going to eat you. I know, but that's beside the point. You wanting to eat me doesn't mean I can't compliment your looks. Byakuya smiled faintly. Rise hadn't released her Kagun yet, which gave him room to chat. Your composure disgusts me. Aren't you afraid of death? Rise's expression darkened. Four dark crimson Rinkaku Kagun burst from her lower back, their tips razor sharp. Among the 4 Kagun types, Rinkaku boasted the highest offensive power. With these, I'll gently stir around inside Byakuya-kun's stomach, he. She waved the 4 tentacles menacingly, still trying to provoke fear. Without that, the game lost all its fun. But Byakuya's expression didn't change. Rise's patience snapped. Fine. This is boring, but your flesh is far more delicious than anyone else's. That'll have to compensate. She lunged. Let's see if he stays calm facing actual death. The moment she committed to the attack, Byakuya ran. His body flicker technique had strengthened with his advancement. The teleportation distance was noticeably greater now. He flickered onto the roof of a nearby low building. Goodbye, Rai-san. He gave her a little wave. Before she could react, he flickered again to a taller rooftop. Combined with his enhanced speed, he vanished from her sight within seconds. He had no intention of fighting her. Without a quinqua, taking on an S-rated ghoul was more trouble than it was worth. Besides, Rise's S rating was just the CCG's threat assessment based on danger level, not pure combat strength. A ghoul could be incredibly powerful but wouldn't receive a rating unless they'd harmed humans. Rise possessed the purest Washiyu bloodline. Her potential was terrifying, especially her Kakuhou and Kagun, which produced extraordinary results when transplanted into others. In the original story, she never got to demonstrate her full strength. She was captured at the very beginning and used as an experimental donor. By the time Rise processed what had happened, Byakuya was already gone. TCH. Rise bit her thumbnail in frustration. That goodbye of his had really pissed her off. A perfectly good meal had just flown away. But his display of ability made her curious. A normal human couldn't move like that. And his earlier composure, as if he'd known all along she was a ghoul. Putting it together, Rise concluded Byakuya was definitely not ordinary. Not a ghoul investigator either, so then. Lost in thought, she suddenly noticed a strange shadow on the ground at her feet. She looked up instinctively. Several massive steel beams were plummeting straight toward her. Already distracted, she had no time to dodge. Crash. The heavy beams, accelerated by gravity, crushed her body into something barely recognizable. Why, would? Rise lost consciousness. But she wasn't dead. The thunderous impact echoed across a wide area, like an explosion. Byakuya, who hadn't gone far, heard it immediately. He realized instantly what had happened. The system chimed in his mind. Ding. Host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, ignore the steel beam incident and go home to sleep. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, go back and rescue Rise Kamishiro, preventing the aftermath of the steel beam incident. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, return to the scene and lie next to Rise Kamishiro, pretending to be unconscious. Voluntarily undergo Dr. Kanu's artificial half-ghoul experiment. Reward, 50 fusion points. 12, Chapter 12, Saving Rise Kamishiro. Byakuya hesitated over the 3 options. From a purely rational standpoint, Option 1 was clearly the best choice. Option 2 would antagonize Nimura Furuta. Option 3 was even more foolish. Byakuya already had powers from fusing with Uchiha Madara. Becoming an artificial half-ghoul would be redundant at best. It wouldn't help him much, and the risks were enormous. In the early parts of the original story, Dr. Kanu conducted over 1,000 experiments using Rise as a donor. Only 3 subjects survived, Ken Kaneki, and the twins Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa. They became artificial one-eyed ghouls, a success rate of 0.25%. Byakuya wasn't about to risk death or permanent disability for 50 fusion points. The failure rate was astronomical. As for Option 2, the reason it would anger Furuta was because he had orchestrated the entire steel beam incident. According to Furuta's own account in the original story, he'd helped Rise escape the Washiyu clan. But after gaining freedom, she'd completely ignored him, preferring to seduce and devour men instead. So Furuta took revenge, engineering the incident to turn her into a suffering experimental subject. On the surface, it seemed like petty jealousy from a possessive personality, but Byakuya suspected that was just an excuse. Looking deeper, Furuta had long since given up on this world. Even if Rise had behaved differently, his plans would have proceeded regardless. His goal was simple: destroy the world. Joining the clowns, making Rise an experimental donor, everything was preparation for creating Dragon. He'd even manipulated events in the later story to push Kaneki toward becoming king. Though he appeared to oppose Kaneki until the end, certain details suggested he'd prepared for 2 possible outcomes from the start. 1. Use Dragon to destroy the world, transforming all humans into ghouls through Dragon's toxin. 2. Lose to Kaneki, who would kill Dragon and become the one-eyed king and savior, establishing a fragile peace between humans and ghouls. Furuta probably preferred total annihilation. Turning all humans into ghouls would certainly resolve the human-ghoul conflict. Food problems could be worked out later. Of course, this was all Byakuya's speculation. No concrete proof. Regardless, Furuta needed to create Dragon. Both outcomes required it. The only viable donor was Rizit purest Washiyu bloodline because only Washiyu blood could produce dragon. Plus, an artificial half-ghoul carrying her genetics was necessary. History recorded one natural-born half-ghoul, the original one-eyed king, the only one who'd successfully become dragon. Furuta was replicating that process. Rise was an essential sacrifice. As for Furuta's personality being genuinely petty, hard to say. If he truly had such possessive tendencies toward Rise, Kaneki would have died during the steel beam incident. Eliminating a background-less rival would have been effortless for Furuta. In summary, saving Rise now would interfere with Furuta's dragon plan and make an enemy of him. Still can't just leave her. After careful consideration, Byakuya decided to go back. He acknowledged his double standard. If some random ghoul had tried to eat or torture him, he wouldn't just refuse to help kill them if he could. But this was Rise Kamishiro. A tragic, pitiable figure. Her fate as an experimental subject was horrific. Kept barely alive on nutrient solution, her powerful regeneration preventing death. Countless experiments. Her Kakuhou harvested again and again. The physical torment combined with prolonged starvation eventually drove her insane. In the end, she became Dragon's Core, only finding release when Kaneki killed her. When Byakuya had read about her fate, he'd felt genuinely frustrated. Now that he'd transmigrated into this world, how could he not change what he'd always found so unsatisfying? Byakuya quickly returned to find Rise. The scene was brutal, steel beams pinning her unconscious body. He hauled them off one by one, his Madara-enhanced physique providing strength far beyond normal humans. Ordinary people couldn't have budged these. Before any bystanders could spot her and call the police, he scooped her up and fled. Before leaving, he glanced up at the construction site. No sign of Furuta. He must have left already. Question is, did he see me rescue her? No need for first aid. Rise regeneration far exceeded typical ghouls. She'd heal on her own. With nowhere else to go, Byakuya took her home. Ding. Host has completed option 2. Reward, 10 fusion points. He laid her on the bed and waited for her to heal and wake up. Having hunted frequently, Rise had plenty of RC cells. Her regeneration was remarkably fast. Soon, her eyes fluttered open. The instant she saw Byakuya, memories of the falling beams flooded back. Her first instinct was that he'd ambushed her. She shot to her feet, Kakugan blazing, for Rinkaku Kagun erupting from her waist. Byakuya remained calm. Relax. I saved you. 13, Chapter 13, Walk Me Home. You saved me. Rise wasn't about to believe that easily. Still, his words had some effect. She calmed slightly, holding back from attacking. Yeah. I heard a huge crash from your direction, went back, and found you buried under the beams. So I pulled you out. Byakuya's tone was matter-of-fact. Also, the beams weren't my doing. Someone else arranged that. And you expect me to believe you? Rise remained wary. Her 4 Kagun stayed trained on him, ready to strike at any moment. Think about it. If I wanted to hurt you, why bring you to my own home? I haven't done anything to you. Byakuya sighed. Look, if you want to leave right now, I won't stop you. Walk right out. Just be careful once you're past that door. Rise fell silent. His logic was sound. After a moment's consideration, she decided to hear him out. Her Kakugan faded to normal eyes. The 4 Kagun retracted into her Kakuhou. A sign she was willing to talk. The steel beams clearly weren't accidental. He'd said it was deliberate. Wait, you said someone did this. Do you know who? Byakuya shook his head. Not specifically, but I saw someone standing on top of the construction site, wearing a clown mask. They pushed the beams. He couldn't reveal it was Furuta directly. How would he explain knowing that? Even the Washiyu clan whose influence covered most of Japan didn't know Furuta was a member of the clowns. A clown mask. Rise had heard of the clowns organization, but she'd never crossed paths with them. Why would they target her? More likely candidates would be Washiyu hunters. Or maybe Byakuya had seen wrong. Either way, she needed to stay vigilant. Whoever attacked her once could try again. She looked at Byakuya, a complicated emotion flickering in her purple eyes. Why did you save me? I was about to torture and eat you. She still couldn't quite believe it. After everything that had happened, he'd still rescued her. Well, you were technically my first girlfriend. And you didn't actually manage to eat me. I've let it go. That was the best explanation Byakuya could offer without revealing he was a transmigrator. First girlfriend? Don't tell me you still think our relationship was real. Rise's voice dripped with mockery. Ha, how pathetic. I know it was fake, but everything that happened these past 2 days was real. Before meeting you, Rise-san, I'd never even been on a date. You gave me a completely new experience. Byakuya smiled. Disgusting. Rise looked at him with undisguised contempt. But you really are a strange man. Ohayuri not human, are you? Her gaze dropped to his shoulder, now fully healed. I bit off a huge chunk of your flesh. A normal human couldn't have recovered this fast. Maybe my constitution is unusual, but I'm definitely human. You tasted my flesh. If I were a ghoul, it wouldn't have tasted like that. Byakuya kept his explanation vague. He couldn't mention Hashirama cells, but nothing else he said was untrue. True, ghoul flesh tastes terrible. Yours was not only unlike a ghoul's, it was more delicious than any human I've ever eaten. Rise nodded. Speaking of which, since you can regenerate like a ghoul, you wouldn't mind letting me have another bite, right? She licked her lips hungrily, unable to forget his taste. After experiencing that flavor, she'd almost lost interest in ordinary humans. No, Byakuya refused flatly. Why not? Because it hurts. I'm not your personal buffet. He'd only allowed that first bite for the 100 fusion points. Otherwise, she'd never have gotten the chance. Fine. Rise didn't push further. She knew she couldn't force him, he wasn't some helpless weakling she could overpower. But she hadn't given up. If an opportunity arose, she'd definitely claim that delicacy again. For now, she needed to leave. Her injuries weren't fully healed, she needed rest. As she passed Byakuya heading for the door, he suddenly spoke. Wait. Rise stopped, eyebrow raised. I thought you said you wouldn't stop me. The atmosphere tensed. Byakuya's voice remained casual. At least wash the bedsheets before you go. A large bloodstain covered the sheets courtesy of her extensive wounds. Rise stared at him, momentarily speechless. Just throw them out and buy new ones. She pulled out her wallet and handed him some bills. More than enough for several new sets. Byakuya didn't stop her from leaving after that. Just as she was about to step through the doorway, Rise glanced back. You're not going to walk me home this time. Or should I be more direct-eyed like you to escort me, Byakuya-kun? 14, Chapter 14, No Goodbye Kiss. This time, Rise's expression held no theatrical pretense. She'd already shown him her true nature. Playing the delicate maiden was pointless now. Her smile was genuine, just a faint, natural curve of her lips. She still didn't know who had attacked her, but she suspected the Washiyu clan had found her. If Byakuya hadn't carried her away, she'd probably never be free again. She was half right, actually. If events had followed their original course, she'd have become an experimental subject, losing her freedom until death. But it wasn't the Washiyus, it was Furuta. So she was only half correct. Right now, Rise was still weakened. Regeneration consumed significant RC cells. A ghoul's strength was largely determined by their RC cell count. While not absolute, it was a reliable indicator. Once depleted, RC cells didn't naturally recover, they had to be replenished through feeding on humans or cannibalism. Rise couldn't solve her weakened state immediately. Unless Byakuya let her take another bite. She wanted his escort because she feared another ambush on the way home. Sure. Just don't suddenly decide to eat me halfway there. Not this time. Rise smiled. Byakuya found that reassurance highly questionable. Once again, Byakuya walked Rise home. But this time felt different, neither of them was playing games. Byakuya stayed alert but detected no surveillance. Furuta apparently wasn't bold enough to push that far. After all, Rise wasn't easy prey. If Furuta got too careless, she might discover him, ruining his plans entirely. Did you know I was a ghoul from the beginning? Rise asked suddenly. Given how calm he'd been during her attack, she suspected he'd known all along. Not at first. I really did fall for you at first sight. But gradually, things started feeling off. Byakuya deflected smoothly. It was the only option besides revealing his transmigrator status. Not entirely a lie, either. He'd liked Rise even before transmigrating. Love at first sight wasn't technically wrong. I see. I underestimated both your perceptiveness and your strength. Rise accepted his explanation. So do you still like me? Fair warning, I've never felt anything for you. Not even a little. Doesn't matter. My feelings for you won't change based on whether you reciprocate. Otherwise I wouldn't have saved you. Byakuya's tone was light. But our little couple act is over. I won't bother you anymore. Even though her words were basically rejecting his initial confession, he felt nothing. The confession had been fake from the start. The relationship was fake. Everything was fake. What did her rejection matter? Indeed. Rise hummed acknowledgement, then added, we're almost there. My place is just ahead. You can stop here. Alright, I'll head back then. As Byakuya turned to leave. Before we part, Rise said, don't you want a goodbye kiss? Her index finger pressed lightly against her lips, eyes seductive. Byakuya's expression went dead fish flat. You're planning to bite off my tongue, aren't you? Oh my, you figured it out. She didn't deny it, laughing softly. Though you're wrong about one thing. I don't just want your tongue, I want your lips too. You can regenerate anyway, right? That sweet smile, those terrifying words. Byakuya was momentarily speechless. I'll pass. Goodbye, Rise-san. He turned and walked away. Rise watched his retreating figure for a while before heading inside. That night, Byakuya kept the blood-soaked sheets. He swapped them for clean ones already in the house. He couldn't just throw away blood-stained bedding, that would invite all sorts of trouble. Better to wash them later. The next day, after classes, Byakuya returned to Antioku out of habit. Reading there had become routine. He'd expected not to see Rise today, but there she was. Apparently, the CAF wasn't just her hunting ground. Probably the coffee. Not tasty in the normal sense but infused with concentrated human flesh particles, making it palatable to ghouls. This CAF catered specifically to them, after all. Yoshimura typically only added the concentrate to ghoul customers' drinks. Human customers got regular coffee. Rise-san, I didn't think I'd see you here today. Byakuya greeted her casually, as if last night had never happened. Behind the counter, Tuka's head snapped up at his voice. That human boy is perfectly fine. Her eyes widened in shock. He should have been killed by Rise last night. Given how things had looked, she'd assumed he was done for. What's going on? Did that vicious woman actually show mercy? No, impossible. More likely Rise was still toying with him. 15, Chapter 15. Let me have another taste. Byakuya caught Tuka's startled gaze from the corner of his eye. Her reaction wasn't surprising. She'd probably written him off as dead the moment she saw him walking with Rise last night. Byakuya-kun thought I wouldn't come. Rise smiled. Yeah, I figured you'd have moved on to a new location by now. Byakuya sat across from her naturally, as if they were still a couple. Not that sitting together like friends was weird either. His comment referred to her usual pattern, finding new hunting grounds and new prey. But apparently she wasn't in a hurry. To anyone listening, their conversation would sound cryptic. I like it here. The coffee's good. Rise took a sip. Fair enough. They exchanged a few casual words. The couple dynamic was gone from their interaction. That had all been performance. Now that the act was over, they were just themselves. Byakuya grabbed a book from the shelf, The Hanged Man's MacGuffin, Takatsuki's latest work. That's The Hanged Man's MacGuffin. You recommended it to me, but you haven't actually read it. Rise teased. Not yet. I'd heard it was highly praised though. Byakuya's expression didn't waver. Technically true, he'd known about its reputation even before transmigrating. Let me see too. Rise moved to sit beside him, dragging her chair closer until they were nearly touching, apparently just to read along. The faint fragrance of her presence reached him. He'd assumed their couple game was finished, but apparently not. One thing was certain, Rise wouldn't attack him here in Yoshimura's territory. Then he understood her real motivation. As she leaned close, her face drifted toward the junction of his neck and shoulder, inhaling deeply like savoring the aroma of a gourmet dish. Ah, she really does find me delicious. He wasn't entirely sure why enhanced physique and Hashirama cells were just guesses. Hard to say if this was good or bad. Had he become the Tang monk's flesh of the Tokyo Ghoul world? I'm a little worried you'll suddenly take a bite. Byakuya murmured. Relax. The timing isn't right. I won't do anything here. Rise was direct. But if you're willing, we could find somewhere private right now. I'll pass. I'm not into self-harm. Byakuya shook his head. I do genuinely want to read this book, though. Rise continued. I only started reading Takatsuki because of circumstances, but her work really does suit my taste. I can imagine. Well, let's read together then. Byakuya wasn't surprised. Takatsuki's works were full of oppressive atmosphere, despair, and disturbing content. Of course Rise would enjoy them. Reading together meant slower progress, but sharing something he enjoyed with someone, especially a girl, made the pace worthwhile. Ding. Host has read The Hanged Man's MacGuffin. Reward, 1 fusion point. Ding. Host has finished The Hanged Man's MacGuffin. Reward, 1 fusion point. They finished the entire book at the CAF. Meanwhile, Tukakurias about their situation had been observing them. Seeing them acting intimately like a couple again, she became more convinced. Rise hadn't fed last night. She was still toying with her prey. After finishing, Byakuya and Rise naturally discussed the book. When Rise started praising the gruesome scenes, how exciting and thrilling they were, Byakuya felt mildly exasperated. You really do love the dark stuff. Then he remembered her physical condition. Those scenes involved torture and cannibalism, which reminded him that Rise needed to feed to replenish her RC cells. How are you feeling, by the way? Much better. I had plenty of stock at home. Oh my, is Byakuya-kun worried about me? Rise's voice turned playful. Stock meant preserved human flesh in her freezer from previous hunts. They kept their voices low, only audible to each other. Yeah, I'm worried. Otherwise I wouldn't have saved you. Byakuya stated it plainly. No embarrassment. No evasion. Just honesty. True enough. Rise noted that this guy was completely impervious to provocation. She couldn't make him scared. She couldn't even make him blush. Since you're recovered, I'd still advise against hunting as recklessly as before. That clown-masked person could attack again anytime. Byakuya offered genuine advice. Trying to control me. A hint of displeasure flickered in her eyes. But, if you let me have another taste, I might consider listening to you. 16, Chapter 16, finally found his weakness. Her experiences with the Washiyo clan had left Rise with an intense hatred of being controlled. That's why she lived so freely now. Her brutal, excessive hunting was really just an outlet for all that past suffering. Most ghouls only needed to feed once a month to stay healthy. Rise hunted 2 or 3 times a week. She consumed far more humans than necessary, eating purely for pleasure. That's why they called her the binge eater. Yet despite all that indulgence, she never pursued power. A waste of her supremely pure Washiyo bloodline. But even with her hatred of control, her obsession with Byakuya's body was winning out. She'd accept restrictions just to taste him again, though she'd only said she'd consider it not a definite yes. Ding. Host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, refuse Rise Kamashiro's demand and stop interfering with her hunting. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, refuse Rise Kamashiro's demand but forcibly restrict her behavior. Reward, 20 fusion points. Option 3, accept Rise Kamashiro's demand. Reward, 50 fusion points. You've got it backwards. If you listen to me first, then I'll let you have a small taste. Byakuya began negotiating. He intended to pick option 3, but that didn't mean he couldn't set terms. He'd agree provided she cooperated first. Plus, decent fusion points. As long as the system's options weren't too outrageous, he was willing to consider them. Listen to you first. Yeah, for example. Byakuya thought for a moment. For the next 2 weeks, don't hunt any humans. After that, I'll fulfill your request. He knew Rise typically hunted at least 2 or 3 times weekly. If she could hold off for 2 weeks, that would be a start. Otherwise, Furuta would easily find another opportunity. Then saving her would have been pointless. 2 weeks is too long, how about 3 days? Rise's voice turned almost wheedling. Byakuya was unimpressed. That's meaningless. Normal ghouls only need to feed once a month. You're the only one with such a huge appetite. Besides, you could be ambushed again anytime. I might not be able to save you next time. Think carefully. Rise had been about to continue bargaining, but the second half of his statement silenced her. He was right. If the Washiyo clan had really found her, her situation was dire. If they captured her, her fate would be. Considering this, Rise smiled faintly. Fine, I'll agree to your terms. But first let me have just a little taste. Taste what? Byakuya assumed she wanted to bite him. Absolutely not. Relax, I won't bite you here. Too many people watching. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she bit down gently on his earlobe. Not hard, just a light nibble. Even that small contact was delicious. Like licking a lollipop. Byakuya had never experienced anything like this. Ears were a sensitive spot for most people. His body shivered involuntarily. Rise had only meant to satisfy a craving, but his obvious reaction was an unexpected bonus. Her lips curved. Finally found this guy's weakness. His complete non-reaction last night had been bothering her. Now she felt like pushing further a little revenge. Meanwhile, other customers noticed their display. Quite a stir. I remember that human boy. He's actually still alive. Must be the longest surviving prey Rise's ever marked. Yeah, and since when does Rise get this intimate with prey? If I didn't know better, I'd think they were actually dating. Could Rise genuinely be interested in that human? Unlikely, but not impossible. Behind the counter, Tuka witnessed the scene with widening eyes. That vicious woman is doing this. To a human? Even for toying with prey, this seemed excessive. Plus, their flirting was bad for the CAF's image. At that exact moment, Kaneki walked through the door. He froze mid-step at the sight, rooted in place. Hyde, right behind him, noticed immediately. What's wrong? Just as Rise was about to escalate things, Byakuya pushed her away. Don't overdo it. He wasn't about to lose his composure in public. Fine, but I'm satisfied. Rise licked her lips contentedly, voice teasing. Besides, I finally discovered a certain someone's weakness. 17, Chapter 17, A Promise. Byakuya felt mildly exasperated. He wiped his earlobe with a napkin, cleaning off the residual saliva. For the next 2 weeks, you behave. If I catch you breaking our agreement, the deal's off. Ghouls could go a month on just 1 or 2 feedings. Even if Rise stopped hunting entirely, she wouldn't starve in Ward 20. Antioch's ghouls led by Yoshimura raved exclusively on the already dead, suicide victims, mostly. Given Japan's notoriously high suicide rate and the cultural tendency to not trouble others, even in death, many chose isolated locations where they'd never be found. Antioch collected these bodies discreetly, stockpiling them as a long-term food source. Police and families never located the remains, so there were no consequences. Yoshimura's rules had made Ward 20 remarkably peaceful compared to the rest of Tokyo. The CCG relaxed their oversight here, making it a haven for ghouls who didn't want to harm humans. Until Rise arrived. Since settling in Ward 20, she'd been nothing but trouble. She occasionally helped Antioch collect bodies, but her frequent hunting attracted CCG attention, gradually shattering the district's tranquility. Ding! Host has completed option 3. Reward, 50 fusion points. The promise was made, the points were his. Meanwhile, Kaneki had recovered and found an empty seat, trying to act normal. Kaneki, what happened back there? And why's your face all red? Hyde sat across from him, noticing the flush. The yellow-haired boy with orange headphones around his neck was Ken Kaneki's best friend, Hideyoshi Nagakika. And nothing. Only then did Kaneki realize he was blushing. He definitely couldn't explain what he'd just witnessed. Right. Hyde seemed to let it go. Anyway, Kaneki, that cute girl at the coffee shop you mentioned? Which one is she? He scanned the room, searching for anyone matching Kaneki's description. Wait, keep your voice down. Kaneki frantically shushed him. And stop looking around. Oh, is it her? Or her? Hyde pointed first at Tuka, then at Rise. Those two were the only ones matching cute girl in a coffee shop. Kaneki's cheeks reddened further. He stared at the table, refusing to answer. I see. Hyde clearly understood. Kaneki's reaction confirmed it was one of them. An idea struck. He raised his hand. Excuse me, could the waitress come here please? Tuka turned and approached. Coming, how can I help? 1 cappuccino for me, and another for this guy. Hyde ordered, then asked smoothly, and, what's your name? Though sudden, Tuka answered, I'm Kiri. Before she could finish, Kaneki cut in frantically, Hyde, you idiot. The girl I mentioned isn't her. Don't do weird things to people. Knowing Hyde, he'd start doing something embarrassing, possibly harassing the poor girl. Hyde had gotten the answer he needed. Time to back off. Never mind, never mind. Sorry to bother you. Okay. Tuka returned to work without concern. Once she left, Hyde grinned at Kaneki. So if it's not her, it must be that one, right? That one obviously meant Rise. Why yes. Completely outmaneuvered, Kaneki could only admit it awkwardly. Hyde fell silent. After a moment, he placed both hands on Kaneki's shoulders, speaking with grave sincerity, Kaneki, I'm telling you to give up. A beauty like that is obviously out of reach. Plus, that type gets even more gorgeous without glasses. And most importantly, she already has a boyfriend, right? That position they were in earlier was pretty intense. Hyde was genuinely trying to help. Now he understood why Kaneki had frozen at the entrance. I know all that. I've pretty much let it go already. Her boyfriend is actually that book friend I told you about. Kaneki's voice was low. Oh, him. Well, if you can still be friends with him, you must have really moved on. Hyde sounded surprised. Maybe. Anyway, it's over. Kaneki closed the topic. Fair enough. I need to get to my part-time job. Catch you later. Hyde left. Kaneki stayed to read. He'd been coming here to enjoy coffee and books long before he ever noticed Rise. Nearby, Rise had naturally observed Kaneki and Hyde's little exchange. She found it amusing. If you hadn't stopped me, that boy over there would have been my next target. His flesh probably tastes decent though nowhere near as delicious as yours. 18, Chapter 18, The CCG. Afterward, Byakuya and Rise shared another of Takatsuki's works, The Black Goat's Egg. He'd finished it ages ago. Rise had only read half. The protagonist was a cold-blooded female serial killer called the Black Goat and her only son. Initially, the son despised his mother's actions but gradually discovered similar violent urges awakening within himself. Seemingly fiction, but Takatsuki had written it as a direct parallel to herself and her father. The female killer was Yoshimura. The son was Ito, just with swapped genders. Hard to imagine what Yoshimura felt reading it. I need to go. I've got something to take care of. Goodbye, Rise-san. Byakuya stood to leave. Okay, goodbye. Rise smiled. After he left, she stayed until closing time, reading to pass the time. 2 weeks without hunting meant boredom. Books would help. Kamishiro-san, we're closing soon. Tuka, now changed from uniform to school clothes, reminded her. Sorry. Lost track of time. Rise's apologetic smile seemed genuine enough. By the way. Tuka didn't particularly want to interact with Rise, but couldn't help asking, have you changed lately? Rise made a questioning sound, though she could guess the meaning. I mean, you actually sat here reading all day. And that boy your prey, right? You didn't touch him last night. Tuka elaborated. Maybe I just like him. Rise countered. Tuka's eyes widened. You actually like him? Unbelievable. Someone like Rise falling for a human? Of course, that's a lie. Rise had been playing her the whole time. Can't tell you the details. Anyway, good night, Kirishima-san. She strolled out, humming. Tuka felt annoyed but had no recourse. Walking home, Rise stayed alert for ambushes. Her thoughts drifted to Byakuya. She didn't like him in the romantic sense, but his body, that obsession was real. She wanted to devour him right now. Unfortunately, 2 more weeks. But the enforced fasting would make the eventual feast even sweeter. Just imagining freely savoring his flesh made her hum a cheerful tune. Earlier that afternoon, after leaving Antioku, Byakuya headed directly to Ward 20 CCG branch. Tokyo had 24 wards. Aside from Ward 24, each had a CCG commission of counter-Ghoul office. Ward 1 held headquarters. Wards 2 through 23 were branch offices. Ward 24 had no CCG presence because it wasn't a normal district. No humans lived there. It was a Ghoul stronghold, essentially an underground labyrinth. Arriving at Ward 20's branch, Byakuya entered the lobby and walked toward the RC gate. RC gate, a scanner detecting RC cell levels. The biggest difference between humans and ghouls, aside from Kakugen, Kagun, and Kakuhou, was RC cell count. Humans typically ranged between 200 to 500. Ghouls started around 1,000, with powerful ones reaching several thousand or even tens of thousands. This stark difference allowed the gates to identify ghouls. Currently, RC gates existed mainly in government facilities like the CCG. If they became widespread, ghoul survival in human society would collapse. Hey, you can't just walk in. This is the CCG, not a police station. A staff member intercepted him. Outsiders weren't allowed inside. Lobby consultations only. I know what this place is. I'm here because I want to become an investigator. Byakuya stated directly. What? Become an investigator? You look like a student. Go back to school. This job's too dangerous. The man's tone was impatient but well-meaning. Though just administrative staff rather than an actual investigator, he knew the casualty rates. Deaths were constant. Investigators fought monsters, not ordinary criminals. Anyone with a conscience wouldn't recommend this career, especially to students. The entry requirements were stringent too. This was a government position. Insufficient ability meant rejection. Thank you for the concern, but my mind's made up. Byakuya's voice was firm. Fine. Registration's over there. Whether you're accepted depends on your own abilities. The man stopped arguing. Thank you. Byakuya filled out an application for either the Ghoul Countermeasures Institute or the Ghoul Investigator Training Academy. Ding. Host has activated a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1. Join the Ghoul Countermeasures Institute and complete 1 year of training. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 2. Join the Ghoul Investigator Training Academy and complete 2 years of training. Reward, 20 fusion points. Option 3. Skip all training institutions entirely by establishing an outstanding ghoul extermination record. Reward, 40 fusion points. 19. Chapter 19. Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa. The application form offered 2 choices. The Ghoul Countermeasures Institute or the Ghoul Investigator Training Academy, both trained investigators. The core difference, standard training versus elite training. The institute had a 1-year program for regular investigators, focusing on handguns and rifles. Graduates became rank 3 investigators assigned to branch offices in wards 2 to 23. The academy, commonly called the Academy, offered 2 years of elite training, emphasizing quinqua usage alongside firearms. Graduates earned rank 2 status and were assigned to Ward 1 headquarters. Each had pros and cons, shorter duration and lower difficulty but less depth and lower starting rank, versus double time and higher difficulty but better training and higher starting position. None of that mattered to Byakuya. He planned to skip the whole process. Wait a year or 2. Not happening. He selected the academy anyway. Strategic reasoning. Academy students received training quinquas. With a quinqua, building an impressive combat record would be much easier. Application submitted. He'd just wait for a response. The CCG worked fast. The next morning, a paper letter arrived. Opening it confirmed his acceptance. Approval was easy. Paying tuition got you in. Government programs kept fees reasonable. The real question was whether you could graduate. The CCG needed a steady supply of new investigators. Given the circumstances, Byakuya could request a leave of absence from Kamiya University until academy graduation. His academic standing wouldn't suffer. He transferred tuition that day, used his academy credentials to file for leave, then headed to the academy in Ward 1. Ward 20 to Ward 1 seemed far numerically, but Tokyo wasn't that big. Less than 30 minutes by subway. The academy looked like an ordinary university externally, except for the unusually high walls topped with electric fencing, not to prevent students from escaping to keep unauthorized people out. Government facility. Security standards differed from normal schools. Hello, I'm a new student here to register. Byakuya presented his credentials to the guard. Go ahead. She'll show you around. The guard waved him through, pointing to someone waiting nearby. Byakuya looked. A young woman in professional attire stood there, glasses, attractive features, holding a stack of documents. His guide, apparently. You're Amaha Byakuya, correct? I'm Suzuki, the dean's secretary. Pleased to meet you. Her tone was cool but polite. Yes, I'm Amaha Byakuya. Likewise. Follow me. Suzuki led him inside while explaining, since you're entering midterm, keeping up with your class will be difficult. You'll have to manage on your own. You made this choice knowing the challenges. She covered a lot of ground. Byakuya learned both the academy and the institute operated from this facility. Different curricula, shared training grounds. Suzuki showed him around, introducing various locations. During the tour, Byakuya spotted familiar faces. Kurona Yasuhisa, Nashiro Yasuhisa, Juzu Suzuya, Toru Matsuki. He suddenly remembered at this point in the timeline, these individuals were indeed investigator trainees. After graduation, they'd become official CCG investigators. That covers everything essential. Any questions, come find me. You can join your class starting now. Suzuki finished and left him to his own devices. Checking the schedule, Byakuya found a theory class starting in minutes. Fundamentals of Ghoul Investigation. He headed to his assigned classroom. Everyone there was a fellow trainee from his intake. The instructor had just arrived and introduced the new student. We have a new classmate today. I hope everyone will get along with him. The instructor gestured for Byakuya to introduce himself. Byakuya wrote his name on the blackboard with practiced ease, then gave a brief introduction. I'm Amaha Byakuya, from Ward 20. My hobby is reading. I aspire to become a ghoul investigator. Thank you. Good. There's an empty seat over there. Please sit, Amaha-san. Unlike university, this was a fixed classroom with assigned seating. His intake only had a few hundred students, easy to divide into classes without the rotating lecture halls of a university. Understood. Byakuya nodded and walked to the indicated seat. Back row, window seat. Quite nice, actually. Coincidentally, Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa were not only in his class but sat directly in front of him and to his right. 20, Chapter 20. The Twin Sisters. Single desks meant no seatmates. Byakuya and the Yasuhisa twins were just neighbors. Nice to meet you. He offered a token greeting. Kurona acknowledged him with a slight nod before looking away, expression cold. Nashiro didn't even make eye contact. She'd glanced at him when he spoke, then immediately retreated, clearly introverted and shy around strangers. Their hair colors matched their names. Kurona's hair and dress were black, Nashiro's were snow white. As identical twins, their features were virtually indistinguishable, delicate and cute. The contrasting colors made it easier to tell them apart. Even their figures and heights were nearly identical, slender builds, 160, practically ideal by Japanese standards. Byakuya didn't mind their attitudes. His impression of the twins had always been that they were the reserved type. Today's topic is quinquas. You'll be testing them soon, so let's cover the basics first. Turn to page 128. The instructor began class. Quinquas were invented several decades ago by former CCG chairman Yoshitake Washiyu and German CCG director Adam Jenner. Their development dramatically closed the power gap between humans and ghouls. Kagun are the primary material for quinquas. They're harvested from ghouls, but the extraction method has strict requirements. The kagun must be fully released, then removed along with the intact kakuhao. Only then does it meet manufacturing standards. Since quinquas are dead rather than living kagun, they lack growth potential, flexibility, and extension. However, they offer superior control and stability. As technology advances, quinqua modifications continue improving. The theory class lasted 45 minutes. Reasonable duration. Most of the content Byakuya already knew, but he listened patiently and respectfully. As the instructor mentioned, after a short break came practical training. The combat instructor was a proper investigator assigned by the CC, typically rank 1. Byakuya noted their instructor wasn't Tokage, just some unfamiliar investigator. Tokage was the interrogator who'd tortured Yamori Jason so brutally that he'd snapped mentally, inheriting Tokage's sadistic personality and cruel techniques. That included the finger-cracking habit and the infamous line, "All the unfairness in this world stems from the inadequacy of the one being unfair." Yamori passed those on to Kaneki later. Tokage was practically the root of all that evil. You haven't used quinquas yet. For your first experience, we'll start with specialized firearms similar in concept. The combat instructor had prepared enough weapons for everyone. Various types, handguns, rifles, submachine guns, and more. Pick whatever interests you. These are standard firearms, but the bullets are specially manufactured from kagun. Ordinary bullets barely affect ghouls. The instructor demonstrated while explaining. These are mass-produced anti-ghoul bullets called Q bullets. 4 types exist, corresponding to the 4 kagun types. He extracted some bullets from a magazine to show them. Elite investigators used proper quinquas, but quinqua authorization was strictly controlled. Investigator assistants and rank 3 investigators couldn't use them. They were limited to these specialized firearms. Byakuya grabbed a handgun resembling the famous Desert Eagle. If only the system gave him infinite ammo. Classic post-apocalyptic novel cheat, Desert Eagle plus unlimited bullets. Get familiar with them first, then start target practice. The instructor continued, I don't expect accuracy right away. Just learn proper grip and stance. He went around correcting each student's form. Then they fired at distant targets. Stationary targets, not moving ones, no need to start at maximum difficulty. Byakuya had never fired a gun before. The instructor helped adjust his grip. But aiming and shooting, that was his forte. Even without activating his Sharingan, his vision and perception far exceeded normal humans. He lined up the fixed target, roughly calculated wind and gravity, though those factors barely affected handguns, and fired. Bang! He checked the result, roughly 9th ring, almost 10th. Not perfect, but excellent for a first attempt. The instructor had just finished correcting Byakuya's stance and watched his shot. Seeing 9th ring, his eyes widened. Impressive talent. Hitting that on your first try is remarkable. He immediately praised Byakuya. This student had struggled with basic grip moments ago, clearly inexperienced with firearms. Achieving this demonstrated genuine gift. 21, Chapter 21, Get Good. You're too kind, instructor. Byakuya replied modestly. Keep up the good work. I have high expectations for you. The combat instructor clapped Byakuya on the shoulder encouragingly. Marksmanship scores were one of the key assessments for graduation. If Byakuya performed well in other areas too, he had a real shot at graduating as the top-ranked student in his class. The instructor made a mental note to keep an eye on this particular trainee. Producing a top graduate would certainly benefit his own career. Meeting performance targets and earning a bonus never hurt. That guy must have just gotten lucky, right? I only scored a 6, and I was using a rifle. I heard pistols are way harder to shoot accurately. I did a bit better, got a 7. But yeah, a 9 with a pistol is pretty ridiculous. Isn't he the new guy who just transferred in today? I'm betting it was a fluke. If it wasn't luck, then he's seriously something else. Several trainees openly doubted Byakuya's marksmanship results. After all, lucky shots happened all the time. The combat instructor paid no attention to their chatter. Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa, however, stayed out of the gossip. The twins had always kept to themselves. They were practically inseparable even during classes. They sat together. The only thing they didn't share was a gun. Both had chosen pistols, though they favored different hands. Kurona shot left-handed while Nashiro shot right-handed. Their scores were nearly identical too, both had hit the 8 ring. In the original story, the Yasuhisa twins were exceptional candidates for the CCG, so their strong performance was expected. Nashiro, it seems we're no longer the best in class. Kurona spoke up. But he might not be better than us in other areas. Nashiro replied, her expression neutral. The twins had been the top performers in their class until this newcomer named Yamaha Byakuya appeared and outshot them on his very first day. They couldn't help but take notice. Meanwhile, Byakuya was preparing for his second shot. A 9 wasn't good enough. He wanted to hit the 10 ring. Gripping the pistol single-handed in his right hand, he turned sideways, kept his arm extended, and held his breath to minimize body sway. With his strength, recoil was hardly a concern. His second shot landed close to the 10 ring but not quite there. It wasn't until his third shot that he finally hit dead center. 110, 2 9s, an undeniably impressive result. Many trainees had been watching Byakuya closely, curious about his performance. 3 consecutive shots within the 9 ring, and one of them was a perfect 10. There's no way that's all luck. Yeah, the guy's actually got skills. Who knew the new transfer would turn out to be a shooting prodigy? I really hope he didn't hear me doubting him earlier, that would be awkward. Byakuya's 3 shots silenced all the skeptics. Only Kurona and Nashiro seemed unconvinced. They each fired 2 more rounds, determined to surpass his score. Not only did they fail to beat him, but their follow-up shots were worse than their first attempts. Kurona's second and third shots scored 8 and 6 respectively. Nashiro managed 2 7s. Haste makes waste, as they say. Byakuya had a cheat-like system boosting his abilities. The harder the twins pushed, the worse their results became. The combat instructor did praise their solid performance afterward, but the sisters couldn't find any joy in it. Ding! Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, pretend you noticed nothing and avoid getting involved with Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, show your gentle side and personally teach them shooting techniques. No pressure if it doesn't work. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, walk up to them and taunt them with get good. Reward, 50 fusion points. Byakuya stared at the 3 options floating before him and fell silent for a moment. Don't ask why. The system was just too generous. He walked over to where Kurona and Nashiro stood. Under their puzzled gazes, he spoke coolly. Get good. Get good. Ding. Host has completed option 3. Reward, 50 fusion points. Hearing the system confirm his reward, Byakuya promptly turned and headed back to his original spot. The twins froze for a second, needing a moment to process what he'd just said. Then their pretty faces flushed with anger. What did you just say? But by the time they spoke up, he'd already walked away. Still, even annoyed, the sisters looked adorable. Nashiro's cheeks had turned slightly red from indignation. That jerk thinks he's so superior just because his shooting scores are a little better than ours. Nashiro's voice dripped with displeasure. Nashiro, we can't lose to him again. Kurona was equally riled up, her expression icy with determination to go head-to-head with Byakuya. Whoa, Yamaha-kun actually went and provoked the Yasuhisa sisters? Sure, his marksmanship is impressive, but those two are geniuses who excel at everything. Looks like Kurona-san and Nashiro-san have set their sights on Yamaha-kun now. Rivalry between prodigies is terrifying. Works out for us. Though at least we'll have something entertaining to watch. Byakuya's confrontation with the twins immediately became the talk of the class. On one side, a dazzling newcomer. On the other, twin prodigies who ranked at the very top. Byakuya was well aware that he'd seriously annoyed Kurona and Nashiro. He figured he should find a chance to apologize after class. For the rest of the session, Byakuya didn't limit himself to pistols. He tried out rifles, sniper rifles, the whole arsenal. But these firearms felt like toys to him. The real prize was the quinqua, though that would have to wait for the next practical session. As noon approached, Byakuya decided to eat at the academy's cafeteria. Between both training programs, there weren't that many students total, so the cafeteria was fairly small. With everyone eating at the same time, it got pretty crowded during lunch hour. Byakuya had arrived relatively early and secured a table to himself. Soon the cafeteria filled up almost completely. Latecomers had no choice but to share tables with others. That's when Kurona and Nashiro found themselves without seats. When they spotted the only table with 2 empty spots occupied by a certain annoying individual, they had no choice but to suppress their irritation and sit down across from Byakuya, slight frowns on their faces. 22, Chapter 22, You Belong to Me. Seeing Kurona and Nashiro sit across from him with cold expressions, Byakuya felt a twinge of awkwardness himself. He hadn't meant to mock them maliciously. Though, while it wasn't malicious, it was definitely intentional. The twins said nothing, acting as if Byakuya across from them was invisible, like he was just empty air. Sorry about that. I was just running my mouth earlier. I didn't mean anything bad by it. When an apology was warranted, Byakuya gave one. He didn't consider it beneath him. Both sisters looked genuinely surprised. They hadn't expected him to actually apologize, and so quickly, too. It's too late for that now. Your provocation earlier Nashiro and I have already accepted it. Kurona's tone remained cold. There was no way she and Nashiro would just pretend the whole thing never happened. The rivalry had been established. They were determined to compete with Byakuya to the end. Though the twins' attitudes hadn't exactly warmed up, at least they weren't treating him like he didn't exist anymore. His apology had accomplished something. Alright then. Byakuya didn't push further. He simply lowered his head and continued eating. Kurona. I'm Yasuhisa Kurona. Suddenly, Kurona spoke up. Byakuya looked up, confused. I'm telling you to remember the name of your rival, Yasuhisa Kurona. Her tone stayed cool. Compared to her sister, Nashiro seemed less composed about it, a hint of embarrassment in her voice. I am Yasuhisa Nashiro. Got it. I introduced myself during class earlier, but I'll say it again properly. I am Yamaha Byakuya. Byakuya said, then added, though if I call both of you Yasuhisa-san, it might get confusing, that could be a problem. In Japan, classmates typically addressed each other by surname. Using someone's given name was reserved for close friends, like calling him Byakuya-kun or just Byakuya. Just use our full names. Kurona didn't care much for such formalities. Works for me. Byakuya nodded slightly. After that, there wasn't much more conversation between him and the Yasuhisa sisters. Once they finished lunch, everyone went their separate ways. The afternoon consisted of theory classes, which ended early, similar to his schedule at Kamiai University. Trainees typically stayed behind for additional self-directed physical training. The academy provided room and board, though students could choose to live off campus if they preferred. Byakuya left early. He saw no point in staying for standard physical training at his current level, it would barely make a difference. He took the subway home and rested for a while, then decided to drop by Antioch despite the late hour. By the time Byakuya arrived at the CAF, it was already 4 p.m. The moment he stepped inside, he spotted familiar faces: Rise Kamishiro and Ken Kaneki. Yamaha-kun. Byakuya had been heading toward Rise when Kaneki called out to him. He changed direction and walked over to Kaneki instead. What's up, Kaneki-kun? Did you hear about Takatsuki-sensei's fan meet and greet? It's coming up soon. Kaneki's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Byakuya paused. He actually hadn't been paying attention to that. If you're free and interested, want to come with me? Kaneki extended the invitation. Hyde wasn't into books, and besides Byakuya, Kaneki didn't really have anyone else to ask. Attending with a fellow fan would be much more fun than going alone. Sure, I don't see why not. Byakuya mentally checked his schedule. The academy's classes didn't conflict with the timing of San Takatsuki's event. He wasn't particularly excited about meeting Takatsuki after all, he already knew who she really was. But accompanying Kaneki seemed harmless enough. Great. Kaneki's face lit up. I won't keep you then, I should get going myself. He knew Byakuya would want to spend time with his girlfriend, so he didn't want to take up too much of his time. See you. Byakuya gave a brief wave. Then he turned and saw Rise beckoning him over. The moment he sat down beside her, Rise leaned in close and started sniffing him. After a while, she finally asked, Why are you so late today? Had more classes than usual. You know I'm a student. Byakuya didn't plan on telling Rise about the CCG Academy, so he kept his explanation vague. Is that so? But I smell something unusual on you. Rise smiled as she spoke, but that smile held an edge of danger. What kind of smell? Byakuya asked. Could she have detected the scent of firearms on him? A faint ghoul scent, probably from a Kagun, but it's strangely weak. Rise analyzed the odor. Now Byakuya understood. It must be the Q bullet special ammunition made from Ghoul Kagun. The fact that they'd been processed into bullets would explain why the scent was so faint. Rise had picked up the trace of another ghoul on Byakuya, and even though it was barely perceptible, she wasn't pleased. Because Byakuya belonged exclusively to her, she wouldn't allow any other ghoul to touch him. Of course, when she thought of him as her possession, she meant it in terms of food. I forgot to make this clear earlier, but you belong to me. I don't want anyone else getting a taste of you. Understand? Rise murmured into Byakuya's ear, her tone willful and commanding, brooking no refusal. 23, Chapter 23, The Ghoul World's Succubus. If Byakuya didn't understand the true meaning behind Rise's words, it would have been easy to misinterpret. Her "you belong to me" actually meant "you're my food." In other words, Rise wanted to keep him all to herself. She didn't want any other ghoul taking a bite out of him. But the thing was, he hadn't done anything. He'd just been target shooting with ammunition loaded with special bullets. And once he started using quinquas, the ghoul scent on him would become even more obvious. Did you hear me? Rise lightly poked Byakuya's cheek with her finger, then repeated, Did you hear me? I heard you. But whether some other ghoul bites me isn't exactly something I can control. Byakuya replied with a hint of exasperation. You're strong, aren't you? Just don't let them succeed. Rise said casually. In short, only I get to taste your body. You're being pretty possessive here. Byakuya remarked. By the way, I want a little taste today too. Rise added. No way. Last time was already a special exception. The memory of his earlobe being held in her mouth made Byakuya's scalp tingle. Come on, I won't go for your ear this time. How about this instead? As she spoke, Rise grabbed Byakuya's right index finger. I'll decide later which part of you I'll really enjoy. Fine. Byakuya relented. With his permission granted, Rise immediately took his right index finger gently between her teeth, savoring the flavor. This meager taste was nothing compared to when she'd torn off that piece of flesh from his shoulder that had been a transcendent delicacy. What Rise was doing now was building anticipation, letting her desire accumulate. When the moment finally came, the payoff would be all the sweeter. Though this also helped take the edge off her cravings. Temporarily, at least afterward, the hunger would only grow stronger. Rise brushed aside the hair falling across her face with one hand while holding Byakuya's finger with the other. The pose was, rather suggestive, to say the least. Throughout the whole thing, Byakuya felt increasingly awkward. After all, there were plenty of other customers watching. Not just customers either. Tuka, who was serving tables, kept glancing their way with a concerned expression. Of course, her concern was about them potentially damaging Antiocha's image with this kind of display. For now it was still within acceptable bounds. But if Byakuya and Rise took things any further, Tuka would have to step in and remind them. Alright, that's enough. Seeing that Rise showed no sign of letting go, Byakuya had to speak up. Rise reluctantly released his finger. Her hand drifted to her own cheek, her complexion flushing with an almost feverish tinge as she seemed to savor the lingering taste. Even this small indulgence satisfied her more than any human she'd ever hunted. The reason was simple: Byakuya's constitution and his Hashirama cells had both strengthened since Rise first tasted him. They'd undergone a qualitative transformation from level 1 to level 2, meaning Byakuya's flavor had also transformed. Even just his skin in a ghoul's mouth was incredibly enticing. Byakuya suddenly had a troubling thought: at this rate, he'd eventually become some kind of succubus in the eyes of ghouls. That wasn't exactly a good thing. Ghouls would literally chase him down to take a bite. This wasn't the kind of succubus treatment that came with any perks. After a while, Rise finally finished savoring the moment. That bookworm boy earlier, he invited you to Sentakatsuki's fan meet and greet. Rise suddenly changed the subject. Yeah, why? Byakuya knew immediately that bookworm meant Kaneki. Nothing much. I'm just a little curious now. I want to see what this Takatsuki-san person is like. Rise said. Takatsuki's works appealed to her taste perfectly. Almost all of them were dark and intense. She particularly loved those gruesome passages. So naturally, she'd become curious about the author herself. Sure, come with me then. Byakuya agreed. He'd just have to apologize to Kaneki later. Watching Byakuya show up with Rise in tow, Kaneki would probably feel that sting pretty badly. But there wasn't much he could do about it. He'd just have to make it up to Kaneki somehow. Tuka-chan, Kamishiro-san seems much calmer lately, don't you think? At the front counter, Kaya Irimi struck up a conversation with Tuka about Rise. Irimi was another Antioku employee, a tall, mature woman with an elegant, refined presence. But her true identity was Black Dog, an SS-rated ghoul. She really has been more settled. That guy is probably her prey, but it's been days and she hasn't done anything to him. That's completely unlike her usual habit of frequent feeding. Tuka couldn't help but reflect. And the way they interacted doesn't look like she's just planning to eat him. Is Kamishiro-san really that good an actress? Didn't she mention before that she likes him? Could that be the reason? Irimi asked. She said that was fake. And besides, it's hard to imagine someone like her actually falling for a human. Her not devouring every human she meets would already be a miracle. Tuka shook her head. You never know. Kamishiro-san is still a young woman, after all. Being too shy to admit her feelings, or falling in love with a human neither would be that strange. I've heard plenty of stories about ghouls and humans falling in love. Irimi said. Nearby, Yoshimura could hear their conversation. His expression remained unchanged, that gentle smile never wavering, though what he was thinking inside was another matter entirely. After all, Yoshimura himself was a ghoul who had loved a human. By the way, Tuka-chan, Irimi smiled, you're at that age too. Is there any boy you like? No way. All the guys in my class are total children. Tuka replied offhandedly. Her reaction was so casual and natural. Clearly, there really wasn't anyone she was interested in. Irimi immediately reached a conclusion. I see, so Tuka-chan prefers mature, older guys. 24, Chapter 24, Best Avoided. Ahem. Irimi-san, please stop teasing me. Tuka's cheeks reddened slightly. Clearly Irimi had hit the mark. Tuka-chan is so easy to read. Irimi chuckled softly. Honestly. Tuka sighed helplessly. If Irimi-san hadn't suddenly brought up the topic, she wouldn't have even thought about romance. Truth be told, she wasn't entirely sure what kind of guy she'd even like. Shaking the thought away, Tuka lightly slapped her own cheeks. Now wasn't the time for this. She had customers to serve. The next day, Byakuya took the subway early to the CCG Academy in Ward 1. His first class of the morning was actually a free period, but arriving early couldn't hurt. With time to spare, he wandered around the academy grounds. When he entered a small grove of trees, he happened to spot something that caught his attention. In the distance, he could make out two figures. One was a short-haired girl with delicate features and wheat-colored skin. He recognized her as Toru Matsuki. Though Matsuki had deliberately cut her hair short and wore binding wraps to pass as male among her classmates, she was actually female. She was crouched down, apparently fiddling with something. The other figure standing nearby was Tokage, a middle-aged man already going bald, with a massive scar running from his forehead to his chin on the left side of his face. The injury had disfigured his features courtesy of Jason Yamori. Of course, if Tokage hadn't spent day after day brutally torturing Yamori in the first place, Yamori would never have scarred him like that. If Byakuya's guess was right, this was the scene where Tokage discovered Matsuki killing stray cats. Focusing his enhanced vision, Byakuya confirmed that Matsuki had just killed a cat and was now cutting out its tongue. She had a disturbing habit of collecting cat tongues. "Hey, what are you doing there?" Tokage approached Matsuki. Matsuki didn't respond. She remained focused on removing the cat's tongue. "You." Tokage stepped closer and saw exactly what Matsuki was doing. His expression shifted immediately. By all rights, as a combat instructor, Tokage should have reprimanded Matsuki for this behavior. But instead of scolding her, he began offering guidance. "You know, you should take better care of that knife. The oils will corrode it otherwise." Huh, who knew cat tongues were so greasy? He completely ignored the fact that Matsuki had killed a cat. Even Matsuki was startled by Tokage's reaction. She didn't care about being discovered but being praised instead of punished threw her off. Ding. Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1. Pretend you saw nothing and leave before Matsuki and Tokage notice you. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2. Go deeper into the grove and make sure both Matsuki and Tokage know a third party witnessed this. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3. Walk over, condemn Matsuki's actions, and threaten to report her to the principal. Reward, 20 fusion points. Looking at the options, Byakuya didn't hesitate. He immediately chose option 1. Before either Matsuki or Tokage noticed him, he quietly slipped away as if he'd seen nothing. Sure, option 3 offered decent points but the aftermath wasn't worth it. Both Matsuki and Tokage were seriously disturbed individuals. Tokage's reputation spoke for itself. He'd tortured Yamori so relentlessly that he'd broken him psychologically. And Matsuki? Her behavior in the original story was downright terrifying. Yes, her childhood trauma being abused by her parents had warped her. But Byakuya still intended to steer clear. Collecting cat tongues was just the beginning. Later, her obsession with Sasaki Highs would spiral into full-blown Yandere madness, complete with acts only a true obsessive would commit. So Byakuya would rather forfeit those 20 fusion points than get entangled with these two. His strength meant he didn't fear them, but unnecessary complications were best avoided. Ding. Host has completed option 1. Reward, 1 fusion point. Still, based on how things were unfolding, what came next would be Juzo Suzuya getting framed. Tokage not only praised Matsuki's behavior but also gave her his own knife and then covered for her by pinning the cat killings on Suzuya. Suzuya was already an outcast who kept to himself, and his self-harming tendencies made him an easy scapegoat. No one questioned whether he might have violent tendencies. According to the day's schedule. Morning, a Quinqua practical session. Afternoon, a light combat training class. Quinqua training was Byakuya's main reason for being here. At the training grounds, the equipment for today's lesson was already laid out, multiple Quinquas stored inside a single case. Byakuya had wondered how so many Quinquas could fit in one container, but then he noticed they were all identical dagger-shaped weapons, small enough to mass-produce. The combat instructor began his explanation. Each of these Quinquas is called Hirako 176. They're B-rated Quinquas. The designation means 76 identical daggers were manufactured from the same Kagun. For this class, you'll start with dagger-type Quinquas. Because daggers were compact and simple to make, they could be easily mass-produced. Larger Quinquashits, spears, or ones that could shift between sword and shield forms were far harder to produce. Most of those were one-of-a-kind, crafted from a single Kagun. It was the same combat instructor from the firearms session. He immediately handed one of the Hirako 176 daggers to Byakuya. "Amaha, you go first." He'd taken a particular interest in Byakuya and wanted to see how the young man handled a Quinqua. 25, Chapter 25, Half-Humans. Understood. Byakuya nodded and accepted the Quinqua from the instructor. It was a white dagger with an unusual texture, noticeably heavier than an ordinary blade. Quinquas weren't made from standard materials. Besides Ghoul Kagun and Kakuhao, they incorporated specialized components like Quinqua steel, a memory alloy metal. Ding. Host has used a Quinqua for the first time. Reward, 1 fusion point. The instructor hadn't specified how to use the dagger, so Byakuya relied on his own combat instincts. His first thought was to treat it like a kunao suitable for both close-quarters combat and ranged throwing. Having fused with Uchiha Madara's taijutsu, Byakuya had inherited Madara's mastery of kunao techniques as well. Without hesitation, he hurled the Hirako 176 toward a large boulder in the distance. With Madara's abilities backing him, throwing a dagger was effortless. His form was flawless, and his accuracy was pinpoint. The dagger struck the boulder dead center. Since Quinquas were forged from Kagun, they possessed power and durability on par with Ghoul predatory organs. Combined with Byakuya's considerable strength, the impact shattered the boulder completely more devastating than a regular bullet. And that made sense. Ordinary bullets were useless against ghouls, but quinquas could inflict real damage. The combat instructor's eyebrows shot up. The other trainees stood slack-jawed. Kurona clicked her tongue softly. Watching Byakuya's performance, she already knew, today, she and Nashiro would be overshadowed by him yet again. Kurona, he really is impressive, Nashiro murmured, her expression neutral. To do that on his first time using a quinqua. I'll admit he's strong in this area, Kurona replied coolly. But these aren't the only things that determine final rankings. You've trained with daggers before, haven't you? The instructor's voice carried a note of admiration. Yes. I've practiced with similar weapons. Byakuya nodded. He'd inherited Madara's abilities, so anything Madara had trained in was essentially part of his own experience now. Otherwise, explaining his textbook-perfect technique would be impossible. Raw talent alone couldn't account for it. Excellent. Your skills are truly exceptional. The instructor praised him openly. Even someone experienced with daggers would struggle on their first attempt with a quinqua. The weight was different, the handling was different, anyone would need time to adjust. Yet Byakuya had performed flawlessly on his very first try. He was undeniably gifted. For the rest of the session, trainees practiced throwing daggers at targets and striking air or wooden dummies. Sparring was off the table. Quinquas were too dangerous. Using them in live combat exercises risked serious injury to inexperienced trainees. Byakuya excelled in every drill, whether close combat or ranged throws, thanks to Madara's inherited abilities. As the class wound down, Byakuya approached the instructor. Sir, would it be possible for me to keep this quinqua? The Hiriko 176th feels really natural in my hand. I'd like to hold on to it. His goal was simple, obtain a quinqua of his own. The instructor scratched his head. That's not permitted under the rules. Trainees can only use quinquas during class. Outside of that, they're generally off limits. I see. Byakuya wasn't surprised. He'd only been testing the waters. After all, even active CCG investigators didn't automatically qualify for quinquas. Not everyone had clearance to carry one. Seeing Byakuya's interest, the instructor who had already been paying close attention to him gave the matter some thought. There might be one way. During field internships, trainees are temporarily issued quinquas. But internships are dangerous, so first years aren't usually recommended for them. Internships? You mean fighting ghouls? Byakuya asked. Exactly. Every trainee must complete an internship before graduation. You'd be accompanied by experienced investigators, so it's not as terrifying as it sounds. The instructor elaborated. Could I start my internship early, even as a new student? Byakuya pressed. The sooner he completed an internship, the faster he could join the CCG officially. That's allowed. The 2-year program isn't a strict requirement. If you demonstrate real combat capability against ghouls, you can graduate early and become a full investigator. The internship rules are flexible. The instructor then added something off-topic. There are prodigies within the CCG who never trained at the academy at all. Some of them are so strong they barely seem human. I understand. Byakuya nodded without comment. He knew immediately who the instructor meant. The half-humans from Sunlit Garden. Half-humans possessed physical abilities far superior to ordinary humans. The strongest among them, like Kishao Arima, were virtually invincible. The trade-off was a drastically shortened lifespan, only half or even a third of a normal human's. But the CCG's human members didn't know those prodigies were actually half-humans. If possible, I'd like to begin my internship soon. Byakuya stated his intentions clearly. The instructor's expression grew serious. As long as you've thought it through, there's no problem. There's actually an internship batch opening soon. If I remember correctly, the assignment involves accompanying Special Class Arima on a mission to Ward 24. Special Class Arima. Byakuya was mildly surprised. He hadn't expected to encounter Kishao Arima this quickly. The instructor nodded, reverence evident in his eyes. That's right, the White Reaper, the undefeated ghoul investigator, Kishao Arima himself. An internship under his supervision would be significantly safer. 26, Chapter 26, Juzu Suzuya. Kishao Arima lived up to his title as a ghoul investigator who had never known defeat, and undeniably the CCG's strongest combatant. Many investigators idolized Arima, and the combat instructor before Byakuya was no exception. Thank you for your help, instructor. Byakuya said. Having the instructor's assistance with his internship application would certainly make things easier. I'm confident you have what it takes to pass. Just focus on completing the internship safely. The combat instructor continued, don't worry too much about standing out, your safety comes first. From a career standpoint, an impressive internship performance would benefit the instructor as well. But a student's safety mattered more. Since Byakuya and the instructor weren't speaking privately, Kurona and Nashiro had overheard everything. They immediately tensed up and approached. If Byakuya excelled during the internship, their chances of surpassing him would shrink even further. They had to participate and outperform him. Instructor, Nashiro and I would also like to join the internship. Kurona spoke up at once. Both of you as well. The instructor seemed mildly surprised. 3 people should be fine. I'll try to secure the spots. Under normal circumstances, first-year students at the Ghoul Countermeasures Institute would only be assigned internships near the end of their program, while Academy students did theirs at the end of their second year. Early internships were exceptions-limited slots that required formal applications. Then Byakuya recalled a detail from the original story. Before officially joining the CCG, Juzu Suzuya had completed an internship in Ward 24 under Arima's supervision. However, since Suzuya was a student at the one-year institute rather than the two-year academy, he could only start as a rank 3 investigator after graduation. Given Suzuya's abilities, a rank 2 position would have been entirely justified. Shortly after, the Quinqua practical session concluded. By the way, I feel like you two have had it out for me since the beginning. Before leaving, Byakuya addressed Kurona and Nashiro. By the beginning, he meant before he'd even said get good to them. He'd already sensed their hostility back then. Both sisters remained silent, apparently unwilling to answer. Their evasiveness only suggested there was something behind it. Byakuya considered the possibilities. Could it be related to Dr. Kanu? By this point in the timeline, Akihiro Kanu had already forcibly taken over Yasuhisa Naneo's house, the twins' family home, using its basement as his secret laboratory. Unaware of the truth, Kurona and Nashiro called Kanu father. Kanu had likely manipulated them somehow, though in reality he viewed the sisters as nothing more than test subjects for his artificial one-eyed ghoul experiments. Since they weren't willing to talk, Byakuya didn't press further. With the combat instructor's help, Byakuya and the Yasuhisa sisters soon received their answer. Their course schedules changed accordingly, all in preparation for the upcoming internship. Basic theory classes were temporarily suspended, replaced by specialized courses on ghoul extermination, Ghoul weaknesses, vulnerabilities of different Kagun types, feeding habits, and so on. Students selected for early internship were also assigned to a dedicated classroom. This gave Byakuya his first look at who would be joining him. Besides Kurona and Nashiro, there was Juzu Suzuya, plus 2 male students he didn't recognize. The child with white hair, dark red eyes, and almost feminine features, that was Juzu Suzuya. Wearing slippers in the classroom, small and slight of frame, with strange stitches visible across his body. Suzuya looked less attractive in the anime, but in the manga he was prettier than most girls. Despite class being about to start, Suzuya sat there with a completely carefree, languid expression, using needle and thread to perform human embroidery on his own skin. As if he felt no pain at all, he seemed to genuinely enjoy it. This was exactly the Juzu Suzuya Byakuya remembered. Very much on brand. The classroom dynamics were interesting too. Kurona, Nashiro, and the 2 unfamiliar boys had all deliberately distanced themselves from Suzuya, leaving a wide gap around his seat. Because Suzuya had already been publicly reprimanded by the administration, Tokage had pinned all the cat killings on him, correctly betting that Suzuya's antisocial nature and perpetually indifferent attitude would make him an easy scapegoat. Suzuya wouldn't bother explaining himself. He didn't care what others thought. That made him the perfect fall guy. The twins and the 2 boys had developed their prejudice against Suzuya because of this incident. Byakuya was the only one who'd chosen a seat relatively close to Suzuya. Alright, class is starting. The lecturer entered the room. When class ended, one of the male students, a guy with a buzz cut, took the initiative to introduce himself to everyone. They all exchanged names, except for Suzuya, who was left out entirely. Even without the cat incident, Suzuya's unsettling behavior kept most people at a distance. So you're Amaha-kun. Nice to meet you. After the 2 boys finished introducing themselves to Byakuya, they simply moved on, skipping Suzuya entirely. But Byakuya thought about it for a moment, then walked over to Suzuya and extended his hand with a smile. I'm Amaha Byakuya. Looks like we're going to be teammates. Suzuya seemed surprised that someone had voluntarily approached him. He paused, setting down his needle and thread, and stared at Byakuya's outstretched hand with a puzzled expression. He didn't seem to understand what the gesture meant, though he could sense the goodwill behind it. Just as Suzuya was about to respond, Kurona walked over and interrupted, her tone cold. I'd advise you to stay away from him. He's the one who's been torturing and killing cats. 27, Chapter 27, Kishawa Rima and Squad 0. Hearing Kurona's words, Suzuya had been about to speak but closed his mouth again. In the end, he said nothing. Perhaps it was because this person named Amaha Byakuya hadn't known about the cat killings until just now. Even though Suzuya hadn't actually done those things, he couldn't be bothered to explain. Now that the other person knew, there was nothing left to say. I see. Anyway, you're Suzuya-kun, right? Let's talk more when we get the chance. Byakuya didn't join Kurona in condemning Suzuya. His continued calm demeanor left an unusual impression on Suzuya. Kurona was also surprised that Byakuya could still speak so casually to Suzuya after learning about the accusation. Though Suzuya didn't respond verbally, he gave a small nod. Besides the changes to theory classes, practical sessions now focused primarily on Quinqua training. Byakuya, the Yasuhisa sisters, and the 2 boys all used the Hiriko 1/76, the same Quinqua they'd be issued during the internship. Suzuya used a different weapon, the Scorpion 156, a black knife or dagger B-rated Quinqua made from a Baikaku-type Kagun. This wasn't discrimination. Students from the one-year institute simply used different training equipment than academy students. Both Hirako 176th and Scorpion 156th were B-rated quinquas with comparable power. Byakuya recalled this Scorpion 156th from the original story. It was the quinqua Suzuya used. He'd started with just one, but later stole the remaining 55 from storage. Even now, Suzuya already displayed exceptional talent, demonstrating deep proficiency with the dagger, though still a step below Byakuya. After 3 days of intensive preparation training, Byakuya and the others departed for Ward 24 to begin their internship. Kishao Arima and his team were waiting for them there. Expecting someone of Arima's status to come fetch them personally was out of the question. They weren't VIPs, after all. Now, Byakuya and the others had arrived at Ward 24. More precisely, they stood at the edge of Ward 23. Before them loomed a massive cavern. One of the entrances to Ward 24. 6 figures in white tactical uniforms waited at the entrance. This was Squad 0, led by Kishao Arima. Byakuya recognized all 6, Kishao Arima, Kori Ui, Haro Ihei, Shio Ihei, Yusa Arima, and Rikai Suzu. Take Hirako hadn't joined Squad 0 yet during this period. From left to right, Yusa Arima, Kaneki, unconfirmed, Take Hirako, Kishao Arima, Kori Ui, Haro Ihei, Shio Ihei, Rikai Suzu. This was an elite squad composed almost entirely of half-humans, arguably the CCG's most powerful trump card. The only pure human among them was Kori Ui, an associate special class investigator. Every member possessed exceptional combat ability. Though Shio Ihei, Rikai Suzu, and Yusa Arima appeared young, only 11, 12, and 13 years old respectively as half-humans, their physical capabilities were already approaching their peak at these ages. Half-humans had drastically shortened lifespans. By around age 20, they actually entered a period of declining strength. You must be the interns. Let me count, 1, 2, 6. 6 people. Looks like everyone's here. Kori Ui spoke first. Kori Ui had somewhat feminine features, with slightly long black hair. He stood around 170 centimeters, with a well-proportioned build, though he was definitely male. Still, Kori Ui was tame compared to Shio Ihei. If Kori Ui looked somewhat like a girl, then Shio at this age could easily pass for an adorable little girl. Delicate, pretty features framed by pale blue-white hair. A petite frame barely over 150 centimeters. The white tactical uniform gave him an air of refinement, but he was actually a boy. Rikai Suzu's features resembled Kori Ui somewhat, even sharing a similar hairstyle, though his hair was purple. Being younger, he only stood about 160 centimeters. Yusa Arima matched Rikai's height and build. He shared the surname Arima with Kishao, had refined features, and wore a somewhat gloomy expression, though he was actually a quiet, gentle young man. The only actual girl in Squad 0 was Haro Ihei, the young woman with pink hair and pink eyes. Slender and graceful, her exquisite features possessed an almost bewitching beauty. Haro Ihei. And then there was Kishao Arima himself, Squad 0's captain and the strongest ghoul investigator alive. Tall and lean, wearing glasses, his hair completely white. His handsome features were utterly expressionless, betraying no emotion whatsoever. Yes, I'm Amaha Byakuya, one of the interns. Byakuya nodded in acknowledgement. The Yasuhisa sisters and the others followed with their own introductions. I'm Yasuhisa Kurona. I'm Yasuhisa Nashiro. Suzuya Juzu. Kori Ui verified that the names matched his roster. Since everyone's here, follow us inside. With that, Byakuya and the others followed Squad 0, led by Arima, into Ward 24. As mentioned before, Ward 24 wasn't a normal district. Beyond the cavern entrance lay a seemingly endless underground labyrinth that spiraled ever deeper into the earth. Kori Ui, apparently designated as their guide, spoke up again. Look at the structure of this labyrinth. Can anyone guess what these walls are made of? The labyrinth twisted and wound in every direction. The walls weren't made of ordinary material, they were flesh walls, a grotesque amalgamation of colors that would unsettle anyone with a weak stomach. Kagun, probably. Byakuya answered first. As a transmigrator, he naturally knew all about Ward 24. Correct. Every wall in this labyrinth was created by ghouls using their Kagun. The principle is similar to how quinquas are made, except this technology was developed by ghouls. We haven't been able to crack it, which is why exploring Ward 24 has been so difficult. Kori Ui elaborated further, then praised Byakuya. Amaha Byakuya, your analytical ability is impressive. I don't believe the academy teaches much about Ward 24. Nearby, Kurona felt a flash of irritation. How did this guy know so much? 28, Chapter 28, The Adorable Little Boy. Kori Ui himself had once been the top graduate of the academy, and was the only member of Squad 0 who had actually climbed the ranks through the proper academy system. A genius among pure humans. At just 24 years old, he was already an associate special class, and would soon be promoted to special class. Because of the labyrinth's nature, the terrain heavily favors ghouls. They could ambush you at any moment. We'll protect you as much as possible, but don't let your guard down. Kori Ui continued his warnings to Byakuya and the others. Understood. Byakuya and the group nodded in acknowledgement. From there, they ventured deeper into the underground labyrinth. The shallow levels rarely had ghoul encounters. CCG investigators had explored Ward 24 countless times, especially with Arimathe, undefeated Reaper, leading Squad 0 on regular extermination missions here. The CCG even used Ward 24 as a training ground for newcomers. Most students completed their internships here, led by senior investigators ranked first class or higher. Senior investigators referred to first class, associate special class, and special class ranks, while rank 3, rank 2, and rank 1 were considered junior investigators. With investigators coming and going almost daily, few ghouls dared linger in the upper levels. The atmosphere started out relatively relaxed, without much tension. Shio Ihei even came over to chat with Byakuya. "Let me introduce myself properly, I am Ihei Shio." Shio wore a friendly, adorable smile. His personality was cheerful and outgoing, innocent like a child. Well, Shio was a child. But if you converted his age to a normal human lifespan, he'd be at least 20. Half-humans not only possessed far superior physical abilities, but matured much faster than normal humans. Their metabolisms were also extremely rapid, probably why their lifespans were so short. "Nice to meet you. Though, how should I address you?" Byakuya suddenly realized he wasn't sure what to call Shio. Given Shio's young age, Ihei-san would sound strange. The original story hadn't mentioned Shio's investigator rank either, otherwise, First Class Ihei or Rank 1 Ihei would be the proper form. "That's easy, just call me Shio," Shio said with a grin. "Alright, Shio it is then." Byakuya found Shio remarkably easy to get along with. Sure, it was a shame such a cute face belonged to a boy, but then again, weren't cute boys even better? That was a joke, of course. Seriously speaking, befriending this adorable yet powerful young prodigy could only be beneficial. Despite being the youngest, Shio had actually eliminated the most ghouls among the Squad 0 trio. Whether or not he was the strongest of the three, he was certainly far beyond ordinary investigators. The Squad 0 trio, ages shown are from 3 years after the current timeline. Ding! Host has become friends with Ihei Shio. Reward, 2 fusion points. After just a brief conversation, Byakuya had easily befriended Shio. Rikai Suzu was the quiet type, and Yusa Arima had a reserved, introverted personality. Neither would initiate small talk with someone they just met. Just then, Arima suddenly raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. They all halted immediately. "Ghouls ahead," Arima said, his tone flat. But he showed no intention of engaging. The white briefcase in his hand, the specialized container for Quinquest, remained closed. Byakuya had already spotted the ghoul silhouettes lurking in the darkness ahead. He counted 3. Kori Ui immediately addressed the interns. "Those ghouls are yours to handle. Pair up and work in teams. We'll intervene if anything goes wrong." CCG protocol typically paired senior investigators with junior ones. For example, Rank 1 investigator Kautaro Amon was partnered with first-class Kurio Mato. This exercise was meant to help newcomers adapt to coordinating with partners in combat. Kurona would obviously pair with Nashiro. The two boys were more familiar with each other and teamed up as well. That left Byakuya and Suzuiafe had no other choice. Suzuya hadn't expected anyone to willingly partner with him, so he'd been preparing to go in alone. But then Byakuya spoke up. "Suzuya-kun, we're partners now. When we engage, I'll leave that one's back to you." As he spoke, he pointed at the ghoul radiating the most hostility toward them. Suzuya's expression flickered with surprise, but he quickly recovered. A somewhat feral grin spread across his face. "Got it." Combat seemed to be when he came most alive. With Suzuya's acknowledgement, Byakuya launched the first attack. His explosive speed was startling, a gift from Madara's Taijutsu. Having locked onto their target, Byakuya and Suzuya charged forward. The Yasuhisa sisters, not wanting to fall behind, engaged another ghoul. The third was left to the two boys. Arima and the others observed from the sidelines. If any ghoul proved too strong for the interns, or if danger arose, they would step in. Roughly speaking, interns were only assigned B-rated ghouls. The CCG's threat classification system rated any ghoul capable of manifesting a Kagun as at least B-rated. Conversely, ghouls below B-rated couldn't use their Kagun. Weaker ghouls wouldn't provide meaningful training, while stronger ones were too dangerous. B-rated was the sweet spot. "He's fast. Are the newcomers this time really this good?" Byakuya's initial burst of speed had already impressed Kori Ui. They'd supervised several batches of interns, but Byakuya was the first to give him this sense of astonishment. 29, Chapter 29, Princess Carrie. Well, it makes sense that early internship candidates would be above average. Running into a prodigy occasionally isn't that surprising. Haro Ihei commented. "Go Ama-Hassan." Shio cheered Byakuya on. By now, Byakuya had closed in on his target. He'd noticed from the start that something was off with this ghoul. 3 of them, actually. They seemed to have been starved to the point of madness. Their group was obviously an experienced investigators training newcomers formation. Yet instead of fleeing, these 3 ghouls were drooling, their expressions crazed as they charged forward. This wasn't stupidity from hunger, it was the manifestation of ghoul starvation. When ghouls went too long without human flesh, they entered an agonizing state of hunger. As time passed, they gradually lost their sanity, attacking anyone in sight regardless of who they were. Even humans, when starving to death, had been known to resort to cannibalism, let alone ghouls, who possessed power far beyond humans and couldn't control their loss of reason. It was like being on the verge of starvation with a living food source right in front of you. It looked like your own kind, but smelled incredibly delicious, and you had the power to kill it easily. What would you do? Maybe you could resist at first, but once sanity slipped away, the choice was no longer yours. Of course, this didn't excuse ghouls hunting humans, it simply explained the dynamic. Eat, you. The ghoul facing Byakuya was muttering incoherently, words slurring together. Its Kakugan were more grotesque than a normal ghoul's, and the Rinkaku tentacles emerging from its waist writhed erratically, a sign of madness. Not every ghoul was as fortunate as those in Ward 20, where Yoshimura had created a sanctuary. Every ghoul who sought refuge in Antioku received just enough scavenged corpse meat to survive. In other wards, especially the chaotic Ward 24, even scavenging scraps was a struggle. The weaker the ghoul, the more likely they were to starve. Simply put, Ward 20 had Yoshimura distributing resources fairly. Everywhere else was survival of the fittest, fail to claim food, and you might become food yourself. As for cannibalism among ghouls, that only caused RC cell levels to spike, increasing strength. It didn't solve hunger. The original story never explicitly stated this, but logically it had to be true. Otherwise, ghouls could just eat each other indefinitely. You bite me, I regenerate quickly, then I bite you, you regenerate, rinse and repeat. If that worked, ghouls would never have food problems. The key was that ghoul cannibalism specifically meant consuming another's kakuhou organ storing RC cells. Eating the kakuhou meant absorbing those RC cells, which strengthened the consumer. Regular flesh didn't count. Byakuya easily dodged the ghoul's frontal attack, closed the distance, and with his right hand gripping the Scorpion 176th, in a reverse grip, drove the dagger straight into one of the ghoul's kakugan. That eye went blind instantly. Gah! The ghoul screamed in agony. Suzuya wasn't as fast as Byakuya, but still moved quicker than most. He'd caught up by now. Following Byakuya's earlier instructions, he seized the moment while the ghoul was blinded and distracted, circling behind to hurl his dagger. Against a stationary target, hitting the kakuhou was easy for someone of his skill. The Scorpion 156th pierced through the ghoul's tough skin and struck its greatest weakness, the kakuhou. Once a ghoul's kakuhou was critically damaged, it lost virtually all combat ability. Even its regeneration would shut down, since that power stemmed from the kakuhou itself. Seeing the kakuhou was compromised, Byakuya moved in to finish it. He lunged forward and drove his dagger straight through the ghoul's heart. Ding! Host has defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. As the ghoul collapsed, Byakuya received his reward. Expressionless, he retrieved Suzuya's Scorpion 156th from the ghoul's kakuhou and returned it. Nice work. Byakuya raised his hand for a high five. Suzuya didn't quite understand the gesture. He hesitated before mimicking Byakuya and raising his own hand. Slap. Only when Byakuya's palm met his did he grasp what he was supposed to do. Byakuya handed back the Scorpion 156th with a reverse grip. The two prepared to return to Arima's group. As for the other 4 and their battles, that wasn't their business to manage. If anything went wrong, Squad 0 would handle it. But just then, the moment Kurona realized Byakuya and Suzuya had already finished, she lost focus. She cared too much about keeping pace. Byakuya noticed immediately. Kurona had actually gotten distracted mid-battle, glancing his way. Worse, the ghoul she and Nashiro were fighting was about to exploit that opening. Kurona probably couldn't dodge in time. Unfortunately, Nashiro was also poorly positioned to intercept. In that instant, Byakuya and Arima moved almost simultaneously. Byakuya chose the direct approach, rushing in, scooping up Kurona, and retreating immediately. Arima opened his other briefcase black and gold one and drew out Narukami, an S+ rated Yukaku Quinqua. As Byakuya swept Kurona up in a princess carry and pulled back, a bolt of lightning streaked past him and struck the ghoul. Violent electrical energy rampaged through the ghoul's body. The devastating power extinguished its life signs in an instant. Everything happened so fast that Kurona only now processed what had occurred. When she realized Byakuya was holding her in a princess carry, her pupils dilated and a blush crept across her cheeks. Chapter 30, Narukami. When that bolt of lightning came from behind, Byakuya's sharp reflexes made him glance back instinctively. He saw Arima holding Narukami in its cannon form. Narukami was a high-grade Quinqua with an overall rating of S+. Unlike Byakuya's simple B-rated weapon, Narukami could freely switch between 3 attack modes. Cannon mode fires long-range electrical bolts. Pincer mode releases multiple spherical electrical projectiles. Blade mode concentrates electricity at the sword's tip for devastating melee strikes. A versatile, extremely lethal high-grade Quinqua that Arima used as his primary weapon. To date, no ghoul had survived Narukami's attacks. Though, this Quinqua was made from the Kagun of Tuka Kirishima's mother Hikari Kirishima. Hikari's maiden name was Yamo Hikari. She was Renji Yamo's older sister. Both siblings possessed RC cells with a unique electrical property, a special talent that set them apart from ordinary ghouls. The exact mechanism was unclear. Just as Tatara of Aogiri tree had a special flame attribute, it might be some kind of genetic mutation. Tuka and Ayato Kirishima hadn't inherited their mother's electrical abilities. Still marveling at Narukami's terrifying power, Byakuya momentarily forgot to put Kurona down. Kurona didn't show much resistance either. Her body had gone stiff, her cheeks slightly flushed, a mix of shock and embarrassment on her face. She understood Byakuya had acted to save her. She wasn't the type to be unreasonable and she certainly wouldn't do something like slap him in a knee-jerk reaction. But still, he'd been holding her for quite a while now. Her hands had nowhere to go. Her mind was so scrambled she could barely feel her own arms. Finally, she couldn't hold back. How long are you planning to hold me like this? Ah, sorry. Byakuya immediately set her down. You don't really need to apologize. Kurona murmured quietly. Kurona. Nashiro rushed over, worry written all over her face. I'm fine, but I ruined things for us. Kurona's voice was heavy with self-reproach. She'd nearly gotten herself killed by a ghoul and had to be rescued by Byakuya. That meant both she and Nashiro had failed. And it was her fault Nashiro failed too. That doesn't matter. I'm just glad you're okay, Kurona. Nashiro cared far more about her sister's safety than whether they'd succeeded. Byakuya returned to where Arima stood, with the Yasuhisa sisters following behind. Embarrassed by their poor performance, both kept their heads slightly lowered. Arima still hadn't returned Narukami to its briefcase. The other pair of boys wasn't faring well either. I think I might have been unnecessary just now. Byakuya smiled awkwardly. Given how perfectly timed Arima's Narukami strike was, even if Byakuya hadn't grabbed Kurona, the ghoul wouldn't have had a chance to hurt her. But Kurona didn't see it that way. Byakuya's intention had been to save her, and that was what mattered. No, you did well. Arima said evenly. Hearing Arima praise Byakuya, Haru Ihei immediately took notice. After all, what she wanted most was recognition from Arima. She'd worked incredibly hard for it. She didn't say anything, but her gaze fixed on Byakuya in silence. Byakuya could feel Haru's stare. He knew exactly why she was looking at him that way, best to just pretend he didn't notice. You really did do well. This proves you're not only capable of eliminating ghouls, but also of protecting your teammates when facing them. Honestly, your individual ability exceeded my expectations. Kori Ui added his own praise. Of course, Suzuya Juzu performed admirably as well. From this single engagement, he could tell both newcomers had exceptional potential, especially Byakuya, who'd immediately demonstrated combat ability beyond what most rank 2 investigators could muster. As for Yasuhisa Kurona, you need to seriously reflect on what happened. Losing focus while fighting a ghoul is a critical mistake. Never let it happen again. While praising Byakuya and Suzuya, Kori Ui didn't forget to admonish Kurona. Nashiro's performance had been acceptable, no lecture needed there. If Kurona hadn't lost concentration, the sisters' excellent teamwork would have let them quickly gain control and defeat their ghoul. Finally, the two boys had performed adequately despite a more difficult fight. They'd made no major errors and ultimately succeeded. In other words, of the 3 pairs, only Kurona and Nashiro had failed. Kurona couldn't help feeling dejected. Even if Nashiro didn't care, she still blamed herself. Sensing her sister's low spirits, Nashiro grew concerned. Kurona. Don't take a single mistake too hard. Just make sure you don't repeat it next time. Byakuya offered some encouragement. Easy for you to say. But Kurona quickly reconsidered. Actually, you're right. The internship isn't over yet. Byakuya's words seemed to help. Kurona pulled herself together, determined to redeem herself next time. Looks like you're all ready to continue. Let's move on. Kori Ui gave the order. Amaha-san is really impressive. Both Kori Ui-senpai and Arima-san praised him. As they proceeded deeper into the labyrinth, Shio came over to chat with Byakuya again. Don't think I don't know. Squad 0 is the elite of the elite. You're definitely stronger than me, Shio. Byakuya replied casually. No way. Shio grinned, the happiness from being complimented showing plainly on his face. Meanwhile, behind Byakuya, Kurona had been subtly edging closer. She wanted to ask him something, but Shio was in the way. She also didn't know Shio's actual gender. Judging by appearance alone, she assumed Shio was a girl. Watching Shio stick close to Byakuya, chatting and laughing, only made Kurona more inexplicably irritated. 31, Chapter 31, a little dishonest. Kurona just wished that Shio kid would hurry up and leave already. Kurona, you seem really fixated on that guy. Nashiro had noticed her sister's odd behavior and leaned in to whisper. Only a twin sister would be that perceptive. Most people wouldn't pick up on it. Kurona stiffened slightly. Is it that obvious? I just want to ask him something, that's all. Nashiro didn't question the explanation. Then just go ask him. Or is it embarrassing with other people around? A little. But I'm not in a hurry. It's fine. Kurona was being somewhat dishonest. She'd just been wishing Shio would get out of the way. The truth was, she didn't want Nashiro to think she cared too much about this. After a while, Shio finally finished chatting with Byakuya and returned to the front of the formation. Kurona immediately seized the opportunity, moving to Byakuya's side. Something on your mind? Byakuya noticed her approach and asked. Well, why did you save me earlier? I've been treating you like a rival, and I haven't exactly been friendly. This had been bothering Kurona. He'd reacted so quickly to save her without even a moment's hesitation. Byakuya smiled slightly. Do I really need a special reason to save someone? Besides, it would have been a shame if something happened to such a cute girl, wouldn't it? The word cute made Kurona's cheeks flush. He'd called her cute. What are you even saying? Keep your pointless flattery to yourself. Kurona tried to mask her embarrassment, but the blush on her cheeks had already given her away. Being unexpectedly called cute, of course it made her happy. How is it flattery? You really are cute. Byakuya said this with a completely straight face. He was simply stating facts. Even before he'd transmigrated, the first time he'd seen Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa, he'd thought the twin sisters were adorable. Such a pity what happened to them later in the original story. Kurona had been trying to play it cool, but Byakuya's follow-up only made her more flustered. I get it, so please stop talking. She was so embarrassed she had to cut him off. Though Byakuya and Kurona were speaking quietly, Nashiro was close enough to hear. And watching her sister's changing expressions, Nashiro felt something was definitely off. Kurona had never acted like this around other boys before. In fact, Kurona barely gave other boys the time of day she usually only hung around with Nashiro. But Nashiro was still naive about certain things, so she couldn't quite figure out why Kurona was acting this way around Byakuya. She'd have to ask her sister later. Meanwhile, Suzuya not far away had vaguely noticed that Byakuya and Kurona seemed to be getting along well. But he was even more innocent than Nashiro when it came to these matters. He didn't understand what it meant, so he glanced over a couple of times and then lost interest. Kurona realized she couldn't let this continue. If Byakuya said anything else strange, she was going to become strange too. So she practically fled back to Nashiro's side. Perfect timing. Nashiro quietly asked, Kurona, why are you completely different around him compared to other boys? The question made Kurona's heart skip a beat, though she only showed mild surprise on the surface. Had her reactions been that obvious? Nashiro had seen right through her. And no, not really. I mean, he did just save my life. I can't be as cold to him as I am with other guys. Kurona tried to sound calm, but inwardly she was panicking, and her tone came out somewhat unnatural. Oh, I see, that makes sense. Nashiro accepted her sister's hastily fabricated excuse. She didn't understand romantic feelings, so the thought didn't even cross her mind. Phew, Kurona felt a wave of relief. But at the same time, she realized something was definitely off with her. What was going on? Even treating Byakuya as her savior didn't explain why she'd reacted that strongly. Could it be because? No, how could that be possible? That guy was her rival. Kurona immediately rejected the notion. Whether it was out of embarrassment or something else, only she knew. She forcibly cleared her mind of distracting thoughts. She was still in the middle of an internship, she couldn't afford to be distracted again. But before long, she found herself unable to maintain that focus. Because Shio kept chatting and laughing with Byakuya, and she couldn't help but notice, which only made her more restless. Ding! Host has defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. Ding! Host has defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. Arima's Squad 0 led Byakuya and the others through Ward 24 for several hours. They never ventured too deep into the labyrinth. Going too far would mean encountering higher-level ghouls, which would defeat the purpose of training. Ward 24's underground labyrinth was enormous, spanning nearly all of Tokyo's underground. Even without going deeper, the winding paths meant they rarely crossed the same ground twice. By the end of the day's internship, Byakuya and Suzuya had eliminated 3 ghouls together. Kurona and Nashiro had struggled at first but redeemed themselves later, successfully taking down 2 ghouls. The 2 boys had also eliminated 2, though their overall performance wasn't quite as strong as the sisters. Now, everyone was heading out of Ward 24. It was getting late, even skipping dinner. No one could stay overnight in a place like this. But the internship wasn't over yet. Tomorrow would continue. At the cavern exit, Byakuya and the other trainees prepared to take the subway back. Bye-bye, Amma-Hassan. Shio waved at Byakuya. See you tomorrow, Shio. Byakuya smiled and waved back. Exclamation point. Hearing Byakuya address that little girl by first name, Kurona's attention sharpened immediately. 32 Chapter 32 Direct Approach beats Tsundere. Suzuya and the 2 boys would be returning to stay at the academy's dormitory. Byakuya and the Yasuhisa sisters were heading home. That meant they were taking different subway lines. So Byakuya found himself sharing a train car with Kurona and Nashiro. The 3 sat in a row, Nashiro on the far left, with Kurona in the middle and Byakuya on the right. Since it was rush hour, the subway was packed. The 3 of them were squeezed together, but at least Byakuya was shielding the sisters from the strangers on the other side. Kurona could feel her shoulder pressed against Byakuya's. Her body tensed slightly, but her mind was elsewhere on the matter of Shio. With Nashiro right there, she felt too self-conscious to bring it up. If only Kurona knew Shio was actually a boy, she wouldn't be so worked up. But her chance came soon enough. Perhaps tired from the hours spent in Ward 24, Nashiro leaned against Kurona's shoulder and gradually drifted off to sleep. Once Kurona confirmed her sister was deeply asleep, she turned to Byakuya. So, you seem pretty close with that girl named Shio. You've known each other less than a day and you're already calling her by her first name. Byakuya turned to look at Kurona. Seeing the clearly bothered expression on her face, he understood immediately. This was, definitely jealousy, wasn't it? Right on cue, the system chimed in. Ding! Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1. Tell Kurona that Shio Ihei is actually a boy, then do nothing else. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2. Lowest emotional intelligence moment. Mock Kurona for not being able to tell boys from girls. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3. Directly ask Kurona if she's jealous. Reward, 20 fusion points. Byakuya didn't need to think twice. So instead of clarifying Shio's gender first, he asked directly, wait, are you jealous? Ding. Host has completed option 3. Reward, 20 fusion points. Huh. Kurona froze for a moment before snapping back. How could that be? Her flustered denial and the faint blush creeping across her cheeks told the whole story. But she quickly regained her composure and went on the offensive. I never realized you were this full of yourself. Byakuya, having seen through everything, simply smiled and said nothing. He had no intention of pressing further just yet. Actually, you've had it wrong from the start. That kid named Ihei Shio. Not a girl, he's a boy. Only now did Byakuya clear up her misunderstanding. Huh, you're saying he's a boy. Kurona's voice rose with surprise. Yeah, he definitely looks like a cute little girl, but he's actually male. Byakuya confirmed. I see. Kurona was genuinely shocked. She never would have guessed someone who looked like that wasn't a girl. But a wave of relief washed through her. She no longer cared about Shio's relationship with Byakuya. By the way, if you'd like me to call you by your first name too, I'd be happy to. Byakuya continued. Who said I wanted that? But if you want to, I suppose I could reluctantly allow it. Kurona immediately shot back. Great, since you've agreed, I'll call you Kurona-san from now on. Byakuya smiled and said plainly, that way it's easier to distinguish you from Yasuhisa-san over there. He was referring to Nashiro, of course. Direct approach beats Tsundere. Byakuya's straightforward words completely won the exchange. Kurona froze, her cheeks flushing bright red. Oh okay. She didn't actually mind him calling her by her first name, so despite her embarrassment, she nodded in acceptance. Soon, it was time for Kurona and Nashiro's stop. Nashiro had woken up on her own, rubbing her eyes as she realized they'd arrived. This is our stop. We'll be going now. As the train doors opened, Kurona said a quick goodbye to Byakuya. Bye, Kurona-san. And goodbye to you too, Yasuhisa-san. Without Nashiro's permission, Byakuya naturally wouldn't use her first name. Goodbye. Kurona immediately grabbed Nashiro's hand and hurried off without looking back. Having Byakuya call her by her first name in front of Nashiro was embarrassing enough. If he'd said anything more, she wouldn't have been able to handle it. Still groggy from her nap, Nashiro hadn't fully registered how Byakuya had addressed them. It wasn't until the train started moving again that it clicked. Kurona, did he just call you Kurona-san? Nashiro asked suddenly. Kurona nodded, unable to deny it. She didn't bother explaining further. Explaining might make Nashiro think Byakuya really was as self-absorbed as she'd implied. You don't seem to mind at all. Nashiro was surprised. Being called by her first name should have made Kurona resist, but she showed no sign of objection. What was going on with her sister? She was becoming almost unrecognizable. It's fine, I guess. He did save my life, after all. Kurona was already using this excuse for the second time. Kurona, you've really been acting strange today. Can you tell me what's going on? Nashiro's concern was evident. Hearing this, conflict flickered in Kurona's eyes. She hesitated about whether to confide in Nashiro. It would be so embarrassing to say out loud. After much deliberation, she finally made up her mind. Nashiro, I think I might like that guy a little. 33, Chapter 33, Darling. Having just stammered through that sentence, Kurona quickly added, of course, I said might. And it's only maybe a tiny bit of that feeling. Her words left Nashiro completely stunned. Though she didn't know much about romance, she at least understood what like meant. After all, she was 18 years old. The idea that her sister might like Amaha Byakuya seemed unbelievable. Though it wasn't completely incomprehensible, Byakuya had saved her sister, and Kurona was certainly at the age where she might start feeling attracted to boys. But still, wasn't this a bit fast? Kurona, why do you like him? Is it just because he saved you? Nashiro wanted to understand her sister's reasoning. It's definitely not that simple, but I can't really explain it clearly. I just might have a tiny bit of feelings for him, Kurona said. She was already starting to regret telling Nashiro. Once she'd started, she couldn't stop. That's good then. I was worried you'd fallen for him too easily. Nashiro felt relieved. Her concern had been that Kurona might give her heart away too readily. If you really do like him, I'll definitely support you, Kurona. A small smile appeared on Nashiro's face. I said it's only maybe a little bit. I didn't say I definitely like him. Kurona muttered. Nashiro didn't say more. Her sister was being a bit dishonest, but she was so cute and pretty she'd definitely be fine. But, Nashiro suddenly realized she needed to learn more about Amaha Byakuya. Otherwise, she couldn't feel comfortable entrusting Kurona to him. By the time Byakuya got home, it was already past 6 p.m. There were still ingredients in the fridge, so he didn't need to go shopping. But just as he reached his front door, he spotted an unexpected figure waiting there. It was Rise Kamishiro. Passers-by couldn't help but steal glances at the beautiful woman who seemed to be waiting for someone. Rise-san, what are you doing at my place? Byakuya asked, puzzled. Rise's expression shifted to something pitiful and vulnerable, her voice soft and wronged. Darling, you're finally back. How much longer were you going to leave me out here? The moment he heard darling, Byakuya knew something was off. He obviously wasn't going to take that literally. Rise was clearly up to something. Wait a second. Byakuya tried to stop her, but it was already too late. Rise's act and her pitiful expression immediately drew the attention of nearby pedestrians. Did you hear that? That guy's been keeping his girlfriend locked outside. Seriously? With such a gorgeous woman, how could he be so heartless? Damn it, how does a jerk like that get such a cute girlfriend with a perfect figure? Life's so unfair. Most of the men shot Byakuya looks of envy and resentment. The women regarded him as if he were scum. Byakuya suddenly understood what it felt like to be publicly condemned. He was both exasperated and resigned. Why had Rise suddenly decided to mess with him like this? Not wanting to say anything more, he quickly pulled Rise inside. Rise-san, really? You didn't come all this way just to mess with me, did you? Byakuya didn't dwell on what had just happened, simply asking with a helpless expression. Your university schedule can't be that packed, can it? I didn't see you all day, and when I came here, you weren't home either. Rise's tone turned accusatory. Clearly, because Byakuya hadn't shown up at Antioku today, she'd come looking for him. University isn't that busy, but I'm not free every single day either. Byakuya explained with a wry smile. He'd thought Rise had come for something important. Turns out it was just because he'd skipped Antioku for one day. Before Byakuya even finished speaking, Rise moved in close to sniff him, just like before. This time she was even more aggressive, pushing him down onto the nearby sofa and climbing on top of him, shamelessly inhaling his scent. This wasn't just about checking for other ghoul scents, she was savoring the tantalizing aroma of his body. Tantalizing deserved quotation marks, since it was specifically enticing to ghouls. Immediately, Rise detected a strong, mixed scent of ghouls on him as if he'd just escaped from a ghoul nest. Her expression shifted. She locked eyes with him, their noses nearly touching. Why do you smell so strongly of ghouls? So many different scents mixed together. What were you doing today? Can I keep that private? Byakuya asked. No, Rise said immediately. Everyone has secrets, don't you? Byakuya replied calmly. Rise was silent for a moment. Fair point. She finally got off him. Based on her tone and the subtle shift in her expression, Byakuya sensed Rise might be unhappy. Maybe he was imagining it. Rise quickly moved on. Anyway, there's something else, the daily thing we do. She'd made it clear enough. She wanted to taste part of his body again. Fine, but let me eat dinner first. I'm hungry. Byakuya headed toward the kitchen. Rise followed him in, apparently curious about what was in his kitchen. But just as Byakuya tied on his apron and prepared to start cooking, Rise suddenly hugged him from behind and whispered in his ear, "How about we play a game?" "What kind of game?" Byakuya asked casually. "While I'm tasting your ear, let's see if you can still cook a proper meal. That way I get what I want too." Rise's lips curved mischievously. 34, Chapter 34, Losing has consequences. Can I refuse? From Rise's tone alone, Byakuya could tell she was planning something devious. "No, if you don't agree, I won't let go." Rise's arms around his waist tightened. "Whatever, do as you like," Byakuya said with a shrug. Only then did Rise release him. As Byakuya began cooking rice and preparing dishes, Rise commenced her assault. At first, she targeted his earlobe, but this time Byakuya was mentally prepared. He showed no obvious reaction, and his hands continued their work undisturbed. Seeing this, Rise shifted her attention to the middle of his ear. The moment her tongue lightly grazed it, Byakuya couldn't help but react. The center of the ear was even more sensitive than the lobe. Before long, Byakuya couldn't take it anymore. He turned his head toward her. "You know, doesn't this gross you out at all?" "Not really." Rise wore a slightly wicked smile. "By the way, you lost the game." Fine, I lost. Now please let me finish cooking," Byakuya said with resignation. "Since you lost, there has to be a penalty. I haven't decided what it'll be yet, I'll let you know when I figure it out," Rise said with a grin. "As long as it's not too outrageous. We'll deal with it when we get there." Byakuya didn't dwell on it, focusing instead on preparing his dinner. Even if Rise made an unreasonable demand later, he could simply refuse. She wasn't strong enough to force him. Afterward, Rise stayed in the kitchen but stopped bothering him, watching quietly as he cooked. Byakuya used a small rice cooker to make just enough for himself, paired with simple tomato scrambled eggs and braised beef with potatoes. He brought the fragrant meal to the dining table though to Rise, the smell was anything but pleasant. It looks pretty good, but unfortunately I can't eat any of it. Rise remarked flatly. Since ghouls can't eat most human food, there's not much to be done about it. Byakuya said. But maybe someday someone will develop food that ghouls can actually eat. Technology keeps advancing. He'd said most because there were exceptions. Coffee, for instance. There was nothing inherently special about it, yet ghouls could drink it and taste it just like humans could. Water was obvious. As for beer, the original story had a scene where Yamo got drunk, proving ghouls could handle alcohol too. But that was it. Everything else, food and various drinks, was off limits. That's just wishful thinking. Rise held no hope for such a thing. I think there's a real chance. Byakuya said. The reason no ghoul-compatible food substitute had been developed was because the Washiyu clan had been secretly sabotaging such efforts. The Washiyus didn't want the conflict between humans and ghouls to diminish, that would hurt their interests. Despite being a ghoul family themselves, the Washiyus had founded the CCG, very organization dedicated to hunting ghouls. Yes, the CCG was established by the Washiyu clan. That achievement had earned them immense prestige in Japan. Today, the Washiyus lacked nothing: status, reputation, wealth, all thanks to the CCG. Consider this: if a food substitute for human flesh were developed, ghouls would no longer need to risk their lives hunting humans while being pursued by investigators. That would weaken the CCG's influence and, by extension, the Washiyu clans. So the Washiyus would never allow that to happen. What they needed was a perpetual stalemate between humans and ghouls. On the human side, they had the CCG staffed not just by human investigators, but also half-humans they'd cultivated, like Arima, Hero, and Shio. They also had another group of half-humans in a shadowy organization called V, operating under the Washiyu banner. Similar to the Umbu in Naruto, V worked exclusively in the shadows. Unlike the public-facing CCG, V specialized in eliminating anyone who might disrupt the balance between humans and ghouls, or threaten Washiyu rule, whether ghoul or human. Arima himself was one of V's cleaners. Tuka's mother, Hikari Kirishima, had been eliminated by Arima because her growing strength had become a perceived threat to the Washiyus. In short, if the Washiyu clan ever collapsed, ghoul-compatible food would probably be developed very quickly, as proven by the original story's ending. Byakuya had finished dinner, but Rise showed no signs of leaving. It's getting late. Aren't you heading home? Byakuya asked while washing the dishes. That man in the clown mask you mentioned, I actually know who he is. Rise suddenly brought up the steel beam incident. As it happens, he attends the same university as you. She'd only recently recovered some fragmented memories from that day. The severity of her injuries had caused partial amnesia. Once those fragments returned, she'd recalled seeing the clown on the construction site rooftop. The build and the specific mask design, she'd recognized him as Nimura Furuta. She didn't know why Furuta had done it, but she knew to treat him as an enemy. You're saying he's at Kamiya University? So you know him? Byakuya feigned ignorance. He couldn't reveal his transmigrator status. She had to avoid giving anyone reason to suspect. Yes, we're actually quite well acquainted. But even if I told you who he was, you wouldn't recognize him. Rise nodded slowly. So someone you know tried to kill you. What are you going to do? Byakuya asked. Leave things as they are for now. If Ward 20 becomes unsafe, I'll just flee to another district. I'm used to it by now. Rise said casually. Ding. Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, show no concern for Rise's situation. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, declare that you'll protect Rise. Reward, 20 fusion points. Option 3, elope with Rise, immediately leave Ward 20 together. Reward, 30 fusion points. 35, Chapter 35, Kabadon. Looking at the 3 options, Byakuya made his decision instantly. I don't think you need to keep running. I can protect you, can't I? Ding. Host has completed option 2. Reward, 20 fusion points. Though option 3 offered more points, Byakuya deemed it unnecessary. Furuta wasn't the only one after Rise. Aojirai Tree and the Washiyu clan were watching her too. Running wouldn't help no matter where they went. Unless they fled Japan entirely, but that wasn't realistic. Every country's customs had RC detection gates. No nation would allow ghouls to cross borders freely. Even though Rise carried Washiyu bloodline, which could bypass the gates, that only worked in Japan. The Washiyus had tampered with Japan's RC gates so they wouldn't trigger for ghouls of Washiyu descent. But their influence didn't extend beyond Japan's borders. Even Yoshimura, former V cleaner, had been given special clearance. That's how his daughter Ito could freely enter and exit CCG facilities. You want to protect me? Are you serious? Rise seemed genuinely surprised. Completely serious. Byakuya nodded. But you don't even understand what I'm up against. Rise said. My enemies are terrifying and most of them are stronger than you. You're nowhere near capable of protecting me. She was dismissing his strength outwardly, but inwardly she wanted him to abandon this idea. She didn't believe Byakuya could stand against her enemies. This wasn't looking down on him, it was knowing firsthand how powerful the Washiyu clan truly was. Having escaped from them, Rise understood exactly what she was dealing with. Hearing this, Byakuya stepped forward and placed one hand on the wall beside her head, his tone unusually forceful. Regardless, I'm at least stronger than you. No matter what enemies you're facing, I'm confident I can protect you. His current strength wasn't truly sufficient yet, but he could at least protect himself and rise. And having fused with Uchiha Madara's abilities and possessing a system, how could he not have some pride? Rise's expression flickered with surprise. She hadn't expected Byakuya to suddenly become so assertive. She'd grown accustomed to his easygoing nature these past few days. Recovering quickly, Rise's lips curved upward. I didn't know you had such a forceful side. Since you're so confident, you'd better protect me properly then. She still didn't believe Byakuya could contend with the Washuas. But she didn't dislike this assertive version of him. More importantly, Rise had been fixated on Byakuya's delicious body all along. This way, she could drag him along when she needed to flee, keeping him by her side. She hadn't wanted to involve him in this mess. But since he was so insistent, she never one to claim moral high ground decided she'd simply rely on him. Ding! Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, can't protect anyone, immediately backtrack and avoid future complications with Rise. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 2, ask Rise to stay the night, it's safer than going home alone. Reward, 10 fusion points. Having already made his declaration, going back on his word didn't sit right with Byakuya's character. So he chose option 2 without hesitation. It's already so late. Why don't you just stay here tonight? Byakuya said directly. His composure let him say this with a straight face. Ding! Host has completed option 2. Reward, 10 fusion points. Rise gazed at Byakuya with an almost meaningful look, agreeing without hesitation. Sure. Then something occurred to her. But I didn't bring any change of clothes. Either come with me to get some from my place, or take me shopping for new ones. I've been wanting new clothes anyway. Girls naturally loved pretty clothes, Howls were no exception. Let's go shopping then. The mall's close by. Byakuya said. After washing the remaining dishes, he accompanied Rise out for some shopping. They'd barely taken a few steps from his door when Rise linked her arm through his. Byakuya glanced at her questioningly. You said you'd protect me, right? This way you can do it more thoroughly. Rise smiled as she explained. What she didn't mention was that this also let her better enjoy the scent wafting from his body. Byakuya just smiled and said nothing. To anyone watching, they looked exactly like a couple out for an evening stroll. Soon, Byakuya and Rise arrived at the nearby mall. There were no RC detection gates at places like this, and even if there were, they wouldn't affect Rise anyway. Rise led Byakuya with clear purpose toward a women's clothing store. She seemed to be a regular here, navigating the route with practiced ease. But at the entrance, a saleswoman stopped them. I'm sorry, but only boyfriends are allowed to accompany customers inside. May I ask if you two are? Though the pair were arm in arm, they could be siblings for all she knew. Since the store catered almost exclusively to women, this rule existed to protect customers' privacy. Byakuya was about to suggest finding a different store when Rise spoke first. Of course we're a couple. Then she turned to Byakuya with a sweet smile. Isn't that right, darling? That's right. In this situation, Byakuya could only nod. It wasn't like it caused him any harm. Thank you for your cooperation. Please, come in. The saleswoman welcomed them inside. The store was quite popular, filled with attractive young women browsing the merchandise. But Rise's arrival immediately eclipsed them all. Darling, if your eyes wander too much, I might have to poke them out. Rise said with a smile. Byakuya was speechless. He had no idea what Rise was playing at. She was really committing to this fake couple act. 36, Chapter 36, could Tuka actually like that guy? How does this one look? Rise had started browsing through clothes. She'd picked out her first dress and was showing it to Byakuya before even trying it on. Looks nice. Byakuya replied. What about this one? Rise swapped to a different style. That one's nice too. A similar answer. And this? Also looks good. After several dismissive-sounding responses, Rise's expression soured slightly. Why are all your answers so half-hearted? Can't you take this seriously? I am being serious. I've just never helped a girl pick out clothes before. I don't really have an eye for this. Byakuya scratched his head awkwardly. He didn't even know how to shop for himself. His approach was basically black or white, and if it looks passable, buy it. Asking someone like him to evaluate women's fashion was a tall order. That said, Rise really was here to shop. Byakuya had assumed she was just messing with him for fun. She'd done that before. But watching her hold up dress after dress for his opinion, she clearly meant it. You're not being a very good boyfriend, are you? Rise pouted playfully. Byakuya was momentarily speechless. They were fake dating. What exactly did being a good boyfriend even mean here? But at this point, no one would doubt they were a couple. Rise's acting was flawless. Meanwhile, Tuka Kirishima happened to be passing by this very store with her classmate. She'd been walking alongside Yoriko Kosaka when she glanced sideways and spotted two familiar figures inside. Tuka stopped in her tracks. Tuka-chan. Yoriko asked, puzzled. Sorry. Yoriko, give me a moment. There's something I want to check. Recognizing the two as Byakuya and Rise, Tuka's curiosity was immediately piqued. If Byakuya was still Rise's prey, would that woman really be out shopping for clothes with him at night? And it had been quite a while since Rise first made contact with this human boy. She'd never shown this much patience with anyone before. Tuka genuinely wanted to know what was going on between Rise and this young man. Oh, sure, no problem. Yoriko had no idea what was happening, but she was happy to wait with Tuka. They were best friends, after all. Meanwhile, Byakuya had already noticed Tuka and Yoriko, but he didn't pay them much mind. Right now, Rise was demanding his input. I think white dresses suit you best. Purple would probably look great too. Byakuya offered his opinion. He had an instinctive fondness for white. As for purple, it felt like it would complement Rise's hair and eye color perfectly. I see. Then I'll try these two on first. Rise selected two dresses that matched his suggestions and headed for the fitting room. By now, Tuka had found a spot where she could observe without being easily noticed at a bench provided for waiting customers. Yoriko sat beside her. Curious about what was going on, Yoriko followed Tuka's gaze toward the clothing store. Was there someone in that store Tuka was watching? Tuka-chan, is there someone in there you're interested in? Yoriko asked. Yes. See that woman with purple hair and glasses? And the guy with her? Tuka didn't mind sharing with Yoriko as long as it didn't involve ghoul-related matters. She absolutely didn't want Yoriko to know she was a ghoul. Her best friend would surely be terrified and distance herself. Oh, I see them. That girl is gorgeous. And the guy's pretty handsome too. Yoriko immediately noticed Byakuya and Rise's striking appearances. But then something occurred to her. She turned to look at Tuka. Tuka's intensely focused expression made her curious now. Tuka-chan, could it be, you like that guy? Is that why you're watching so closely? Yoriko couldn't help but voice her suspicion. Given the circumstances, it seemed highly likely. Yes. Tuka's mind was so occupied with watching the pair in the store that she barely registered Yoriko's words and answered reflexively. When she realized what Yoriko had actually asked, her face flushed red. No. I wasn't listening properly just now. I definitely don't like that guy. No need to explain, Tuka-chan. Explanations are just cover-ups, and cover-ups mean it's true. Yoriko wore an I understand everything smile. It's really not like that. Please believe me, Yoriko. Tuka wanted to cry. This was a massive misunderstanding. Of course I believe you, Tuka-chan. Yoriko said the words, but her expression remained unchanged. Clearly, she'd already decided that Tuka liked this guy and that the guy was currently out shopping with another beautiful woman, which was why Tuka was secretly watching them. To her, this was the only explanation that made sense. Tuka's denials were obviously just embarrassment. Tuka wished she could disappear. This misunderstanding was impossible to clear up unless she told Yoriko the truth, but she didn't dare. If she explained, Yoriko might wonder how she knew so much about ghouls. She couldn't take even the slightest risk there. There was no solution. Tuka could only force herself to endure it. Meanwhile, Yoriko was thinking, now that Tuka had someone she liked, as her friend, she had to support her, ideally help her somehow. She just hoped that guy wasn't already dating that purple-haired woman. If not, maybe she could help Tuka win him over. 37, Chapter 37. Do you like white stockings? Rise had changed into a light purple dress. The smooth, delicate fabric looked comfortable just from appearance alone. How is it? Rise modeled the dress for Byakuya. It's beautiful. Purple really does suit you. Byakuya gave his honest assessment. Then I'm definitely buying this one. Rise made her decision without hesitation. Though honestly, with your beauty, you'd look good in anything. Byakuya added. It was simply the truth. A naturally gorgeous woman looked good in anything unless she deliberately tried to make herself look ugly. Darling's compliments are making me blush. Rise said with a composed expression. Next, Rise tried on the other dressa white one, again seeking Byakuya's opinion. Also beautiful. Purple and white both work really well on you. Other colors might look good too. Want to browse a bit more? Byakuya offered. That won't be necessary. These two are enough. As long as you think they look good, that's all that matters. Rise smiled radiantly. Alright, let's head back then. Byakuya had forgotten one thing. Rise still hadn't bought undergarments. What's the rush? I haven't bought underwear yet. You'll need to help me pick those out too. Rise smiled lightly, then returned to the fitting room to change back into her original clothes. Byakuya blinked. Was Rise serious? Helping with clothes was one thing, but underwear was. He'd assumed she was joking, but when Rise emerged from the fitting room, she immediately pulled him toward the lingerie section. You said purple suits me, right? How about this one? She picked out a purple set that looked quite alluring. Wait, you actually want me to help you pick underwear? Byakuya couldn't help but say. Why not? You're my boyfriend, isn't this perfectly normal? Rise countered. The problem is, our relationship isn't actually. Before Byakuya could finish, Rise pressed a finger to his lips. Don't be so shy. I'm not embarrassed. Fine. If you don't mind, neither do I. Byakuya said evenly. But don't expect me to critique underwear. You don't need to critique it, just tell me if it suits me or not. Rise smiled. If we're talking about whether it suits you, then yes, that purple set definitely does. Byakuya said matter-of-factly. If Rise wasn't embarrassed, why should he be? Good, that's one set decided. Now I just need one more. Rise then selected a red set in a bolder style. How about this? Sexy, right? Definitely. But I think white might suit you better. Byakuya said almost instinctively. Oh, then I'll go with your choice. But Rise's sharp intuition caught on immediately. I think I understand now, you personally prefer the color white, don't you? That's actually true. Byakuya couldn't deny it. I see, so you probably like things like white stockings, don't you? Rise mused. Though she was a ghoul, she often read human fashion magazines. She was quite familiar with such styles. Her usual wardrobe had some thought put into it. Looking beautiful wasn't just about personal preference, it also made hunting male prey easier. They do look nice. Byakuya admitted once again. In that case, I'll need to buy 2 pairs of white stockings too. Rise said with a teasing lilt. She normally wore flesh-toned stockings. If Byakuya liked white ones, she was willing to switch. You don't need to cater to my preferences. What matters is whether you like them. Byakuya said seriously. I also think white stockings are pretty. Rise said. Then there's no problem. Byakuya nodded slightly. Meanwhile, Tuka and Yoriko could see into the store through its glass walls. When they watched Rise model new clothes for Byakuya and then browse lingerie together with him, both were stunned, though for very different reasons. Tuka was shocked that Rise would behave this way with a human boy. Yoriko was amazed because Byakuya and Rise looked exactly like a real couple. If the guy Tuka liked was already dating that woman, Yoriko couldn't think of any way to help. Tuka-chan, I'll always support you unless it's truly hopeless. Yoriko said solemnly. She didn't want Tuka to lose heart. Thanks. Tuka caught herself. Wait, support me in what? Supporting your love life, of course. Yoriko smiled. Tuka rubbed her forehead, knowing any explanation would only deepen the misunderstanding. She decided to say nothing this time, but that only made things worse. Seeing that Tuka wasn't even denying it anymore, Yoriko became even more convinced. The first thing she needed to do was investigate whether Tuka's crush was already dating that woman. That kind of thing could only be clarified by asking directly. She'd need to find the right opportunity. By the way, Tuka-chan, how do you know that guy? Or where did you meet him? Yoriko asked. Not realizing the seriousness of what she was revealing, Tuka answered without much thought. I first saw him at the coffee shop where I work part-time. But I really don't know him well. Got it. Yoriko smiled and didn't press further. But internally, she now knew exactly what to do next. 38, Chapter 38, Running into Nimura Furuta. In the end, Rise purchased 2 dresses, 2 sets of lingerie, 2 pairs of stockings and pajamas too, since she'd need something to sleep in. Byakuya ended up carrying all the bags. When they left the clothing store, they acted as if they'd never noticed anyone watching them. In truth, they'd spotted Tuka and Yoriko early on, they just hadn't cared. Seeing that Byakuya and Rise were heading home, Tuka decided against following further. Let's go, Tuka-chan. But Yoriko was trying to get Tuka to follow them. Go where? I wasn't planning to tail them. Tuka said. Alright, let's continue shopping for what we need then. Yoriko didn't push. She had a better way to confirm the relationship between Tuka's crush and that woman anyway. Back at Byakuya's place, Rise prepared to use his bathroom. I'm going to shower. No peeking, she called out before entering. Don't worry, I wouldn't do something like that. Byakuya sat watching TV, not even glancing her way. About 20 minutes later, Rise emerged. She hadn't bothered putting on pajamas, just a towel wrapped around the essential areas. Her long, slender legs were almost entirely visible. Rise was already over 170 centimeters in heels. Even barefoot, she was close to that height. For a Japanese woman, she was quite tall, and her proportions were nearly perfect. Yet she casually sat down right next to Byakuya as if it were nothing. Aren't you going to get dressed first? Byakuya remarked. No rush, it's not bedtime yet. Rise said offhandedly. By the way, pick whichever room you want to sleep in tonight. Byakuya's home was fairly spacious, with several bedrooms. Why pick? Can't I just sleep in the same room as you? Rise said. Absolutely not. Byakuya refused immediately. Why not? Rise pressed. Because I'm worried you'll eat me in my sleep. I don't want to spend the night on edge. Byakuya said calmly. As long as Rise slept in a separate room, it was fine. If she tried to enter his room, she'd have to make some noise. He'd definitely lock his door. There was no way Rise could get in silently. His sharp senses would let him react immediately. But letting Rise sleep in the same room carried the risk of a sudden attack. Rise pouted slightly. You really don't trust me at all. Acting cute won't work. Good night anyway. Byakuya remained emotionless. Rise had no choice but to head to another room. The night passed without incident. Rise didn't attempt anything, but early the next morning, she was already active. She didn't bother being quiet about it, she simply knocked on his door normally. Byakuya happened to be more or less awake anyway, so he got up to answer. Good morning, darling. Rise greeted him as soon as he opened the door. Morning. Byakuya replied. Though it's just us now, though you really need to keep using that term. Is there a problem with it? Rise wrapped her arms around his neck and leaned in close, her voice honeyed. Also, how about a good morning kiss? Ding. Host has triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1. Refuse the good morning kiss. Give Rise no opportunity to make a move. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2. Accept the good morning kiss, but risk getting bitten. Reward, 10 fusion points. Only 10 points for the risk of being bitten. Byakuya wasn't keen on that. But he'd overlooked something. Why was this particular quest offering only 10 points? Byakuya refused directly. I'll pass. Who doesn't know what you're really thinking? Ding. Host has completed option 1. Reward, 1 fusion point. You might be surprised. Rise said mysteriously. In truth, she hadn't planned to bite him at all. She'd just been teasing. She knew Byakuya would react this way. But if Byakuya had suddenly changed his tune and actually gone for the kiss, she hadn't really considered how she'd respond to that. After washing up and eating breakfast, Byakuya prepared to head out. Are you going to school now? I suddenly want to see your university. Rise said. Well, sure. Byakuya hesitated briefly before agreeing. His internship didn't start until the afternoon and would continue into the evening, so his morning was free. Taking Rise to visit Kamiya University for the morning wouldn't be a problem. Today, Rise wore one of her new outfits, the white dress and white stockings. Compared to her usual look, it carried a different kind of beauty. As for makeup, Rise never bothered with it. She'd never studied the subject, and her natural features were already stunning enough. Byakuya brought Rise to Kamiya University. Her age matched his, and she looked young and beautiful, so she blended right in among the college students. Walking across campus together, they attracted plenty of stares. Rise was simply too beautiful. Even in a university brimming with youthful energy and attractive women, her looks were on a completely different level. Even Nimura Furuta noticed them. He was attending morning classes like any other student. Well, technically it was 9 a.m., since Japanese universities usually started around that time. Amid the stream of students heading to their classes, Furuta suddenly spotted Byakuya and Rise walking together. His pupils contracted sharply. Rise appearing at school with Byakuya was genuinely unexpected, and it caught his attention. 39, Chapter 39, Die. At this point, Nimura Furuta held multiple identities simultaneously. First, he was a support member of V. V had roughly several dozen members, almost all possessing combat ability on par with special class investigators. Furuta's current strength wasn't noteworthy within the organization, hence his support role. Of course, it was also possible Furuta was deliberately playing weak. Being overlooked by V served his own plans better. Second, he really was a student at Kamiya University, genuinely enrolled and attending classes. Third, he was a member of the Clowns organization, going by the name Suta. Fourth, he was a VIP at the Ghoul restaurant. Despite all these identities, Furuta didn't truly belong to any faction. Everything he did served his own agenda. This also proved that the steel beam incident wasn't primarily about revenge on Riser. At least, revenge wasn't the main reason. His plan simply required sacrificing her. Otherwise, why would he maintain so many identities? Just for fun. That said, Rise was Furuta's childhood friend. To say he felt nothing for her would be untrue. He had helped her escape the Washiyo clan once. Though that too might have been part of his long-term planning. Without Rise leaving the clan, Kanu would never have had a chance to use her for experiments. Furuta. Just then, Rise noticed him too. They weren't far apart, and Rise's sense of smell was exceptionally keen. Since he'd been spotted, Furuta saw no point in hiding. He noticed she'd called him Furuta, not Nimura like before. Clearly, during the steel beam incident, she'd seen him after all. That operation had been a failure. Furuta had expected it to go smoothly, but Byakuya had turned back to save Rise at the last moment, even though the kid had nearly been killed and devoured by her just moments before. Not only had the plan failed, but Rise now knew he was responsible. She'd be on guard against him from now on. Any future attempts would be far more difficult. He knew that when Rise fought seriously, she was actually quite powerful. He had no confidence in capturing her without tricks. After all, even if she couldn't win, she could escape. Otherwise the Washiyo clan would have caught her long ago. It was similar to how, in the original stories, Antioku Raid arc, Ito Yoshimura Raidspit being far stronger than her aging father, the non-killing owl still collaborated with Arima to use the CCG to corner Yoshimura. She wasn't confident she could capture him on her own. As for why she wanted to capture her own father, by then, Rise, the original experimental material, had been rescued and hidden by Yumo. Ito needed a new source material for Kanu to continue creating artificial half-ghouls to fulfill the wish she shared with Arima, placing a true one-eyed king on the throne they'd prepared. Yoshimura ended up becoming that new material, producing Pineapple King, Saidu Takaizawa and Kautaro Amon, both artificial half-ghouls. Rise, long time no see. Furuta greeted her with a smile, as if he'd done nothing wrong. Hee. Rise didn't say much, just a soft, knowing laugh. By the way, who's this? Furuta turned to Byakuya. Oh, I remember we met in the cafeteria before. Byakuya internally noted how theatrical Furuta was being. Yeah, didn't expect to run into you again so soon. Byakuya said casually. You two already knew each other. What a coincidence. Rise feigned surprise. But Rise, you're not a student here, are you? What brings you to campus? Don't tell me you missed me. Furuta was at it again. This was just his personality acting slightly unhinged on the surface. Not at all. If we hadn't bumped into you today, I might have forgotten you existed. I'm here with my boyfriend to look around. Rise smiled sweetly. Every word was a dagger, clearly intended as payback. To drive the point home, she linked her arm through Byakuya's, demonstrating their relationship. She had no intention of confronting Furuta about why he'd done what he did. Such naive questioning was pointless, she'd just play dumb anyway. Byakuya glanced at Rise, somewhat surprised. Was she really going to provoke Furuta like this? Ahaha, well then, I hope you and your boyfriend have a lovely time. Furuta said, his smile strained. Thanks. Goodbye, Furuta. With that, Rise led Byakuya away. As they departed, Furuta silently walked over to a nearby tree. One hand against the trunk, the other clenched into a fist. His expression darkened, turning somewhat twisted. Under his breath, he repeatedly cursed Byakuya. Die 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 die. Though Furuta had this sort of personality, it wouldn't affect his commitment to his plans. No matter how much it bothered him to see Rise with another man, it only gave him another excuse for his agenda, letting him convince himself he was doing this for revenge, numbing his own heart. Just like in the original story when Furuta had rambled to Kaneki about wanting to marry Rise, have lots of children, and even invite Kaneki to be his best man. But that was pure fantasy. He'd turned Rise into the Dragon Core. Marriage was impossible. He couldn't even touch her. The real Furuta had long since given up on life, despairing of this world. He wanted either the world to end, or his own death to pave the way for Kaneki's supreme throne. 40, Chapter 40, Taking Responsibility for You. Ah, that felt good. After cursing Byakuya who knows how many times, Furuta's expression instantly returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. He seamlessly shifted to contemplating his plans, his focused demeanor almost schizophrenic. Rise clearly knew now that he was behind the steel beam incident. Any future attempts would be exponentially harder. Should he continue targeting Rise, or find someone else? Rise was undoubtedly the ideal experimental subject, but capturing her again would be incredibly difficult. He'd need to catch her off guard and avoid alerting the Washiyu clan. If he switched targets, it would have to be someone with Washiyu blood lineage, otherwise his ultimate dragon objective couldn't be achieved. The Washiyu clan had many breeders, women with relatively pure bloodlines. Though not as pure as Rise's, they could still serve the purpose. These were Furuta's considerations as he headed to class. As for what had just happened with Byakuya and Rizid already pushed it from his mind. Meanwhile, Byakuya feigned ignorance. That guy just now, was he the one in the clown mask who attacked you? Yes, that was him. His name is Nimura Furutasomion, I've known for a long time. Rise nodded. Then why did he attack you? Byakuya continued asking. Who knows? Rise said casually. She wasn't deliberately hiding anything, she genuinely didn't know. If Furuta had been trying to drag her back to the Washiyu clan, other clan members would have shown up in Ward 20 by now. But she hadn't detected any Washiyu presence. If Furuta had some other purpose, she couldn't guess what it was. Regardless, he'd ambushed her, she wasn't going to let that go. Rise never imagined Furuta's true goal was to turn her into experimental material. If she knew, she'd be even angrier. You mentioned before that you have many enemies. Your situation really is dangerous. Byakuya said. So, are you scared? Rise smiled faintly. If you want to back out, there's probably still time. Not scared enough to back out. When I make a promise, I keep it. Byakuya said evenly. Next, they visited the campus library. Rise got herself a library card and borrowed some books, all dark and heavy subject matter. Since she couldn't hunt freely anymore, reading was her only remaining pleasure. With her books tucked in her bag, she continued strolling the campus with Byakuya. As they walked along a reservoir, Rise suddenly spoke. Ghouls are supposed to be at the top of the food chain. Yet to survive, they've created all these rules like timid lions binding themselves. What do you think, Byakuya? Isn't it both pathetic and laughable? The rules she referred to were those established by ghoul organizations that controlled each ward, like Antioku in Ward 20. Aside from Antioku, other wards had similar regulations. For example, don't encroach on other ghouls' feeding grounds, pay monthly ward fees, hunt no more than one human per month, and leave no suspicious traces at the scene. That may be true, but surviving isn't wrong. Ghouls follow those rules to avoid CCG investigators. Most ghouls aren't as strong as you. Byakuya said. Besides, you're in the same position now. If I didn't limit your hunting, you'd eventually have a whole squad of investigators after you, and you already have plenty of other enemies. Rise didn't seem offended by his pushback. She mused, that's what makes it laughable. Now I've become just like those weak ones. What's laughable about it? Everyone's just trying to survive. Of course, if you became strong enough to fear no enemy, you wouldn't need to restrain yourself. Byakuya continued, but I'm also human. I can't support you hunting people freely, and I want you to be safer. I just want to live more happily. After all, that's what I was born for. Rise smiled softly. Though I can't hunt freely anymore, I've discovered that reading books I enjoy has its own pleasures. And right now, what I'm most interested in pursuing is you, Byakuya. That statement could easily be misunderstood, but Byakuya remained rational. He knew exactly what Rise was really after. I think you're pursuing my flesh, not me. Same difference. Rise laughed. If you can truly find pleasures beyond hunting, that's for the best. The last thing you need right now is more enemies. Once investigators start targeting you in force, you'll be in real trouble. Byakuya said calmly. He knew hunting wasn't Rise's only source of enjoyment. After all, she'd lived in Ward 11 before coming to Ward 20, and had left because she'd grown bored even though there were still plenty of humans to hunt there. That proved she was utterly self-indulgent, doing everything purely for pleasure. Okay. A few more lectures and you'll sound just like my nagging old father. Rise said dismissively. Her old father was Shachielso, known as Madasaka Kamishiro. I said I'd protect you, so naturally I need to take responsibility for you. Being a bit naggy is normal, though I don't think what I said counts as nagging. Byakuya replied evenly. Rise chuckled softly, then asked with sudden curiosity, why do you want to protect me anyway? Do you actually like me? Byakuya had given her an answer back when the steel beam incident happened, but she hadn't taken it serious like she'd assumed he was just saying things, so she wanted to confirm again. 41, Chapter 41, Call me Nashiro-san. I already told you last time, it's true. Byakuya spoke frankly. That said, being wary of you is also true. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Then it can only count as liking me a little bit, right? If you really liked me, if you were head over heels for me, you wouldn't have refused my request. Rise said this with a hint of complaint. I'm definitely not brainless enough for that. I'm not a masochist. Letting you eat my flesh whenever you want. That would be insane. Byakuya replied with an exasperated look. But speaking of which, if you really do like me, shouldn't I respond properly? Rise suddenly asked. That's up to you. Byakuya could boldly tell Rise he liked her without caring whether she accepted or rejected him. Most transmigrators could probably maintain this kind of attitude when facing characters they admired. That casual attitude of yours really doesn't match what you claim to feel. Rise immediately shot back. But I do like you. That much is definitely true. Byakuya said it just as directly as before. Fine, I get it. But comparatively speaking, I'd still rather see you as food for now. Rise smiled. So when I develop those kinds of feelings for you, or when you're completely head over heels for me, I'll give you a proper response then. By the way, have you ever thought about going to school? Byakuya suddenly changed the subject. Not interested. Sounds boring. Rise replied offhandedly. Fair enough. After hanging around campus for a while, Byakuya and Rise headed back. They parted ways along the route, each returning to their own home. After lunch, Byakuya took a short nap, then left on time to catch the subway to Ward 23, preparing for the afternoon's internship. He'd agreed with the other interns yesterday to meet at the Ward 23 subway station. When the train reached a certain stop along the way, Byakuya happened to encounter Kurona and Nashiro Yasuhisa boarding at that station. This wasn't too much of a coincidence. As long as he and the Yasuhisa sisters took the subway during this time window, they'd naturally end up on the same train. Kurona-san, Yasuhisa-san. Byakuya greeted the sisters as they approached. Kurona didn't respond, silently taking a seat beside Byakuya. Nashiro also sat nearby but did reply. Why do you call Kurona, Kurona-san, but address me as Yasuhisa-san? Because Kurona-san asked me to call her that last time. I couldn't just casually use the same address for you. Byakuya explained. Wait, I didn't ask you. Toy allowed you to. There's a difference. Kurona corrected him, seeming somewhat embarrassed. Right. Byakuya smiled but said nothing more. That's not fair. Call me Nashiro-san too. Nashiro said with a neutral expression. Normally, the more introverted Nashiro would never say such things to someone she wasn't close with like Byakuya. But she was now very invested in Kurona's situation with Byakuya. To better understand him, she couldn't afford to be as reserved as usual. Nashiro, you. Kurona looked at her sister in surprise. She hadn't expected Nashiro to say something like that to Byakuya. Could Nashiro be? While Kurona's mind raced, Byakuya responded to Nashiro. Alright then, I'll call you Nashiro-san from now on. Hearing him say Nashiro-san, a faint blush crept across Nashiro's face. Though she'd mentally prepared herself, actually hearing it from his mouth still made her feel somewhat shy. Ahem. Nashiro cleared her throat softly, forcing down her embarrassment. So, how old are you? And what's your family situation like? Kurona was puzzled. Why was Nashiro asking these questions? Why the sudden interest? Though somewhat confused, Byakuya answered anyway. I'm 18. As for family, it's just me. Hearing that he lived alone, Nashiro immediately assumed she'd touched on a painful past. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's fine, really. It's nothing. Byakuya smiled faintly. It wasn't like his parents had actually died. The system had simply given him this background in this world. House, car, money. The system had actually provided him quite generously. So this was hardly a painful past for Byakuya. If anything, it was pretty sweet. Okay, I hope I didn't offend you. Then Nashiro continued, what I want to know is how do you view Kurona? Since Kurona had told her she liked Byakuya, Nashiro naturally needed to know how Byakuya viewed her sister. You mean, what do I think of Kurona-san? Byakuya asked. You could put it that way. Nashiro nodded. Cute. Byakuya answered immediately, so fast that Nashiro didn't even register it at first. Sitting nearby, Kurona immediately turned her face away, not wanting Byakuya or Nashiro to see her flustered expression. Kurona is indeed cute, but is there nothing else? Nashiro blinked, taking a moment to process. Though she had a strange feeling about it since she and Kurona looked almost identical, Byakuya calling Kurona cute felt like he was calling her cute too. Something else. Byakuya said plainly, she's so cute that I can't think of a more fitting description. Kurona's shoulders trembled slightly. Just turning away wasn't enough anymore, the blush had already spread to her ears. Unless she covered those too, there was no hiding it. Alright. I can tell you're being sincere. Byakuya's directness left Nashiro unable to doubt him. But now Nashiro found herself averting her gaze as well. Because Byakuya had been looking directly at her the whole time, and since she and Kurona looked nearly identical, it felt like everything he just said was directed at her. If she held eye contact any longer, her own face would probably turn red too. 42, Chapter 42, No More Saying Cute. By now, the subway had arrived at Ward 23 station. After waiting briefly at the station, the full group assembled. However, Arima and the other Squad 0 members weren't meeting them here like yesterday, they would be waiting at the Ward 24 entrance. So once everyone gathered, they immediately set off for Ward 24. Emma Hassan. When Byakuya met Suzuya actually took the initiative to greet him this time. His tone was a bit stiff after all, he'd never interacted normally with other trainees at the institute before. Good afternoon, Suzuya-san. Byakuya responded in kind. The two didn't exchange many words, just this simple greeting. You know he has serious violent tendencies. Why are you still willing to get close to him? Kurona spoke up without bothering to control her volume, addressing Byakuya directly. Suzuya stood right behind Byakuya and naturally heard everything Kurona said. Normally, he'd never care about such things. But hearing Kurona say this to Byakuya, he inexplicably felt the urge to defend himself. Still, he didn't speak up. Even if he explained, no one would believe him. The academy director had already issued a formal reprimand. I know that's what everyone says, but I don't actually think Suzuya-san did those things. Byakuya shared his perspective. He couldn't directly say he'd witnessed Matsuki killing cats with his own eyes, or that Tokage was covering for Matsuki. First, he had no evidence, so no one would believe him. Second, the matter now involved the academy director. The director probably didn't know the truth either, he'd simply believed what Tokage told him. But without evidence to refute Tokage's account, stepping forward would only antagonize quite a few people, the director included. Of course, with Byakuya's strength, he didn't need to fear them. But if he revealed his full abilities, the Washiyu clan would definitely take notice. Getting on their radar prematurely would seriously hamper his future plans. It was true he could protect himself, but he couldn't exactly spend every day hiding and laying low while the Washiyu clan launched endless pursuit just like they'd done to Yoshimura years ago. That would be too annoying. So until he'd grown strong enough, Byakuya just wanted to avoid unnecessary trouble. That's why he'd immediately turned and left the moment he'd spotted Matsuki and Tokage that day. Suzuya was startled by Byakuya's words. He'd never even tried to defend himself, yet Byakuya believed he wasn't responsible. You're joking, right? The director already made an official announcement. Are you saying you don't believe the director? Kurona sounded surprised. I know about that, but I still don't think Suzuya-san would do something like that. I'd like to think I'm a pretty good judge of character. Byakuya maintained his position. Since you claim to be such a good judge, what kind of person am I in your eyes? The moment she finished speaking, Kurona quickly added, and you're not allowed to say, cute, anymore. So cute, yet she won't let me say she's cute. That's kind of cute. Byakuya said with a slight smile. Kurona's face immediately flushed, her voice carrying a hint of frustration. I told you not to say, cute. Okay. Byakuya stopped teasing her, his tone turning serious. Then, starved for affection. Starved for affection. Kurona hadn't expected that answer. Yes. That's what my intuition tells me. Byakuya said this with a completely straight face. He could barely keep from cracking up, he felt like some kind of fortune teller spouting nonsense. Of course, it wasn't actually intuition. It was his God's eye view analysis of Kurona. More precisely, both Kurona and Nashiro were equally starved for affection. They'd lost their biological father when they were very young, and their mother wasn't even mentioned in the original story. Later, Dr. Kanu had forcibly taken over the Yasuhisa household. He'd probably spun some lies to the young Kurona and Nashiro, and the two sisters, having lost family early and lacking parental love, came to see Kanu as their father. They obeyed him in everything, even willingly undergoing artificial half-ghoul experimentation. It was obvious they were starved for affection. Your intuition is wrong. I'm not starved for anything. Kurona refused to admit either, perhaps she simply hadn't realized it herself. Byakuya just smiled and didn't press further. Whether you're starved for affection or not doesn't really matter. The point is that Kurona-san is cute. That's what I really wanted to say. Yuyuri doing it again. Kurona's face went red in an instant, her usual cool demeanor completely gone. Meanwhile, Suzuya wasn't paying attention to Byakuya and Kurona's conversation. He was thinking that if Amaha-san really believed in him like that, maybe he could find an opportunity to properly explain what happened. He didn't care whether others believed him or not. He just hoped Amaha-san would believe what he had to say. Same location as yesterday. Byakuya and his group met up with the full Squad Zero contingent, preparing to enter Ward 24. The Squad Zero members still wore their matching white combat uniforms, apparently the unit's signature attire. Other CCG investigators didn't dress so distinctively, typically wearing casual clothes or formal suits. Standing out too much would make it harder to catch ghouls. Unlike Squad Zero, which possessed overwhelming strength that made subtlety unnecessary. Amaha-san. Shio Ihei waved the moment he spotted Byakuya. You two have gotten pretty close already. Yusa Arima remarked from nearby. Shio's always been like that, though he does seem noticeably warmer toward Amaha-san than most people. Rikai Suzu commented flatly. Well, he'll probably be our colleague soon enough. Nothing wrong with building rapport early. Kori Ui smiled faintly. In his assessment, given Byakuya's performance, he'd most likely graduate at the top of his class and join the CC Gumless. Someone even more prodigious existed among his peers, which Kori Ui considered unlikely. Byakuya also had tremendous room for growth. Kori Ui estimated that Byakuya could potentially reach Associate Special Class in the future, and that was his conservative estimate. 43, Chapter 43, Heart-to-Heart with Kurona. Ding. Host defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. Ding. Host defeated a B-rated ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. Same as yesterday, the internship mission involved driving out ghouls. However, Byakuya didn't kill every ghoul. Some he captured to bring back to the CCG. Different situations called for different approaches. Ghoul investigators generally didn't kill ghouls unless necessary. The Ghoul Countermeasures Law, Article 13, Section 2, prohibited is the infliction of unnecessary harm upon ghouls. Simply put, don't kill or abuse them if it isn't necessary. Though that's what the law stated, quite a few CCG investigators didn't fully comply. For instance, Kuriomato killed every ghoul on sight, regardless of whether they were good or evil. And Tokage had tortured Yamori Jason so badly that the man's psyche had shattered. However, no matter what Mato or Tokage did to ghouls, they faced no consequences. Because the Ghoul Countermeasures Law also stated, any target designated as a ghoul shall not be protected under any law. Since ghouls had no legal protection, there was naturally no legal punishment for any treatment inflicted upon them. As for Byakuya's attitude toward ghouls, she certainly didn't believe in killing them all. Kill those who deserved it, spare those who didn't, and apply double standards when appropriate. Simple as that. Just as he treated Rise. He didn't deny that his stance was pure double standards. After all, everyone was somewhat biased. A simple example, in the original story, Tuka Kirishima had killed 2 innocent CCG investigators, yet hardly anyone hated her for it or wanted her dead. In the world of Tokyo Ghoul, who didn't have innocent blood on their hands, Kaneki included. In fact, Kaneki had probably killed the most innocent humans of anyone. When he finally transformed into dragon, he devoured roughly half of Tokyo. If they had to hold everyone accountable and execute them all, just thinking about it gave Byakuya a headache. The day's internship concluded. Byakuya and Suzuya once again performed the best, followed by Kurona and Nashiro. That concludes today's training. Come back tomorrow afternoon. The entire internship only lasts 3 days, so after tomorrow you can head back. Kori Ui addressed them as they exited Ward 24. Understood. Byakuya nodded slightly. They'd known before arriving that the internship was only 3 days. Of course, this was specific to Ward 24 internships. Other districts had completely different internship durations. Ward 24 was the most dangerous and chaotic zone. Ghoul encounters could happen at any moment. 3 days of high-intensity training was sufficient to assess a trainee's capabilities. Unlike other wards, where most ghouls kept their identities well hidden, you'd have trouble actively seeking out ghouls unless you happened upon an active crime scene. The intensity was completely different. Associate Special Class Kori Ui. One of the male trainees suddenly spoke up. What does it take to join Squad Zero? The young man had that hot-blooded enthusiasm typical of his age. He idolized Arima and desperately wanted to join Squad Zero. But he specifically asked Kori Ui, probably because Kori Ui interacted with them most frequently and maintained a friendly demeanor. The other Squad Zero members were comparatively aloof. Only Byakuya had any real rapport with Shioehei. To join Squad Zero, you'd need to be at least first class, I'd say, preferably Associate Special Class or above. Kori Ui didn't want to crush the trainee's hopes, but he gave an honest answer. Though he was being conservative, joining Squad Zero wasn't really about rank. Kori Ui himself had only joined because Arima valued him. Furthermore, even Kori Ui didn't know that everyone in Squad Zero except himself was a half-human. The Washiyo clan's secrets had to be kept from all outsiders. Even though the CCG was founded by the Washiyu clan, all the humans within it were still outsiders. So joining Squad Zero was actually far harder than Koryu imagined. In all the years since the unit's founding, only 2 human members had ever been admitted: Koryu himself and, later, the unremarkable-looking Take Hirako. Both shared one thing in common: a close relationship with Arima and abilities he acknowledged. So to put it bluntly, this trainee shouldn't even bother hoping. He'd never make the cut. Even Koryui's conservative assessment was enough to leave the trainee feeling despair. I see. I understand. I'll work hard. His voice carried a note of dejection. Forget associate special class, he wasn't even sure he could make first class someday. On the return trip, Byakuya ended up on the same subway car as the Yasuhisa sisters again. Today both sisters seemed unusually exhausted. Perhaps yesterday's performance hadn't satisfied them, so they'd pushed themselves extra hard during today's training. Now they were completely drained, practically collapsing into their seats. Maybe you were right. Kurona suddenly spoke up, her voice flat. Right about what? Byakuya didn't immediately follow. You said I'm starved for affection, remember? About thought. Do you know why Nashiro and I were hostile toward you at first? Kurona looked weary, her voice soft and lacking its usual edge. Byakuya shook his head. He could guess, though probably something to do with Kanu. Still, Kurona's sudden willingness to share surprised him. Because of father. Nashiro and I want to earn father's approval and praise, so we wanted to take both first and second place together. Then father would definitely be proud of us. Kurona explained. She didn't mention that this father wasn't their biological father. They'd long since come to see him as such. Well, don't push yourselves too hard. I noticed you're both exhausted today. That's not good. Byakuya started to offer some advice, then realized Kurona didn't seem to be listening anymore. Nashiro on his other side had actually fallen asleep already. Her head gradually tilted until her cheek came to rest gently against Byakuya's right shoulder. Then Kurona did the same, unconsciously leaning against his left shoulder, her steady, even breathing indicating she'd fallen asleep too. Caught in the middle, Byakuya was momentarily at a loss. 44, Chapter 44, Pure Evil. Simply put, first place meant top of their class, and second place meant runner-up. For Kurona and Nashiro to claim both positions simultaneously even without Byakuya's sudden appearance, that would have been difficult to achieve. In other words, the Yasuhisa sisters were already under tremendous pressure. Byakuya's arrival had only multiplied it. That explained their intense hostility toward him. Now Byakuya finally understood the full picture. Just as he'd suspected, it was all connected to Kanu. That man really did a number on these 2 sisters. Byakuya murmured under his breath. If Kanu had shown even the slightest consideration or care for Kurona and Nashiro, Byakuya wouldn't be saying this. In the original story, Kanu had manipulated the Yasuhisa sisters into undergoing his artificial half-ghoul experiments. Using Raiza's Kakuhou and Kagun, he'd transformed them into one-eyed ghouls just like Kaneki. Later, when Kanu's underground laboratory was discovered, Aojirai Tree, the CCG, and Kaneki's squad all converged on the facility. Kurona and Nashiro, trying to protect their father, encountered Suzuya, by then a rank 2 investigator. Even as one-eyed ghouls fighting together, the 2 sisters were no match for Suzuya. Perhaps harboring resentment from the sisters' earlier coldness and disdain, Suzuya showed no mercy. He'd even taunted them, threatening to rip out their intestines and see whose were longer. He'd beaten them brutally. Still, Suzuya hadn't gone for the kill. When Nashiro was critically wounded, he let Kurona escape. Nashiro was dying from her injuries. Kurona desperately searched for their father, hoping he would save them. But Kanu had already allied with Aojirai Tree by then. They protected him from the CCG while he continued conducting half-ghoul experiments for them. As for the critically wounded, dying Nashiro, Kanu completely ignored her. Even if there was virtually no hope of saving her, his attitude lacked any trace of human feeling. Kurona feared Nashiro wouldn't last, so she absorbed Nashiro into her own body. She could only search alone for a way to save her sister. In the end, of course, Nashiro couldn't be saved. She merged entirely with Kurona, no consciousness, no vital signs. Kanu had even dismissed Nashiro's faint remaining breath as nothing more than passing gas. In short, Kanu was an absolute villain. His disregard for human life surpassed even Raiza's. He was the type who could never be redeemed, yet simultaneously, he possessed a certain villainous charisma. Until his final breath, he never regretted anything he'd done. His goal aligned with Furita's. He believed the world was trapped in a twisted birdcage, and he wanted to shatter it. Only a one-eyed ghoul could fulfill that purpose. He was willing to pay any price. And he succeeded. Kaneki, his creation, achieved his vision. The catalyst for all of it was his mother, who had died from an incurable illness. In Kanu's view, if ghouls could be used in medical research, they could surely develop treatments for such diseases. After his mother's death, he changed. He came to believe this pitiful world needed to be remade. He knew full well how evil his actions were. So as the new world dawned, believing someone like himself had no place in it, chose to put a gun in his mouth. That was the ultimate expression of his cold rationality. He died at his mother's grave. He surely had no regrets and believed he'd done nothing wrong. Later, medical research into ghouls and dragon cells rapidly conquered countless formerly incurable diseases. Even Shinohara, who'd been in a vegetative state for years, made a full recovery. Now that they've lost Rise as an experimental subject, I wonder what Kanu and Furyuta will do next. Byakuya pondered this, completely oblivious to the various stares from surrounding passengers. After all, two cute girls twins, no less, were leaning on his shoulders, one on each side. It was quite the spectacle. He couldn't exactly shake Kurona and Nashiro awake and tell them to move. It was almost time for the Yasuhisa sisters stop, but neither showed signs of waking. Byakuya remembered this was their station, so he spoke up, "Kurona-san, Nashiro-san, this is your stop." He also gently nudged them with his shoulders to wake them. We're here already." Kurona was still groggy from sleep. She raised her head and rubbed her eyes, not registering what she'd been doing. Nashiro, however, snapped to awareness immediately. Embarrassment flooded her. She'd actually fallen asleep and leaned on Byakuya. Face slightly flushed, Nashiro stood to exit, pretending nothing had happened. Kurona still hadn't noticed anything amiss and followed her sister off the train. Byakuya said nothing throughout, acting as if nothing had occurred. After they'd disembarked, Nashiro noticed Kurona's expression was completely normal, as if the earlier incident had never happened at all. But Nashiro had woken slightly before Kurona. She'd seen Kurona leaning on Byakuya too. Did Kurona really not care? Curious, Nashiro whispered to her sister, "Kurona, don't you realize what you were doing?" "What was I doing?" Kurona had no idea what Nashiro meant. "You know, you accidentally fell asleep, and you were sleeping on Amaha Byakuya's shoulder." Nashiro briefly explained the situation. It took Kurona a moment to process. Then her eyes went wide, pupils trembling slightly with disbelief. I was sleeping on his shoulder." Nashiro was relieved now. She'd thought she was the only one dying of embarrassment, but Kurona had simply been completely unaware. But the most important thing was that Byakuya knew exactly what had happened. Thinking about that made Nashiro feel even more embarrassed and shy. 45, Chapter 45, The Scent of Other Girls. Nashiro worried about whether she'd been snoring, whether she'd looked ugly while sleeping. Kurona's reaction was even more intense. "Nashiro, I didn't do anything embarrassing, did I?" "I don't know either, because I also fell asleep on him by accident." Nashiro's voice carried a trace of awkwardness. "You too?" Kurona froze for a moment. "I see." When Byakuya returned home, he found the front door closed but unlocked. His first thought wasn't of burglars or anything like that. It was of a certain woman. Opening the door, he spotted a pair of Rise's pink high heels. Sure enough, she was here. No wonder she'd asked for a spare key. This way she could come and go as she pleased. "I'm home," Byakuya announced. "Darling, welcome back." Rise's voice drifted from the living room. "If I hadn't given you that spare key, I'd almost think someone had broken in," Byakuya remarked dryly. "How rude, calling me a burglar." Rise's tone turned faintly aggrieved. "I said almost. So, are you planning to stay overnight again?" Byakuya asked. "Yes, unless that's a problem." Rise replied directly. "Of course not. Whatever makes you happy." Byakuya's tone was calm. Just then, Rise rose from the sofa and approached him. He didn't need to guess what she was about to do. Sure enough, Rise proceeded to smell every inch of him from head to toe. This time she was far more thorough, giving Byakuya a vaguely ominous feeling, mixed with all sorts of ghoul scents again. But there's human scent too, and the faint fragrance of girls. Rise detected numerous scents. Her sense of smell was far sharper than most ghouls. Last time she hadn't been so meticulous. This time she left no stone unturned. Especially when she caught the feminine scent, a subtle shift appeared in her eyes. "Your nose is something else." Byakuya couldn't help but comment. "Seems like more than one girl, too. Two scents are particularly distinct." Rise analyzed the scents on him, even deducing that he'd been in relatively close contact with Kurona and Nashiro. "Also, where exactly did you go? Why do you smell like those people?" Her gaze shifted again, expression turning noticeably more serious. She'd been focused on the other women's scents, but now something far more concerning had emerged. Those people she mentioned were the half-humans from Squad Zero. Due to her low status within the Washiyo clan, Rise had grown up in the Sunlit Garden alongside half-humans from the clan's branch families. Ordinary ghouls couldn't distinguish between regular humans and half-humans. But having lived among half-humans since childhood, Rise could detect the subtle difference. The fundamental distinction between humans and half-humans was their RC cell count, not something normally detectable by smell. Only someone like Rise, who'd spent her formative years around half-humans, could barely manage it. Most importantly, those half-humans were nothing but Washiyo lapdogs in Rise's eyes, spending their entire lives serving the clan. The fact that Byakuya had been in contact with them concerned her greatly. "What do you mean by those people?" Byakuya continued, feigning ignorance. "Actually, you probably wouldn't know about that. So where did you go today?" Rise speculated. "Or are you actually a CCG investigator?" If Byakuya didn't know about half-humans, then he'd probably encountered them through the CCG. She knew some half-humans were sent by the Washiyo clan to bolster CCG combat strength. Not quite. I'm not an official investigator yet, still just an intern. Since Rise had already figured most of it out, Byakuya saw no point in hiding it. He could feel that Rise's wariness toward him had gradually diminished from when they first met, so he was willing to share more with her. That explains it. Now Rise understood. Whether Byakuya was an intern or full investigator, working at the CCG meant inevitable encounters with investigators whose true identities were somewhat garden half-humans. But with your abilities, you're still just an intern. Rise found this surprising. Can't help it. I only recently decided to become a CCG investigator. Byakuya shrugged. Now that you're becoming an investigator, isn't harboring me a serious crime under that countermeasures law? Rise smiled. So what? That law is a joke anyway. Byakuya spoke bluntly. The Washio clan had both enacted the Ghoul countermeasures law and founded the CCGWAS itself, a Ghoul family. Just that fact alone was laughable enough. Setting that aside, few investigators fully complied with the law anyway. Byakuya's directness surprised Rise. If someone else heard you say that and reported you, you'd be in serious trouble. By someone else she meant humans. As a ghoul, she certainly wouldn't report Byakuya. That's why I only say these things to you. Byakuya said quietly. Rise smiled softly. Then she redirected the conversation. So all those ghouls sense on you, that's because you were fighting ghouls with other investigators? No wonder there's also a slightly different scent, similar to the quinquas those investigators carry. That's right. This thing here. Byakuya nodded slightly, pulling out the Hiroko 176 that he'd kept in his inner pocket. That much I understand now, but... A subtly dangerous smile appeared on Rise's face. What about those two girls' scents? Care to explain? 46, Chapter 46, The Truth About the Washio Clan. They're classmates doing the internship with me. Is something wrong? Byakuya explained with a calm expression. Nothing really. I just find it interesting that you keep saying you like me, yet you're getting so close to other girls. Rise's tone was equally casual, as if she didn't particularly care and was merely teasing him. Through scent alone, she could tell those two girls had definitely been in close physical contact with Byakuya. Their scents were by far the strongest on him. Obviously, this was the result of Kurona and Nashiro falling asleep on Byakuya's shoulders. No matter how much Byakuya fought ghouls or chatted with Shioehei, those scents wouldn't be nearly as concentrated as the Yasuhisa sisters. That's probably because we were fighting side by side during combat. That's why their scent got on me. Byakuya explained with a completely straight face. He said it as if it were the absolute truth when in fact it was complete nonsense. But he simply didn't want the hassle of explaining everything to Rise, so he'd made up a convenient excuse. Is that so? Rise was highly skeptical. She could even pinpoint exactly where those two women's scents were concentrated on Byakuya's body. Mainly on his arms and shoulders, even his hands had traces. And scents that strong didn't accumulate in just a short while. No amount of fighting side by side should result in that. Still, Rise didn't press further. Speaking of which, you've heard of the Washio clan, right? After a moment, Rise suddenly brought up the Washuas. I know of them, the family that founded the CCG. Byakuya replied. Everyone knows the Washio clan founded the CCG. People think they're humanity's greatest heroes in the fight against ghouls, but no one knows the truth about that family. Rise said with a sigh. The truth? You mean the Washio clan isn't as noble as they appear? Byakuya continued, feigning ignorance. Exactly, but are you sure you want to hear it? Rise emphasized the consequences. Once you know, there may be no going back. You might end up falling into the abyss alongside me. Her expression remained placid, seemingly unbothered by sharing the Washio clan's secrets with Byakuya. After all, she'd already burned her bridges with the Washuas. Even if she violated this ultimate taboo, it meant nothing to her. But for Byakuya, it was different. Once he learned the truth about the Washio clan, there would be no turning back. I'm sure. Byakuya spoke without the slightest hesitation. I already said I'd protect you. What's falling into the abyss together? He already knew the Washua's true nature, so Rise's warnings were meaningless to him. However, having Rise tell him directly served an important purpose. This way, he'd have a legitimate reason for knowing the truth, which would benefit his future plans. His resolute tone was also meant to encourage Rise to reveal everything. Hearing this, Rise was taken aback by his decisiveness. Looks like you've made up your mind. Even if you want to take it back later, it'll be too late. Rise leaned in close to his ear and whispered the truth very softly. The Washio clan are ghouls. Byakuya feigned shock, widening his eyes slightly. Seeing him go silent, Rise assumed he was stunned speechless. This was exactly the reaction she wanted to see. It made things interesting. Rise suddenly embraced Byakuya. Now we're both accomplices. We've violated the Washio clan's greatest taboo. There's no way out for you. You can only face their endless pursuit and revenge alongside me. I warned you earlier. Even if you regret it now, you don't have the slightest chance to take it back. She held him tightly, as if to prevent any escape. Ding. Host triggered a quest. Initiating divine selection. Option 1, say nothing, do nothing. Reward, 1 fusion point. Option 2, push Rise away and distance yourself from her. Reward, 10 fusion points. Option 3, hold Rise tight and honor your promise. Reward, 50 fusion points. Without any hesitation, Byakuya wrapped his arms around Rise. He felt her body tremble slightly. I understand. Of course I don't regret it. This is my answer. Ding. Host completed option 3. Reward, 50 fusion points. The generous reward was likely because taking this step meant his enemy would now be the entire Washiyu clan. The Washiu's power was immense. They controlled both the CCG and the V organization. Moreover, all Washiyu ghouls were natural-born Kakujas. As for why Rise had never manifested a Kakuja form, that remained a mystery. Only the manga author would know. Perhaps she simply never had the chance to display that power before Furuta's ambush stripped away her freedom. If that was the case, the CCG's S rating severely underestimated Rise. A Kakuja-class ghoul would be at least SS or even SSS rated. No wonder Furuta hadn't attempted another attack on Rise after his initial failure. Now that she was on guard, succeeding would be extremely difficult. In the later timeline, Furuta only became so powerful after transplanting Rise's Kakuhou. At this point in time, it was hard to say whether Furuta could actually defeat Rise in a direct confrontation. In any case, the Washiyu clan was undoubtedly the most formidable antagonistic force in the Tokyo Ghoul world. Their downfall in the original story was mainly due to internal collapse. Yet Byakuya didn't fear the Washius. In fact, he'd resolved from the very beginning that he would inevitably clash with them, otherwise, this world's tragedies would only continue. Rise couldn't help but smile. You really are surprising. Should I call you naive or something else? But I don't dislike fools like you. She still suspected Byakuya didn't truly understand how terrifying the Washiyu clan was. After all, she hadn't revealed all their capabilities yet. She'd need to emphasize that later. But for now, she wanted to clarify something else first. I've told you my secrets. So can you tell me more about those two girls? 47, Chapter 47, Living with Rise. I already told you 3 classmates doing the internship with me. Byakuya hadn't expected Rise to keep pressing on this topic. He'd thought the matter was settled. You said it was from fighting side by side, but based on the sense I detected, the concentration is highest on your arms and shoulders. What kind of side-by-side fighting results in that? I'm having trouble imagining it. Rise spoke with a hint of playfulness. Fine. The truth is, while we were on the subway, they accidentally fell asleep. And they happened to fall asleep on my shoulders. Byakuya had no choice but to confess. I see. Rise nodded slightly. This explanation she could believe. Let's leave it at that. Next, I need to tell you more about the Washiyu clan's power, so you don't go doing something reckless without knowing what you're up against. Rise said. Though Byakuya already knew everything, he still put on an attentive expression. What followed was Rise detailing the Washiu's resources, the CCG, the V organization, and so on. She also mentioned her own background. A ghoul family that worships human bloodlines. The purer your ghoul blood, the lower your status. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? Rise hadn't explicitly stated this was her own experience, she was just asking for Byakuya's opinion. Yeah, but is this something you personally went through? Byakuya asked. I suppose I made it too obvious. Rise said softly. Yes, this was my experience. That's why I never want to return to that disgusting place. It took everything I had to escape. Come to think of it, if you hadn't saved me before, I'd probably still be living out my original fate. I don't know exactly what Furuta was planning, but it definitely wasn't anything good. Her words were calm, but underneath lay profound disgust for the entire Washiyu clan. Things might have turned out even worse. But that's all in the past now. From here on, I definitely won't let you suffer like that again. Byakuya said solemnly. By even worse, he meant becoming an experimental subject. Being a breeder for the Washiyu clan was certainly miserable, but being an experimental subject brought indescribable suffering of its own. In the original story, Rise had her Kakuhou harvested at least several thousand times. Each extraction brought agony, and the prolonged starvation was both physical and psychological torture. In the end, being destroyed as the Dragon Core was actually a release for her. Byakuya didn't want to compare which fate was more tragic, breeder or test subject. He only needed to know that Rise's destiny was unbearably cruel, and he wouldn't allow either scenario to happen. After everything I've told you about the Washiyu clan's power, you can still say something like that. Rise mused. I don't know where you get such confidence, but I'll choose to believe you for now. After all, you're the only one I can rely on. By the way, you mentioned your father before. What's his situation? Byakuya deliberately brought this up. Him. I haven't seen him since I left Ward 6. I heard he was captured by CCG investigators, but I don't know if that's true. Rise's tone was somewhat nonchalant. Ward 6. So he wasn't your biological father. And you don't have the surname Washiyu is, Kamishiro, inherited from him. Byakuya continued probing. That's right. After I escaped from that place, I met father. He gave me my surname and taught me a lot of combat techniques. He was pretty naggy though, but... Rise suddenly felt something had changed within her, just slightly. Maybe his lectures were right after all. It was my reckless, uncontrolled feeding that gave Furuta the opportunity to ambush me. Given your father's level of power, and his connection to you, the CCG probably wouldn't do anything to him. You'll likely have a chance to reunite. Byakuya said. He recalled a detail. It wasn't that Shachi had first considered Rise his daughter, but rather that Rise had first called him dad. Actually, it was similar to Kurona and Nashiro's situation. Perhaps it was all a manifestation of being starved for affection. It wasn't that Rise felt nothing for Shachi, but her rebellious nature was too strong. Shachi's constant lecturing naturally grated on someone like her. I hope so. I didn't expect him to get captured by the CCG. He was probably protecting those weaker ghouls. Rise sounded somewhat helpless. She knew exactly what kind of person her father was. As Ward Six's leader and caretaker, he always put the elderly, sick, and vulnerable ghouls first. With Shachi's strength, he could have easily escaped the CCG, but he'd probably chosen to surrender voluntarily, taking all the blame to protect Ward Six's remaining ghouls. Unless the CCG had deployed Arima, but that wasn't realistic. Arima typically only acted on orders from V or the Washiyu clan. He'd only go after Shachi if the Washiyus commanded it, and in that case, Shachi would certainly be killed, not captured. So that scenario was unlikely. In truth, the reason the CCG had mobilized heavily in Ward 6 was because of Rise's uncontrolled feeding. Also, from now on I'll be living here with you. I'll move my things over tomorrow. Rise suddenly changed the subject. As for asking Byakuya's permission, that wasn't happening. She did whatever she wanted. Not that Byakuya would refuse anyway. But thinking about it, these basically meant they'd be living together, didn't it? That works. It'll be much easier to stay in contact. Byakuya nodded. Just remember, a deal's a deal. Don't forget what you promised me. I'm still looking forward to the day I get to enjoy you. Rise made sure to emphasize this. Byakuya found himself somewhere between amused and exasperated. Don't worry. I'll keep every promise I made. Until then, don't let any other ghoul get to you first. Only I get to enjoy you. With those words, Rise leaned in and bit lightly on Byakuya's collarbone, leaving a faint mark. 48, Chapter 48. I like Byakuya the most. Day 3 of the internship. Since Byakuya had nothing to do that morning, he accompanied Rise back to her place to pack her things. Since Rise was moving in with him now, everything she needed had to be brought over. Byakuya and Rise showed up early to speak with the landlord. Kamishiro-san is moving out so suddenly. The landlord was an elderly woman. Hearing that Kamishiro-san was leaving, she seemed quite reluctant to see her go. After all, Kamishiro-san was always so gentle and polite. Both she and her granddaughter were very fond of her. Kamishiro-ni-san is moving away. The landlord's granddaughter was a young girl with braided hair, probably around 10 years old. The moment she heard Kamishiro-ni-san was leaving, she came running out of her room. Yes, because I'm going to live with my boyfriend now. Rise smiled apologetically. At the word boyfriend, the granddaughter's attention immediately shifted. Boyfriend? Kamishiro-ni-san already has a boyfriend. The little girl's eyes lit up with curiosity. She immediately looked at Byakuya standing beside Rise. Is it this big brother? That's right. Rise nodded with a smile. Oh. The girl examined Byakuya with great interest. At her age, she was naturally curious about anything involving romance. Byakuya smiled somewhat awkwardly but didn't confirm or deny it. As long as Rise was happy. After completing the checkout procedures with the landlord, Byakuya and Rise went to pack. Once everything was ready, they each pulled a suitcase plus some other belongings and headed to Byakuya's place. So you're going to the internship this afternoon, right? After lunch, Byakuya and Rise sat on the couch watching TV together. Rise asked about the internship. Yeah, today's the last day. After this, I should officially be a full investigator. Byakuya nodded. It's actually kind of interesting that you'll be a CCG investigator. You can gather all sorts of intel on the inside. Rise said. Too bad I'm too conspicuous. Otherwise, I'd like to check out the CCG myself. With her Washiyu bloodline, entering the CCG would be trivially easy. The RC detection gates couldn't pick her up. The problem was that if she left any trace at the CCG, the Washiyu clan could easily track her down. Although Rise had been designated S-rated by the CCG and given the codename Binge Eater, they didn't know what she actually looked like. If the Washiyus knew that Rise was the Binge Eater, they'd have come for her long ago. Better not. The Washiyus would find you immediately. Byakuya agreed. Shortly after, Byakuya finished his nap and prepared to head out. As he was changing his shoes at the entrance, Rise walked over. What's the phrase for this situation again? Be careful out there, darling. Rise said. Byakuya felt a sudden wave of emotion. From an ordinary person's perspective, he and Rise were like an old married couple. Especially with that gentle, sweet smile on Rise's face, she looked every bit the devoted wife. But the reality was, obviously, Rise was just doing this because she found it amusing using him for entertainment. On the subway, Byakuya unsurprisingly ran into Kurona and Nashiro again. This time, both sisters were acting a bit odd. They sat with him but kept noticeably more distance than usual, probably still self-conscious about yesterday. At first, neither Byakuya nor the sisters spoke. Then Kurona suddenly broke the silence. About yesterday, please just forget it happened. Sure, sure. Byakuya replied casually. He hadn't planned to bring it up anyway. Surprisingly, Kurona had mentioned it first. But once Kurona broke the awkward atmosphere, their conversation returned to normal. Today's the last day of the internship. I can only congratulate you in advance. Though somewhat reluctant, Kurona had to acknowledge reality. Given Byakuya's performance over the past 2 days, his victory was already assured. Nothing that happened today would change the outcome. But serious lightn't stress too much about rankings. Just passing safely is what matters. Don't overdo it like the day before yesterday. Byakuya advised both Kurona and Nashiro. He'd said something similar yesterday, but they'd both been asleep and probably hadn't heard. I definitely won't make that mistake again. Kurona nodded seriously. Once everyone gathered at the Ward 24 entrance, they proceeded inside for the final day of training. Ding! Host defeated a B-rated Ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. Ding! Host defeated a B-rated Ghoul. Reward, 5 fusion points. The day's internship proceeded without incident. Byakuya performed excellently as always. In Kori Ui's eyes, he'd passed with a nearly flawless showing. After the internship came the evaluation. Naturally, the Squad 0 members scored each in turn, having observed their entire performance throughout. The final score was the average of all Squad 0 members' ratings, on a scale of 1 to 10. Kori Ui and Shio Ihei had obviously given Byakuya perfect 10s. His final averaged score, 9.6. Byakuya didn't particularly care about the number as long as he could officially join the CCG. Suzuya scored 9.2, actually quite high. Breaking 9 wasn't easy. Kurona had points deducted for her lapse on day 1, landing at somewhere in the 8s. Nashiro scored exactly 9.0. If Kurona hadn't made that first day mistake, she'd probably have matched Nashiro. The other 2 male trainees scored around 6 and 7. But since 6 was the passing threshold, their scores weren't bad. At minimum, they could handle driving off ghouls. Other ordinary trainees might easily fail against B-rated ghouls. As long as you could handle ghoul suppression, you qualified as an investigator. Congratulations on passing your internship evaluations. Would you prefer to head home first, or come with us to main office in Ward 1? Kori Ui addressed the group. I'll go directly to Ward 1. Byakuya didn't hesitate. But he was the only one. Kurona and Nashiro apparently had something to take care of at home first. Suzuya knew that even with his 9.2 score, he'd only start as a rank 3 investigator not qualified to work at main office in Ward 1. That was simply how the institute's regulations worked. The other 2 male trainees wanted to return to the academy first. Going to main office alongside Byakuya felt like too much pressure. Alright, looks like it's just you. Let's go then. Kori Ui said. Byakuya departed with Squad 0 for CCG main office in Ward 1. On the subway, he chatted idly with Shio Ihei. After exiting at the Ward 1 station, they soon arrived at main office. Since Byakuya had come ahead of the others, the CCG processed his paperwork first. He received his rank 2 investigator title along with official ownership and usage rights for the Hiriko 176th. In other words, the Quinqua dagger only truly belonged to him now. Of course, it was just a stopgap. Byakuya had eliminated quite a few ghouls in Ward 24 all B-rated, but enough to earn him a brand new Quinqua that he could name himself. Paperwork complete and commendation received, Byakuya was now officially a rank 2 investigator. He collected his credentials and other materials, then headed home. Since the internship had just ended, the CCG was considerate enough to give him a few days off. During this time, they'd also assign him a partner, someone ranked between first class and special class. The Sentakatsuki fan meet and greet happened to fall during this break. Byakuya hadn't forgotten his arrangement with Kaneki. However, Rise insisted on coming along, which complicated things slightly. He decided not to worry about it for now and headed to Antioch to meet Kaneki. Rise accompanied him, of course. Seeing Emma-Hassan arrive with this young woman, Kaneki didn't react too strongly. He'd anticipated this might happen. This might be rude to ask, but is this Emma-Hassan's girlfriend? Kaneki asked, looking somewhat awkward. This put Byakuya in a difficult spot. Should he confirm or deny? His relationship with Rise had always been ambiguous. Technically, they weren't a couple, but everyone except the 2 of them probably assumed they were. Before Byakuya could answer, Rise spoke up for him. That's right. I like Byakuya the most. I thought so. I understand now. Kaneki actually seemed relieved. As a result, when they headed to the fan meet together, there was no awkwardness at all. At the venue, just as Byakuya was about to enter the hall, he noticed a petite young woman walking briskly past him. She suddenly stopped and turned to look at him. Hello. The cute girl smiling and waving at Byakuya was none other than Ito Yoshimura, or rather, Sentakatsuki-sensei. 49, Chapter 49, The Sentakatsuki Meet and Greet. After all, this was Sentakatsuki's fan meet and greet. Running into Takatsuki here was perfectly normal. What Byakuya hadn't expected was for Ito to approach him first. Byakuya gave her a slight nod in acknowledgement. Kaneki had never seen Takatsuki before, so he had no idea the cute young woman standing before Byakuya was actually Takatsuki-sensei. Of course, she only looked like a cute young girl. She was actually 24. Ito didn't say much more to Byakuya. After a simple greeting, she headed inside to meet her fans. Was that girl just now a friend of yours? Or a classmate? Rise asked. Neither friend nor classmate. She's actually Takatsuki-sensei. I happened to run into her once before. Byakuya explained. Really? That's Sen Takatsuki. Rise was genuinely surprised. The reality was too different from what she'd imagined. She'd assumed that someone who could write such works would be a worldly, experienced man or woman. She hadn't expected someone so petite and young-looking. Huh, Amaha-san, you're saying that was Takatsuki-sensei just now. Kaneki was even more shocked. Yeah, you'll see her again inside in a moment. Byakuya nodded. Soon enough, Kaneki spotted Takatsuki sitting inside meeting fans, the same girl who'd greeted Amaha-san. The line was quite long. They'd have to queue up to meet Takatsuki, standard procedure for fan events. While waiting, visitors could browse the books displayed around the venue, all Takatsuki's works. When Kaneki's turn came, he discussed his impressions of her works with Ito. Beyond that, he was too shy to chat much with a girl he'd just met. After Kaneki, it was Byakuya and Rise's turn. They sat down together before Ito. We meet again, young man. Ito smiled at Byakuya. Today she wore her hair long and loose. The slightly disheveled style seemed natural, probably because she'd been running late and had rushed over without properly styling it. Yeah, we meet again. Byakuya replied casually. And you brought such a beautiful girl with you today. Ito's tone was teasing. Honestly, she'd been somewhat surprised when she'd spotted Byakuya earlier, surprised to see him and Rise together here. She still remembered that day when this human boy had confessed to Rise. She'd assumed he was as good as dead. The subsequent developments had exceeded all her expectations. You flatter me. Takatsuki-sensei is beautiful too. Rise smiled pleasantly. Both Rise and Ito wore pleasant smiles, the atmosphere seemingly warm and friendly. Rise didn't know Ito's true identity. Ito, however, knew exactly who Rise was. By the way, what are your names? Ito asked Byakuya and Rise. Amaha Byakuya. Kamishiro Rise. They answered. Not that Ito didn't already know their names. Alright, I'll remember that. Ito said. So, would you like an autograph? Or is there something else you'd like? Just sign my book, please. Byakuya produced a book he'd brought along. Ito signed her pen name on the cover, Sen Takatsuki. Afterward, Byakuya and Rise chatted with Ito about her works before standing to leave. As they departed, Ito rested her chin on her hand, watching the pair with an intrigued gaze. She'd noticed that Byakuya and Rise seemed to have a good relationship. By all rights, Rise should have devoured this human boy long ago. Yet not only hadn't they actually seemed close now. What exactly had happened between them? She couldn't help but be curious. Then it was time to meet the next fan. After leaving the venue, Kaneki headed straight home. So he parted ways with Byakuya and Rise along the way. Kaneki was in excellent spirits today. He'd gotten Takatsuki-sensei's autograph and discussed his thoughts on her works with her. Sen Takatsuki is really different from what I imagined. On the way back, Rise brought up Takatsuki. That's normal. By the way, did you notice anything unusual about her? Byakuya asked. No, why do you say that? Unless she's... Rise caught on quickly. For Byakuya to phrase it that way, something was probably off about Takatsuki. She's actually a ghoul. Byakuya said directly. A ghoul. I see. I completely missed it. Rise was somewhat surprised. This was because Ito was a natural-born half-ghoul. Her scent was far harder to detect than a normal ghoul's. Plus, Rise hadn't gotten very close to Ito just now. Even with her keen sense of smell, she couldn't pick up anything unusual. It's probably because she's lived among humans for so long that her scent has mixed with theirs. Byakuya wasn't ready to tell Rise about Ito's true identity yet. After all, he had no legitimate way of knowing Ito was a natural-born half-ghoul. Who would have thought such a famous author is actually a ghoul? Rise mused. But now she could better understand how Takatsuki could write such works. It probably had everything to do with her past experiences. Most ghouls didn't have happy childhoods. It was as if being born a ghoul in this world was itself a mistake. In truth, Ito's tragic past was worse than most ghouls could imagine. 50, Chapter 50, Yoriko gathers intel. Ward 20, Antioku. It was the weekend, and Yoriko Kosaka had come specifically to the CAF where Tuka worked. Tuka, I'll have a regular coffee please. Extra sugar, remember. Yoriko chose a seat roughly in the middle of the shop. Yoriko, what brings you here so suddenly? Tuka seemed surprised. I suddenly wanted to see you, Tuka. Yoriko said with a smile. In truth, she'd deliberately come on a weekend hoping to catch that guy Tuka supposedly liked. Of course, this was only what she believed Tuka felt. She figured that since the guy looked like a student, there was a decent chance of running into him on a weekend. Tuka smiled warmly. This coffee's on me then. She genuinely thought Yoriko had come just to see her, not realizing. Sure enough, Yoriko spotted Byakuya that day. Byakuya had arranged to read books with Kaneki today. As for Rise, she was at home leisurely browsing fashion magazines. Spotting Kaneki, Byakuya took a seat at his table. Amaha-san, have you read Takatsuki-sensei's short story collection? Kaneki seemed eager to recommend more works. Not yet. Byakuya said. You should try this one. It's closely connected to her novel The Black Goat's Egg. Kaneki handed his copy of the short story collection to Byakuya. Sure. Takatsuki-sensei's works are always worth reading. Byakuya nodded. Yoriko had wanted to approach the guy immediately, but noticed he seemed busy with something. Not wanting to interrupt, she decided to wait. And wait she did for 3 or 4 hours. Sitting there just drinking coffee was boring, so she chatted with Tuka whenever Tuka wasn't busy. See you, Ama-Hassan. See you. Finally, Kaneki packed up and left. Only Byakuya remained at the table. He was actually about to leave too. But then he noticed someone approaching Yoriko. From what he remembered, she was Tuka's very close friend. She'd even remained close to Tuka after learning Tuka's true identity as a ghoul, never distancing herself or showing fear. Their friendship stayed strong. However, Byakuya had never interacted with Yoriko. Why was she coming over? Hello. Yoriko confidently sat down across from Byakuya, showing no shyness at all about initiating conversation with a guy. Hello. And you are? Byakuya asked, puzzled. I'm Tuka's classmate. You know Tuka, right? Yoriko smiled as she asked. Tuka. Sorry, I don't know who you mean. Byakuya shook his head slightly. Tuka had never actually told him her name. They simply weren't close enough yet naturally, he couldn't act like he knew her. Huh. Yoriko was surprised. This guy didn't even know Tuka's name. That very cute waitress over there. I thought you two knew each other. Yoriko spoke quietly to Byakuya, emphasizing very cute with extra weight. Meanwhile, Tuka had noticed Yoriko move to Byakuya's table. She couldn't help but pay attention now. Her gaze kept drifting toward Yoriko's direction, wondering what on earth Yoriko was saying to that guy. She was afraid Yoriko might say something strange. Then Tuka noticed Yoriko glance back at her and Byakuya's gaze briefly followed. Her worry intensified. Yoriko was clearly discussing her with that human boy. Only now did Tuka realize this was why Yoriko had suddenly shown up at the CAF. I've exchanged a few words with her, but we're not close. Is there something you need? Byakuya said. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Kosaka Yoriko. Nice to meet you. Yoriko smiled. I'm Amaha Byakuya. Nice to meet you too. Byakuya replied. This might be forward of me, but do you currently have a girlfriend? This was the question Yoriko most wanted to ask. No. Byakuya answered honestly. Just then, Tuka couldn't take it anymore. She immediately came over to intervene. Wearing a strained smile, she said, Yoriko, come with me for a moment. Yoriko sensed Tuka might be a little angry, so she stopped. As Yoriko was led away by Tuka, Byakuya remained somewhat confused, unsure why Yoriko had asked him such a question. Yoriko clearly hadn't shown any signs of liking him. It was more like she was gathering information for someone else, even asking whether he had a girlfriend. So who was she gathering information for? It seemed like Tuka, but that didn't make sense either. He and Tuka had barely interacted. Whatever. Byakuya decided not to overthink it. Since there was nothing else to do, it was about time to head home. He finished his last sip of coffee and left. Tuka, listen, that guy doesn't have a girlfriend. Yoriko informed Tuka. Also, his name is Amaha Byakuya. Don't tell me you didn't even know his name. Whether he has a girlfriend has nothing to do with me. I told you VE got it wrong. Tuka felt a headache coming on. No matter how she explained, it seemed useless. Okay, I got it wrong. Yoriko conceded. But she clearly still didn't believe Tuka. She'd confirmed that Byakuya and that beautiful girl from before weren't actually a couple, and she'd passed this information to Tuka. That was enough for her. I've finished my coffee anyway, so I'll head home now. Bye, Tuka. With that, Yoriko cheerfully left Antioku. Bye. Tuka watched Yoriko's departing figure with an exasperated look, sighing softly. Hopefully that guy didn't read too much into it. Oh right, his name is Amaha Byakuya.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.